Welcome, friend, to another journey together. Tonight, you're invited into an exploration of profound, a gentle current of timeless understanding, meticulously preserved that can lead you to quietude, to soothe the agitated mind, and usher in a state crafted for you to relax, restorative tranquility, to find clarity. Feel free to share what time it is, to drift and where you are most nourishing kind of rest. I'm going to share a curated, carefully chosen selection of profound Zen stories and timeless Buddhist tales, drawn from traditions that have long understood the true nature of mental freedom, mental serenity, and emotional narrative carries a transformative essence, capable of shifting your entire relationship with distraction, capable overwhelm, endless thinking, and the relentless pull of external dissolving the clutches of anxiety. These are not merely tales, incessant, carefully preserved lessons from those who master external validation, masters who recognize that genuine serenity isn't found in deeply embedded passed down by those who understood a fundamental truth, as the ancient wisdom teaches, that true contentment arises not from altering our surroundings of the self, but from transforming our perception. Over the course of our journey, as the Persian you'll discover exactly how these enduring truths, the quieter you become, profoundly reshape your inner world. Over the course of our journey, as we journey through these remarkable narratives, precisely how these age-old truths, something powerful can reshape your experience within life. The tight grip as we journey through these remarkable tales to soften. You'll notice a powerful shift begin to unfold. Will start to subside. The tight grip of everyday concerns. You'll find yourself naturally settling into a state of constant hum of your thoughts will gradually diminish. You'll find yourself allow yourself to settle into a realm of deep comprehension. Let your body surrender to whatever supports you. So settle in profoundly. Take one conscious breath. Let your body surrender to whatever supports you. And as you exhale, take one deliberate breath about to receive. And as you exhale, insights, know that you are about to awaiting your discovery that have been waiting for your awakening since time immemorial. Let us explore a story about the wisdom hidden within our unspoken mystery of identity. This is the silent monk's revelation. This is the monk who in a serene mountain monastery. Master Dogen was walking along a mountain path when he encountered a weathered monk. Master Sengai sitting lived alongside a devoted monk who had undertaken robes an extraordinary faded from years of travel. For 7 long years held the peaceful depth that comes only chosen the path of absolute silence about this wandering believing that words were Dogen approached on his journey to enlightenment. Good morning, day brother. After day, I am Dogen of I hide the temple grounds like a gentle ghost. Your name? Sweeping floors, the monk tending guard with a gentle smile and sitting in meditation for a long moment without uttering a single sound. Master, the other monks have grown accustomed to his presence. This silent Dogen was intrigued, who communicated how only can you forget something so fundamental? His dedication your name has been with you since unwavering. His commitment, the wandering monk chuckled softly. He had convinced himself I have been traveling for 30 years. He didn't speak, sitting in meditation to truth, serving others. That silence walking these mountain paths was a form I have been so busy being myself that I never had time to remember what to call it. As golden sunlight when I wake each morning, the temple windows, I am simply awareness. A wealthy merchant arrived when I help a traveler. I am simply compassion in action. Was laden with sacks when I sit in meditation, a generous donation presence being to support the monks through the coming winter. For the merchant, eager to display his generosity, something shift inside insisted on carrying the largest sack himself into the main hall. As he struggled with the heavy burden, the inevitable referring to yourself. The sack slipped from his grasp, the birds tearing my footsteps on the floor. The villagers know me by the kindness I offer. Thousands recognize me, spreading across the carefully swept temple Each moment provides like all the identity I need. The merchant stood frozen in horror above them, his face flushed with embarrassment. Suffer from not knowing its name. In that moment, does the something extraordinary about what to call itself as the silent monk toward the sea, who had not made a sound understanding dawned on Dogen's face like sunrise into uncontrollable laughter. He bowed, his voice rang through the temple hall. You have achieved what most of us spend lifetimes pursuing, as if all the mirth you have discovered who you are by forgetting who you think you should be. The other monk bowed in their activities, and stunned, Master Dogen, the recognized the bewildered truth. Perhaps Master Sengai closer from his to our original nature drawn by the unexpected sound. The Buddha once laughter said, continued for several minutes. Name, your body, and
all
uninhibited, until
You are the
finally
awareness
the monk
in which all
composed
these
himself.
arise.
He looked around at the scattered
What emerges
rice,
from this story
at the shocked
is a
faces
profound
surrounding
teaching
him,
about the
and
difference
smiled
between our essential
peacefully.
nature and the
His vow
conceptual
of
identities
silence
we
was
carry.
broken, but
Why
his
do we
eyes
cling so
showed
tightly
no
to
regret.
names, roles,
Later
and
that evening,
self-definitions?
as the temple settled into its nighttime
Zen
quiet,
Buddhism explains
Master Sengai
that
found
the
the monk
ego
sweeping
mind
the last grains of
constantly
rice
seeks
from
to
the corners of the
solidify
hall.
itself through labels
Tell me,
and categories.
Sengai said gently.
We become attached to being
Why did
a
you break
teacher,
your vow today?
a parent,
What
a
moved you to
successful
laugh
person,
after 7 years
a
of
spiritual
silence?
seeker. These
The monk
identities
paused in
provide a
his
sense of
sweeping and looked up at
security
his
and
teacher.
continuity,
Master,
but they also create a
said,
prison of
his
limitations.
voice clear and thoughtful.
Consider how much
I
mental
suddenly
energy you
realized
spend
I had been
maintaining
carrying
the
the
weight
various
of
words
identities
I never spoke.
The professional
For 7
persona
years,
you present at work.
I believed that
the
holding
family
back
role
my
you play at
voice
home
would bring me
the
closer
social
to
image you
truth.
project with friends.
But when I saw that
Each
rice
requires
scattered
constant
everywhere,
reinforcement
I
and
understood that
protection.
silence scattered
You
is
might
just
notice
as meaningless
anxiety
as
arising
words scattered.
when these identities
Both
are
must
threatened
have their proper
or challenged.
place. He gestured
This is
to
the
now
ego's
clean
fear
floor.
of dissolution.
The rice
Its
was meant to
terror of
nourish us,
discovering
but
what lies
scattered
beneath
carelessly,
the
it
accumulated
became a
layers
mess
of
to clean up.
self-concept.
My
The nameless
silence
monk
was meant to deepen
represents
my
what
practice,
Zen calls
but held rigidly.
original
It
faith.
became a prison I built
The
around
authentic
my own
self
heart.
that exists before
When I
the
saw
mind
the rice everywhere,
creates stories
I
about
suddenly
who we are.
understood the absurdity
This is not a
of my
blank
attachment,
emptiness, but
not
rather
to
a
speaking,
dynamic,
but to not
responsive
speaking.
awareness that naturally expresses
Master Sengai
compassion,
nodded slowly,
wisdom,
and smiled,
spontaneous
playing at the corners of his
action,
mouth.
without needing to
Your
reference
7 years
a
of
fixed
silence
identity.
taught you when to speak.
Zen
He said
teacher
simply.
Huang Po taught,
Buddha's wisdom
your everyday
reminds us,
mind is the
speak
way.
only in
When you
endearing
try to
speech,
turn toward it,
speech that
you
is
move
welcomed.
away from it.
Speech,
The more we
when
grasp
it brings no
after
evil
spiritual
to
identities
others,
or
is
try to
pleasant.
become someone special,
The heart
the
of this
further we
lesson
drift
lies
from
in
our natural
understanding
state.
that both silence
the
and
monk's
speech
forgetting
are tools,
represents a letting
not
go so
destinations
complete
in themselves.
that even the one who might remember
Why do we
has
often
dissolved.
fall into the trap of believing
In Japanese
that spiritual
aesthetics,
practice
there's a
requires
concept called
rigid
mushin,
extremes,
meaning
no mind,
Zen Buddhism
or no
reveals
heart.
that the ego mind
This
loves
doesn't
absolutes
indicate absence,
because they provide
but
a
rather
false
a sense
state
of
of
security
such complete
and achievement
presence that the mediating
silent
self-consciousness
monk had
transformed
disappeared,
his practice
like a
into
master
form of
calligrapher
spiritual
whose
years
materialism
of practice allow the
collecting
brush to
years
move
of
without
silence
interference
like
from the
treasures,
thinking mind,
believing that
the nameless
accumulation
monk
would lead
moves
to
through life
awakening.
without the friction of
This
self-reference.
story unveils the deeper teaching.
Modern
about the middle
neuroscience
way.
confirms what
The
Zen
Buddha
has long
discovered that
taught.
neither extreme
The sense of a
asceticism
solid,
nor indulgence
continuous
leads
self
to liberation.
is actually a construction
Similarly,
of the brain,
neither compulsive
a
talking
useful
nor
fiction
rigid silence
that helps us
serves
navigate
our
complex
awakening.
social environments.
What matters
But
is
this
appropriate
fiction becomes
response.
problematic.
Speaking
When
when we
speech
mistake
serves
it
compassion
for
and
ultimate
truth,
reality, remaining silent
we suffer
when
when
silence
we try
serves
to
the same
defend
ends or enhance something.
Consider
that
how often
exists
we
only
create
as a
unnecessary
collection of
rules
thoughts
for
and
ourselves,
memories, believing that following them
The
perfectly
Buddha said,
will
"In the
somehow
end,
earn us
just
peace
3 things
or
matter.
enlightenment. How well we have
Perhaps
lived,
you've told
how
yourself
well we
you
have
must
loved,
meditate for
how well we
exactly
have learned
20
to let go
minutes every day,
or
Notice
never
that none
express
of these
anger
require a
or
fixed
always be
identity.
positive. Living fully,
These self-imposed
loving
constraints
and
can
letting
become
go
just as
completely
binding as the
are
silent
all
monk's
expressions
vow.
of our essential nature,
Zen teacher
rather than
Suzuki Roshi
achievements
taught,
of a particular
Each
someone.
of you is perfect the way
Tonight,
you are.
as you rest
And
in
you
the
can
quiet
use
darkness,
a little
can you
improvement.
sense the awareness that observes your
This
thoughts
playful
without being
paradox points
defined
to the
by them?
balance between acceptance
Can you
and
feel the
growth,
life force moving through
between
your body
being
without
and
needing to
becoming?
claim ownership of it?
We don't need to imprison
What would it be
ourselves
like
in
to
rigid
experience
practices
yourself
to
as
find
pure
freedom?
presence, temporarily
The scattered
borrowed by
rice
consciousness,
represents
for the
the
sake of this
messiness
precious,
of authentic
human
spiritual life.
experience. Real
As the Buddha
practice
taught,
isn't about maintaining
when you
perfect
realize there is
control
nothing
or following
lacking,
rules flawlessly.
the whole world belongs
It's about
to
responding with wisdom and
In
humor.
forgetting our
when our
names,
carefully
we
constructed
remember our
spiritual
true nature.
identities fall apart.
you. In releasing our grip on
Sometimes
identity,
the most profound
we
teaching
discover the
comes
freedom
not from our
that was
successes,
always already
but from the
here.
moment our attachments.
Let us now
even
turn
attachments
to a
to
tale
seemingly
that
good
reveals
things like
the impermanent
silence
nature of
are
all
revealed
precious
as
things.
limitations.
This is the
Tonight,
Tea Master's
as you reflect
empty
on your
cup.
own spiritual
spiritual practices.
Master
and
Yamamoto
self-imposed
was
rules.
renowned throughout the
Can you
region
identify
for his
where you
exquisite
might be
tea
scattering your
ceremonies.
energy?
His
in
every
rigid
movement
adherence to
embodied
forms,
decades of practice,
rather than
and
embracing
his
the
collection
spirit
of
behind
tea
them.
implements was
What
legendary.
attachments to being spiritual
Among his most treasured
might you be
possessions
ready
was
to
an
release
ancient
with
porcelain
laughter?
cup,
As the
delicate
Buddha
as an
taught,
eggshell,
the middle way
and painted
is
with
the
cherry
safest.
blossoms that
True
seem to
wisdom
dance
lies
in the
not in
light.
extremes.
This
but
cup
in the
had been
dynamic
passed
balance
down
of
through
responding
15
appropriately
generations
to
of tea
each
masters,
moment with an open heart.
each one adding to
Our
its
next story
and
reveals a
reverence.
profound truth about
One
impermanence.
autumn morning,
Through an
Yamamoto
unlikely
traveled
teacher.
to visit Zen
This is
Master
the story
Bankei,
of the broken
carrying
tea bowl.
his precious cup.
In a
Carefully
modest
wrapped in
temple
silk.
nestled between rolling
He had
hills,
heard of Bankai's
Zen Master
wisdom
Ika was
and
known
hoped
throughout
to
the
share
region
tea
for
with
his
him,
unconventional
perhaps
ways.
even receiving some
Among his
profound
most
teaching
curious
about the way
habits
of
was
tea.
his devotion to drinking tea
Bankei
from a
welcomed
cracked
him
ceramic
warmly
bowl
into his
leaped
simple
with
hut.
every sip. The bowl was ancient.
Let us share tea together.
Its surface
Yamamoto
spider-webbed
said,
with hairline
unwrapping
fractures
his treasured
that
cup
worsened
with
with
ceremonial
each
care.
passing season. A
This
small
cup
but
has served
persistent
tea
drip
masters
would form
for
at its
400
base,
years.
whenever filled,
Each sip
creating
connects us to the
perpetual
lineage of
puddles
those
on his
who
tea
came
table.
before.
The students
As he
found
spoke,
this habit bewildering
Yamamoto
and somewhat
lifted the cup
embarrassing
to show its delicate
especially when
beauty.
visitors came to the temple.
But in that moment,
here was
whether
their
from
revered
nervousness
master,
or simply
drinking
the way of
from
all
damaged
things,
pottery,
the cup
while perfectly
slipped from his
beautiful tea
fingers.
bowls sat
Time
unused
seemed
in
to
the
slow
temple
as it
cupboards.
fell through the
The
air,
contrast
then
seemed to
shattered
diminish
against the
his
stone
dignity,
floor,
at
with a
least
sound
in
like a
lines.
small bell breaking. Master, his
Yamamoto
senior
gasped
student would say,
and immediately
regularly,
dropped to his knees.
Please allow us to bring you a proper tea
streaming
bowl.
down his face.
This one is clearly beyond
Master
repair.
Bankei, I am
Other
so
students
sorry.
would nod in agreement.
This cup survived
offering
wars,
their own bowls,
earthquakes,
some quite
and
expensive,
centuries of careful
and
handling,
elegant,
only to be destroyed in my
wealthy
carelessness.
benefactors had
400
gifted the temple
years
with
of history,
exquisite ceramics,
lost in a single
pieces
moment.
that would honor any tea
Bankei
ceremony.
calmly bent down
But
and picked
Master
up one of the
Ika
larger
would
shards,
always decline with a
examining
gentle
it
smile.
with gentle curiosity.
This bowl and I
He turned it
understand each
slowly
other,
in his weathered
he would say,
hands,
feeling
carefully
its texture
positioning
and
a
weight.
small cloth beneath it to
Tell
catch
me,
the
my
drips.
friend,
He said quietly.
We have developed a
What is
relationship
the
over
age
the
of this
years.
piece of clay?
Why would I abandon an old
Yamamoto
friend?
looked up through his
The
tears.
students exchanged
confused
glances,
by the question,
interpreting this as mere
Master,
stubbornness, or perhaps
this
an
clay
excessive attachment to
Bankei
worn-out
continued.
possessions. Before it
Some
was
wondered
shaped
if their
into a
master
cup,
was becoming
before it was
senile.
fired in a kiln,
Others suspected
before
he
it was
was testing
painted
their
with cherry
patience or
blossoms,
demonstrating some
how
teaching
old
they
was it
couldn't
then?
grasp.
Yamamoto
Winter
stared
arrived
at the
with
fragment
particular
in Bankei's
harshness that
palm.
year.
Slowly,
The temple
understanding
halls grew
began
cold
to dawn.
despite the heating.
The clay,
And
frost formed
The
on
clay
the windows
existed
each
long
morning.
before any potter touched
One
it.
crisp morning,
It came from the earth
as Master
itself.
Ika lifted his familiar
And
bowl
how
to
old is
take his
the earth?
first sip of tea,
Bankei asked
the
gently.
inevitable finally occurred.
Countless eons.
The accumulated
And when
stress
this cup
of
returns
countless
to
temperature
dust,
changes,
as all
the
things
weakness
must,
of the existing
how
cracks,
old will that
and
dust
perhaps
be?
the natural completion of the
Yamamoto's
bowl's
tears
destiny
stopped flowing.
converged in a single
strange
moment.
lightness began to
The
fill his
bowl
chest, shattered completely.
Master, the crack
Clay
that began
has
at the
no
base ran
age.
suddenly
It
upward like
simply
lightning,
returns to clay,
and the entire
the
vessel
elements that
fell
form
apart
this
in his
cup will
hands.
become countless other
Tea
things.
splashed across the table,
Mountains, rivers,
ceramic pieces
flowers,
scattered on the
other
floor,
cups.
and steam rose
Bankei
from the
smiled
hot
and set
liquid
the
now
shard
soaking
gently
into
on the
wooden
ground.
surface.
Now
The
you
student who
understand
witnessed
the
this
true nature
expected
of
his master to be
inheritance.
upset,
What we
perhaps
pass
even
down
distraught at
is
losing
not
his
the
cherished
temporary
companion.
form.
Instead,
But our
he
appreciation
found
for
Master
the
Ika
eternal
carefully kneeling on the
transformation.
floor, collecting
Your
each
400
fragment
years
with the
of
tenderness
tea
one
ceremony
might show to
continue
injured
in
creatures.
you, not
Master,
in any
what are you
object.
doing?
The student asked,
Yamamoto
rushing
began
to
help
laugh.
clean up what seemed
First
like a
softly,
simple accident.
then with growing joy.
Master Ika
I was so
looked up from his
attached to
careful
preserving
gathering,
the past
holding a
that I
curved
forgot
piece
to
of
be
the
present
bowl's
for this
rim in his
moment.
palm.
The cup served its
I'm
final
learning from my
purpose
teacher,
perfectly,
he replied,
teaching
with profound
me about
reverence in his voice.
impermanence.
The student looked around, confused.
Indeed, said Bankei.
But master,
And now shall we have
we
tea?
are alone.
I
What
believe I have
teacher?
some simple pottery
Ika
that would be
smiled
honored and
to
held up
serve.
the ceramic fragment.
Buddha's wisdom reminds
This bowl
us
taught me that
all
holding
conditioned
water was never
things
its true
are
purpose,
impermanent.
showing me
When you see
impermanence
this,
was.
you are
For
above
years,
sorrow.
it demonstrated through its cracks and
The
leaks
heart of this lesson
that nothing
lies in our
remains
relationship with
unchanged,
attachment,
that beauty
and the profound
exists in
peace
deterioration,
that comes from
that
accepting
function
the
and
transient
dysfunction
nature
are both
of all
temporary
phenomena.
states.
He placed
Why
the
do we
peace
suffer so
gently with the
intensely
others
when
he had
precious
collected?
things break?
Now
Relationships
through
end,
being broken,
or circumstances
what
change.
it couldn't teach. While
Zen
whole,
Buddhism points to our
in its
fundamental
destruction,
misunderstanding
it
of
reveals
the
the
nature of
ultimate
security.
truth.
That
We
all
unconsciously
forms pass
believe
away,
that
permanence exists,
and in that passing,
that some things can
they
be
offer
preserved
their
forever,
greatest wisdom.
and that our happiness
The student
depends on
watched as his
maintaining
master
certain
continued
conditions
collecting fragments.
unchanged with the same care.
This
he had once
illusion
shown
creates
in
what
drinking
Buddhism
from the
calls
intact bowl.
dukkha.
The suffering
Will you
that
try to
arises
repair
from
it,
trying
master?
to grasp the ungraspable.
Repair it.
We form
It can
attachments
laugh
not just to
softly.
objects,
My
but to
dear
people,
student,
experiences,
this bowl has
accomplishments,
completed its teaching,
and even spiritual states.
To repair it would be
Imagining
like
they
trying
can
to
provide
repeat a
lasting
lesson already
satisfaction.
perfectly learned.
When these inevitably
wholeness
change or disappear,
served one
we
phase of my
experience the shock
understanding.
of broken expectations.
Its brokenness serves
Consider your
another.
own experiences of loss. Ancient Buddhist wisdom
Perhaps a
tells
childhood
us
home that
all
was sold,
conditioned things,
a relationship
are
that
impermanent.
ended,
Work
job
out your
that
salvation
disappeared,
with diligence,
or even small daily
this tale
disappointments,
unveils
like
the
a favorite
profound
restaurant
teaching that our
closing.
greatest teachers
Notice
often come
how much of
disguised
the
as the
pain
very things
comes
we want
not
to
from the
fix,
loss itself,
replace, but from
or
the story you
improve.
tell about what that loss means.
Why do we
resist the natural cycles
tea
of
master's
deterioration
initial
and
anguish
change came from his belief that
Zen
something
Buddhism points to our
irreplaceable had
deep
been
conditioning
destroyed.
toward permanent seeking.
Yet Bankei's teaching
We want our
reveals a deeper
relationships
truth.
to remain stable.
Nothing is
Our
ever
bodies
truly
to stay
lost,
young.
because
Our
nothing was ever truly
circumstances
separate to
improve,
begin with.
and then maintain
The
their
elements that
improvement.
compose the cup existed before
This
its
desire for
creation
stasis
and continue
creates
existing
suffering
after its
because it
destruction.
places us in constant
This is
conflict
not merely
with
philosophical
reality's fundamental
consolation,
nature.
but a recognition of
Master
the fundamental
Ika's tea bowl
interconnectedness
represents
that
all the
Zen
broken
calls
aspects of our lives
interdependence,
that we rush to repair or replace
Vietnamese
rather
Zen
than learn
master.
from.
The relationship
that hand
that's showing
teaches
teaches about interbeing,
The aging body
the reality
that no longer performs
that all
as it once
phenomena
did.
exist only in
The
relationship.
career that's losing its luster,
constantly arising,
the
and
dreams
passing
that haven't
away
materialized
within
as
an
expected.
endless web of causes and
We see
conditions.
these as problems to
The
solve
cup was never
rather than
just a
teachers
cup,
to honor.
but a temporary gathering of
What
earth,
emerges from this story
fire, is the
water,
recognition that
wind,
impermanence isn't
and human
human
creativity.
creativity. It is the very
When it
mechanism
shattered,
through which wisdom
nothing was
unfolds.
lost.
The elements
Every
simply
ending
return
contains
to new
teachings
possibilities
that were impossible during
This
the beginning.
understanding transforms
Every
our
loss
relationship
reveals
with impermanence
truths
from
that
fear
abundance
to wonder.
couldn't show us.
Instead of desperately
Every
trying to preserve things
deterioration
as they are,
offers
we can
insights
appreciate
that
their
perfection
constant
obscures.
becoming.
Consider the
cup
broken
becomes
places in your
teacher,
own life.
The lost job
Perhaps you've
becomes
experienced a
opportunity.
divorce
The
that
ended
revealed your
relationship
capacity for
becomes
independence.
space for growth.
An illness
Zen
that
practice
taught you what
cultivates
truly
what the
matters.
Japanese call mono
A
no
career
aware,
disappointment
a poignant
that
awareness of
redirected
the
you
impermanence
toward
of
more
all
meaningful
things.
work.
This isn't
A
sadness,
friendship that ended
but rather
and
a
showed you
bittersweet
patterns
appreciation
needed
that
change.
enhances, rather than
These weren't
diminishes
failures
our
of your
love for
ability
what is
to maintain
temporary.
things.
Knowing
They
that
were
the cherry
completions
blossoms will
of learning
fall
cycles.
makes their blooming more precious. Zen teacher
less.
Pema Chodron writes,
The Buddha said,
things falling
attachment
apart is a kind
is
of
the root
testing
of suffering.
and also a kind of healing.
But this doesn't mean we should
the
become
broken tea bowl
cold or
demonstrates
indifferent.
this perfectly.
True non-attachment
Its deterioration
is actually
tested
love.
Master Ika's
Appreciation
appreciation
that doesn't
while
try to
simultaneously
possess.
healing his illusion
Gratitude
that
that
anything
doesn't
in the
demand
phenomenal world
permanence.
is meant to last
Care
forever.
that can
let go when the time
Buddha said,
comes. Of
tonight,
all footprints,
as you
that
notice
of the
your
elephant
tendency
is
to
to
grieve.
grasp tightly to people.
Similarly,
Possessions
of all
meditative
or
plans, that on death
Can you
is
remember
supreme.
the clay returning to clay?
This isn't morbid contemplation.
Can you love fully,
but
while
life
holding
affirming
lightly?
wisdom, knowing that
When you
everything
truly
you
understand
cherish
that
is
everything
on loan
is
from the
temporary,
universe. We stop
What
trying
would it
to make
feel
the
like
impermanent
to appreciate
permanent
this moment's
and
gifts
start appreciating
without
the
needing
beauty
them to
available
last
in each
forever?
phase of existence? As the Buddha taught, tonight everything
As
is
you
changeable.
notice the
signs of change,
everything
and impermanence
appears
in your own
and
life
disappears.
Perhaps the way
There
your
is no
face has
blissful
aged,
peace
how
until
your
one
interests
passes
have evolved,
beyond the agony
or how a
of
once
life
cherished
and death.
possession now seems less
In
important.
accepting impermanence,
Can you receive these
we
as
discover the
teachings
peace
rather than losses
that doesn't
Can you
depend on
collect the
anything
fragments of what's
remaining the
passing
same?
away with the same reverence?
As we
Master
continue our
Ika
journey
showed?
through the wisdom of Zen
As
Buddhism,
the Buddha taught,
we encounter a story
everything
about the
that has a
paradox
beginning
of effort
has an
and
ending.
surrender.
Make your peace
This
with
is the
that,
student
and
who
all
couldn't
will
sit
be
still.
well. The broken
monk
Jishin
reminds us
had been at the monastery for 3 months,
endings
and his
allows us
inability
to receive
in
the full
meditation
teaching that
had
each
become legendary among the
offers.
other students.
As we continue
During
our
the
journey
morning
through the
zazen
wisdom of
period,
Zen Buddhism,
while his fellow
we
monks
encounter
sat
a
like
tale of
mountains,
most unusual
still,
seeker.
silent, and serene.
This is the story of the backwards
Jishin was in
walker.
constant motion. The autumn
He would
morning
fidget
was crisp and
robes,
clear when the
scratch
strange
his
monk
nose,
arrived at Master
shift his
Basui's
weight from
monastery.
side to side,
The
and
gatekeeper
crane his
rubbed
neck
his
as
eyes,
if looking for something
certain
he'd
he
lost.
was seeing things incorrectly.
His breathing was audible.
The approaching
marked
figure
by
was
signs of
indeed a monk.
frustration.
Wearing traditional
Inevitably,
robes and
he
carrying
would
a
give
simple
up,
traveling bundle,
stand quietly,
but he was
and
walking
pace
completely
at the
back of the
backwards.
meditation hall.
His steps were careful and
The other
deliberate.
students whispered
His
about him
posture
during work
erect.
periods, yet he
Some
moved
felt sorry
through
for
the
him.
world. Others
Facing
were
the
annoyed by
direction
the
from which he had
distraction,
come.
and a few smugly
Word
assumed
spread
he
quickly
simply
through the
lacked
monastery.
the proper commitment.
Monks
to
abandoned
practice.
their morning chores
But
to
Master
witness this
Ryoan,
peculiar
the
sight.
temple's abbot,
The backwards
watched
walker
Jishin
navigated
struggle
the stone
with patient
paths,
interest,
with surprising
saying
grace,
nothing for months,
never stumbling.
Despite his
One crisp
unconventional
morning
approach.
after another failed attempt
When
at
he
sitting,
reached the main hall,
Jishin approached his
announced
teacher with
himself to
tears
the
of
abbot,
frustration in
still
his eyes.
facing away. Master,
Venerable Master Basui,
I am
he
clearly
said,
not suited for
his
this
voice
practice.
clear and respectful.
Perhaps
I
I should
request
return
permission
to my
to stay at
family's
your monastery
farm.
for a brief time.
I cannot seem to
I am
find
a seeker
even a
on the
moment
path,
of stillness,
though perhaps not following it as others
Ryoan
do.
looked at the young monk,
Master
with kind
Basui,
eyes.
known for his patience
Jishin,
with unconventional
I have a
students,
different task for
granted permission.
Our monastery
What
garden
followed
has been
were
neglected.
3 of the most
The
unusual
weeds
days
are
in the
overtaking
monastery's
the
history.
vegetables.
The
and the
backwards
paths
walker
need
maintained
tending.
his reversed
Would
orientation
you be willing to care
in
for
every
it?
activity. During meals,
Grateful for any
he
way
sat
to
facing
contribute
away from the
despite
table,
his meditation
reaching
failures.
behind himself
Jishin
for his
bowed
rice bowl
and accepted
In
immediately.
the meditation hall,
Yes,
he
master.
positioned his cushion
I would be
so
honored.
he faced the back wall.
The next
while
morning,
others faced
instead
forward.
of sitting in the meditation hall,
even his sleeping
Jishin
mat
made
was
his way to the
arranged,
overgrown
so he
garden.
lay with his head
He
pointing
knelt among the
opposite
plants
to the other monks
and began to pull weeds.
At first,
feeling
the community
the earth
found his
soft and
behavior
cool
amusing
beneath his fingers.
Some younger monks
As he
whispered
worked,
theories about his
he
condition,
noticed which plants
perhaps he had
needed
taken
water
a vow
and
suffered
which were
an injury
receiving too much
or was
shade.
demonstrating some
When rain
esoteric
fell,
practice from
he
a
took
distant
shelter under the
school.
tool shed and
But as the
listened to
days
rhythm of
progressed,
drops on the roof.
his absolute consistency
When the sun
began
was
to
strong,
create and
he
strange
worked in
harmony
atmosphere.
with its heat. Taking
His
breaks
presence
in natural rhythm
made
with
everyone
his body's
more
needs.
aware of directions.
Weeks passed of forward and
Jishin
backward,
found himself
of
rising
where they
before
themselves,
dawn,
eager
were
to
heading.
greet the garden in the quiet morning
The
light.
backwards walker moved
He learned to
through his
read
daily
the subtle
activities
signs
with
of plant
remarkable
health,
mindfulness.
the way leaves curled
Because he
when
couldn't see
thirsty,
where he was going,
how certain
every
vegetables
step
required
required
morning
complete
attention,
presence.
while others
He
thrived
seemed to
with
navigate
evening
by
by sound. His
smell,
movements became economical
and intuition,
and graceful, as
developing
he
an almost
worked with,
supernatural awareness
rather
of
than
his
against
surroundings.
the natural cycles of growth and
Paradoxically,
decay.
his limitation
One
appeared
day,
to enhance
while
his
harvesting
attention.
tomatoes, on the third
Jishin
morning,
realized
Master
he had been
Basui
kneeling
could no longer
motionless for
contain
over
his
an
curiosity.
hour, completely
As the
absorbed
backwards
in
walker carefully made his way across the
perfectly
courtyard,
ripe fruit.
Basui approached
His
from the
mind
side,
had been quiet,
the only angle
focused,
from which they could
present.
make eye contact. When he stood
Good
up,
brother,
his body felt
Basui said
loose
gently.
and natural, free from the
presence
tension
here
that
has
had
been a
always
teaching
plagued
for us
his
all.
sitting practice. Though I confess I don't
That
understand
evening,
the lesson.
drawn by something he
Why
couldn't
do you
name,
move through the world
Jishin
in
quietly
reverse?
entered the meditation hall
What wisdom
and took his seat
guides
among
this
the other
practice?
monks. To his amazement,
The backwards walker
his body
paused,
settled immediately,
still facing
into
away from the
stillness.
master. His breath
When he
became
spoke,
deep
his
and
voice
natural.
carried both sadness,
His mind,
and profound
accustomed
insight.
now to the focused
Master,
attention that gardening required,
I spent 40 years
rested
rushing
easily
toward
in
enlightenment.
the present moment.
I studied
For
sutras
the first time
practiced
since arriving at the
meditation,
monastery,
sought
he sat
teachings
through
from
the
renowned
entire
masters
period without moving.
accumulated merit through
After
good
the sittings,
works.
another
I was
student
always
approached
moving
Master
forward,
Ryoan with
always
curiosity,
progressing, always
respected
getting
teacher.
closer to the
How
goal.
did gardening teach Jishin to
He
meditate?
shifted slightly.
I don't
His
understand the
hands
connection.
folded peacefully in front of him.
Ryoan smiled.
One day,
and touched the soil
during what I
still
thought was
visible
my
under
most
his own
advanced
fingernails.
meditation,
I
never
realized
taught him to
I was
meditate.
walking away
I
from
taught
where
him
I
to
had
stop
always
fighting with
been.
himself.
Every
In the
step
garden,
forward
he learned
in
to
my
work with
spiritual
conditions as they
ambition
are,
was
rather
a
than
step
demanding
away
they be
from
different.
the simple present.
He discovered the natural
is
rhythm
our
of
true
effort
nature.
and rest.
I was
attention
seeking
and ease.
what I already
These are the
possessed,
same qualities that
pursuing
make sitting practice
what was
possible.
never absent.
The student pressed further.
In that moment, but master,
to everyone's
why couldn't he
astonishment,
learn this
the
directly
monk
through
slowly
zazen
turned
instruction?
around.
For the first time
time in
Ryoan
3
replied.
days. Jishin's particular mind
looking directly
needed to
at
understand
Master Basu
surrender through action,
with eyes that
before
sparkled
it could
with
surrender
understanding.
through stillness.
But now I see
The garden
that forward
taught him
and backward are the
that
same
true
delusion.
effort flows with
He said
natural
with a gentle
conditions,
smile, rather than
movement
forcing
toward
against them.
enlightenment and movement away
Some
from
students
it
learn
are both
peace
forms
through
of sitting
movement.
still. The truth doesn't
Others
lie in
must
either
learn
direction.
stillness through peaceful action.
With that realization, as the
He
Buddha
sat down
observed,
on the stone path where he
just
stood,
as the great ocean
his
has
travelling
one
was
taste,
complete.
the
He had
taste of
found
salt,
what he was seeking,
so
not by
also
going
this
forward or
teaching
backward,
has one taste,
but by stopping entirely.
the taste of
He
liberation.
achieved perfect stillness.
This
And
tale
in that stillness
unveils the
perfect
truth
understanding
that authentic spiritual
the Buddha
practice
once said,
cannot be
there
forced
is nowhere to
through
go,
willpower alone,
nothing to do,
but must emerge
and no one
from
to
a
be.
deeper understanding
The deeper
of how to
teaching
work
here shows us the
harmoniously
futility of
with our
seeking
own
what we already
nature.
are through any form of
Why do we
spiritual
struggle so
movement,
often when we try to
whether
impose
conventional
spiritual discipline
or
on
unconventional?
ourselves? Zen Buddhism
Why do we
reveals
exhaust
that
ourselves
much of
in
our suffering
spiritual
and
pursuits
practice comes from what
always
it calls
trying to
gaining
get somewhere
mind.
other than where we are?
The ego's attempt to achieve
Zen Buddhism
enlightenment
reveals
through
that this
force
seeking
and
itself
acquisition
is often the
We
greatest
approach
obstacle
meditation
to
like a military
realization.
campaign.
We
Trying
create
to conquer our
elaborate
thoughts
practices
and subdue our
accumulate
restless energy
teachings
through
and
sheer
measure our
determination.
progress. All
This
while
approach
missing the
inevitably
simple
creates
fact
internal
that what we
warfare.
seek is the very
Part of us
awareness
wants to be still
with
and
which
peaceful,
we seek,
while another part resists
the backwards
control
walkers 40
and
years
rebels
of forward
against
pursuit
imposed
represents our conventional
The
approach
more
to
forcefully we
spirituality.
try to suppress our natural
We think
energy,
enlightenment
the more
is a
turbulent it
destination to
becomes.
reach, a
We
state
end
to
up
achieve,
fighting ourselves,
a reward
creating
for
exactly
sufficient
the
effort.
kind of internal tension
We attend
that makes
workshops,
meditation
read
impossible.
books, collect initiations,
Look deeply
and mark
at your
our
own
advancement.
relationship with
Each
spiritual
step
practice.
feels like progress.
Do you
Yet
notice
something
the subtle
essential
violence
remains
of demanding
elusive.
that your mind behave
His
differently
3
than it
days of
does?
backwards walking,
The frustration when your
symbolize
meditation
the
doesn't
opposite
match your
extreme.
expectations,
rejecting
the
conventional
self-judgment
spiritual
when you
paths
feel distracted
entirely,
or agitated,
perhaps thinking that the very act
each of these
seeking
represents a form of
prevents
fighting with
finding.
yourself, rather
Some
than
spiritual
learning to work
traditions
skillfully
emphasize
with
this
your
approach.
actual conditions.
Stop trying, abandon
Jishina's
effort,
transformation
see
came
through
through
what Zen
practices.
calls right
Yet
effort.
this too becomes a form
Not
of
the strain
seeking,
of forced
just in the opposite
concentration,
direction,
but the natural focus that
Consider your
arises
own
when we align
spiritual
with,
journey,
rather than resist
How
our
much energy
circumstances.
do you spend trying to become more
in the
mindful,
garden, more compassionate,
discovered how
more
to be
awakened,
fully present?
How
through
often do you
purposeful
evaluate your
activity?
meditation?
His
His
attention
attention
was
was
naturally
naturally
drawn
drawn
to
to
the
compare
immediate
yourself to
needs
others
of
on
the
the
path.
paths. The texture
These
of
are
soil,
forms of forward
the rhythm
movement
of seasons
that can
take us away from simple
This wasn't
presence.
forced mindfulness,
Zen
but
master
organic
Huang Po
engagement
taught with life as it
your
presented
everyday
itself.
mind.
Zen
That
master
is the
Suzuki
way.
Roshi taught. This points to
Each
the
of you is
backwards
perfect
walker's
the way
final
you are,
realization, and you can use a little
Now,
improvement. Let us explore a Zen story.
This paradox
about the
captures
difference
the essence of
between seeking
Jishin's
wisdom
journey
and finding
He
it.
didn't
need to become someone
This
different
is the tale
to practice
of the
successfully.
master's shadow.
He needed to
In a
discover
tranquil
how
monastery
his
surrounded by
particular
bamboo
temperament
groves
could express
a young
itself
monk named
authentically
Dokai had developed
within
an
the
unusual
structure of
obsession.
practice. Unlike his fellow students
The garden
who focused
became
on
Jishin's
meditation,
meditation
sutra
hall
study,
because
or
it
mindful
provided
work,
what his restless
Dokai had
energy
become
required.
completely fascinated
Purposeful
with his
movement,
teacher Mujo's
tangible
shadow.
results,
He
and
believed
connection
with
natural
absolute
cycles.
conviction that this
Rather
shadow
than trying to
contained
eliminate
special
his kinetic
wisdom
nature,
unavailable
Master
through
Ryoan
conventional
helped him
teachings.
channel it toward awakening.
Every morning, Dokai
same
would
energy
position
that made
himself
sitting
strategically in the
meditation
meditation hall,
became the very
not to
quality
focus on
that
his
made
breath
him
or posture,
an exceptional gardener,
but to observe how
and
Master Mujo's
eventually
shadow fell
a
across the
skilled
wooden floor.
meditator.
He studied
This
its
points
length
to a crucial
at different times of
understanding
day,
in Zen practice,
noting how it stretched.
There are as
long
many
and
ways to
thin in
cultivate
early
presence
morning as there are
grew
human
shorter
temperaments.
as the sun climbed
Some
higher
people naturally
and
disappeared
disappeared
entirely
entirely
meditation
when the sun reached its
Others
zenith.
toward walking
During
practice,
walking meditation in the
chanting,
garden,
service
while
work,
other monks
or
contemplated
contemplated
labor.
each step mindfully. The key is not finding
Dokai's
the right
attention
practice,
was entirely
but discovering
captured
how your
by
unique
how his
constitution's
teacher's
shadow can
moved
most
across the
authentically
gravel
express
paths.
the universal
He
principles
watched it
of
bend
awareness,
around rocks,
compassion,
and
fragment through
wisdom.
fence slats. Vietnamese Zen
And
dance
teacher
with the shadows
Thich
of swaying
Nhat Hanh
bamboo speaks of engaged
filled
Buddhism
notebooks
with sketches,
the
the
recognition
recognition that
patterns,
washing dishes, caring for
convinced
children,
he was
or
documenting
tending
profound
gardens
spiritual
can be as
teachings.
profound
as any formal
When
meditation.
Master Mujo sat
when
teaching in
approached
the
with
afternoon
full
sun,
presence.
Dokai barely heard the
Jishin's
words
story
being spoken.
illustrates this
Instead,
perfectly.
his eyes tracked
His
how the shadow
breakthrough came not
shifted
through
across the
perfecting
tatami
a particular
mats,
technique,
how it interacted
but
with the
through
shadows
learning
of
the
other
fundamental
students,
attitude
how
that
it seemed
makes
to
all
reach
practice
towards certain
effective.
objects in the room.
Willing cooperation
He interpreted
with
these
what
movements
is.
as secret messages,
The Buddha
hidden
said,
teachings meant
hatred
especially
is
for
never
him.
appeased by hatred.
The other monks
in this
found
world.
Dokai's behavior
by
peculiar,
non-hatred
but
alone
harmless.
is hatred.
Master
appeased.
Mujo, however,
This
noticed
is a
everything.
law eternal.
He observed how his
This
students'
applies not
attention
just
never
to
rested on the
external
present
conflicts,
moment,
but
to our
constantly
internal
followed
relationship
the
with our own
projection
minds
cast
by his physical
fighting our
form.
restless thoughts with
He
mental
saw how
force.
Dokai's practice
only
had
creates
become
more
about seeking
agitation,
something external,
learning to work
rather than
patiently
cultivating
and skillfully
inner
with our
awareness.
minds as they actually
For
are.
months,
This
Master
is the
Mujo
path to
said
genuine
nothing.
transformation. He allowed Dokai
Consider
to
areas in
continue
your own
his
life
shadow
where
study,
you might be fighting yourself,
understanding that
unnecessarily.
sometimes students
Perhaps you
must
struggle with a
exhaust their
particular
delusions
emotion,
before awakening,
repeatedly trying to
becomes
suppress anger
possible.
or eliminate anxiety.
The young
through
monk
willpower.
grew increasingly
Or maybe you have
sophisticated
creative
in his
impulses
shadow
that you judge as
observations,
distractions from
developing
more
theories
serious
about
pursuits.
the spiritual significance
What would
of
it look
shadow
like to
angles
find
and
skillful
lengths.
ways to channel
Then
these
came a
energies,
day
rather
when
than
thick
simply
clouds
trying to
covered the
eliminate
sky
them.
from dawn to dusk.
Zen
The light was
practice
diffuse
ultimately
and grey,
teaches us that
creating no
enlightenment
shadows
is not about
anywhere
becoming
in the
someone
monastery,
different.
but
Dokai
about fully
wandered the
becoming
halls
who we
frantically,
already are beneath
checking
our
every
conditioning
room,
and resistance.
every corner,
Searching
Jishin's
desperately
restless
for his
energy
teacher's shadow
was never the problem.
Without it,
His
felt inability
inability
lost,
to find an appropriate
unable to
expression
practice,
for it was what created
unable to
suffering.
learn. During the midday
Tonight,
teaching,
as you notice
Dokai
areas
sat
where you're fighting
restlessly,
with your own nature,
his eyes darting
can you
around the
sense
evenly lit
possibilities
room.
for channeling that
No
energy
shadows
more
fell
skillfully?
anywhere. He fidgeted
Perhaps
with
your
anxiety,
analytical mind,
unable
instead
to
of being a
concentrate on
meditation
anything
obstacle,
without his
could
familiar
find
object
expression
of
through
study.
studying Dharma texts.
His practice,
Maybe
he
your
realized
emotional
with growing
sensitivity
panic, had
rather
become
than being a
entirely
vulnerability,
dependent on
could
external
become
conditions.
a pathway to deeper
Master
compassion.
Mujo, observing his
What
students'
aspects
distress,
of yourself are you
approached him
trying to
after the
eliminate
teaching ended.
that might instead
Dokai,
need better
he
expression?
said gently, you
As the
seem
Buddha
troubled
taught,
today.
You
What is
yourself,
disturbing
as
your
much as
peace?
anybody in the entire
Master,
universe,
Dokai
deserve your
replied,
love and
his
affection.
voice filled with frustration.
True spiritual practice
I cannot
begins
find
with
your
this
shadow
radical
anywhere.
self-acceptance,
The wisdom
not
I have been
approval of
studying
all our
has
behaviors.
vanished.
How
but
can I
willingness to
continue
work
my practice
compassionately
without
with
it?
our actual starting
Master
point,
Mujo looked
rather
at his
than
confused
fighting to
student
become
with
someone
compassion.
else? Where is
Now,
your teacher now?
Let us explore
He
a
asked
Zen
simply,
story about
the
Dokai's
unexpected
unexpected
pathways
pathways
to
to wisdom.
desperately.
This is the master.
I cannot find
who
your
sold
shadow, master.
enlightenment. Without it, in the
I don't know where
bustling
to look for
marketplace of
teachings.
ancient Kyoto, in that
Among
moment,
the vendors
Master
selling
Mujo
rice,
lifted his
silk,
foot and stamped it
pottery.
hard on the wooden floor.
An unusual sight
The sound
appeared one
echoed
morning.
through the hall like
A well-dressed man,
sharp,
had set
and
up a
immediate.
small stall
Dokai
with an
jumped,
elaborate banner,
his attention
read,
suddenly drawn completely
"Enlightenment
into the
for
present
sale.
moment.
One gold
This student
coin
has
only.
been studying darkness
Achieve
and ignoring
instant
the light that
liberation.
creates it. Master Mujo
A crowd
declared,
gathered,
his voice
some
both
laughing at the
stern
audacity
and loving.
others curious about
The Buddha
what
taught,
enlightenment might look like.
Look not
when
for
packaged
refuge
for
to
purchase.
anyone besides yourself.
The man behind the stall was
What
clearly a
emerges
charlatan.
from this story
His robes
is the
were
recognition
expensive,
that true
but worn
wisdom
incorrectly.
cannot be found
His
in the
manner was
projections
theatrical
and reflections
rather than
of
enlightenment,
and his eyes
but only
held
in the direct
shifty
experience
quality
of
someone
awakened
accustomed
awareness
to
itself.
quick escapes.
Why
He
do we
called out
become
to
so
passers-by.
fascinated with the shadows
Why
of
spend
wisdom
years in meditation
rather than wisdom
Why
itself?
suffer through difficult practice?
Zen
For
Buddhism
just one
points
gold
to our
coin,
tendency
you can
towards
have what
spiritual
among struggle
materialism,
lifetimes to
the
achieve.
ego's clever way of
Most
turning even the
people walked
search
for
by
truth
shaking
into
their
a
heads
form of
or
seeking
muttering about the
external
shamelessness
objects.
of such a display.
Dokai represents
But
the
as
part
morning
of us that
stretched
wants to
toward
make
midday,
enlightenment into
a
something
familiar
we can
figure
study,
approached the stall,
analyze, and eventually
Master
possess.
Ikkyu, renowned
This
throughout
ancient
the region
wisdom
for his wisdom,
illuminates our
unconventional
habitual
pattern
teaching
of
methods,
seeking the
stopped
extraordinary
before the banner,
while missing
and
the
studied
ordinary
it with
miracle
apparent
of present moment
seriousness.
awareness. One
The
gold
shadow
coin for enlightenment
represents all the ways
Ikkyu
we look
asked,
for wisdom,
stroking
in
his
the wrong
beard
places.
The
In
charlatan's
special
eyes lit
experiences,
up with greed,
unusual
though he
phenomena,
maintained his spiritual
complex
salesman
theories,
demeanor,
or the reflective
Yes,
glory of
venerable
spiritual
master.
teachers.
The same
Consider
enlightenment
how
that
often in
takes
your own
decades
spiritual
to
journey
achieve through
you've
traditional
become
methods.
fascinated with the
I
shadows
offer it
rather than
instantly,
the source.
guaranteed.
Perhaps
To everyone's
you've been drawn
amazement,
to dramatic
including
spiritual
experiences,
Ikkyu reached into
rather
his
than the
robes
quiet
and
constancy
produced a gold
of awareness
coin.
itself. This sounds like an excellent
Maybe
bargain.
you focused
he
on
said,
accumulating
placing the
knowledge
coin on the stall
about
counter.
enlightenment.
I'll take one
Rather than
enlightenment,
cultivating
please.
the simple presence
The crowd pressed
in which
closer,
understanding
whispers rippling
naturally
through the
arises.
onlookers.
The charlatan
The
found
shadow
himself in an
requires
unexpected
sunlight to
predicament.
exist.
He had
Just as
never
spiritual
imagined someone would
experiences
actually
require
pay,
consciousness to
especially
be
not
known.
a genuine Zen master.
Yet we often become so
Panicking
captivated
slightly,
by the
he fumbled
experiences
through his belongings,
that we
looking
forget
for
the
something,
awareness in which they
anything,
appear.
to give in exchange for
We
the
study
coin.
the movement of
Finally,
thoughts rather
his
than
hands
the stillness
closed
of
around a
mind.
small mirror he used
We
for
analyze
grooming.
emotions
Desperate
rather
to
than
complete the
resting in the
transaction,
space
he
that
handed it to
observes
Ikkyu
them.
with great ceremony.
Zen
Here is
Master
your
Dogen
enlightenment,
taught,
master. To study the
deeply,
Buddha way
and
is to
all
study
will
the
be
self.
revealed.
To study the self is to
Ikkyu
forget the
accepted
self.
the mirror with apparent reverence.
Dokai's
and gazed
obsession
into
with the
its
shadow
surface.
was a form of
For a long
studying
moment,
something
he studied
external
his
to
own
himself.
reflection.
When
His
the true
weathered face,
teaching
his
was
knowing eyes,
available
his
only
slightly
through
amused
direct
expression.
self-inquiry.
To everyone's
The
surprise,
cloudy day
he
represents
burst
those
into
times
delight
in
and
practice when our usual
Excellent,
spiritual
he declared,
supports
raising
are
the mirror
unavailable.
toward the sky.
The meditation that
every
usually
coin.
calms us
This is
feels
indeed
agitated.
the most direct teaching I've
The
encountered
teacher
in
we
years.
rely on is absent. The crowd murmured
The
in
experiences
confusion. We count
The
on
charlatan,
don't arise.
emboldened by what seemed like
These
validation
moments
from a
reveal
respected
how
teacher,
much our
puffed
practice
up with
depends
pride.
on external
Master,
conditions,
I am gratified
rather
that
than
you
the
recognize the
unconditional
profound
awareness that is
enlightenment I've
always
provided.
present.
Tell us,
Master
what great
Musho's
wisdom did you
stamp on the
discover?
floor demonstrates the immediacy
Ikkyu's
of
laughter grew even
awakened
more
presence.
joyous.
I
No
discovered
shadows
that a
are
fool
needed,
and his money are
no
soon
special
parted,
conditions
and I am
required.
that fool. The sound
He laughed
arises
again,
and
tears
passes
streaming
away
down his
in the
cheeks.
very awareness
For one gold
that
coin,
Dokai
this
this man has shown me my
through
own
his
face
elaborate shadow
and
studies.
reminded me that enlightenment
The
cannot
teaching
be
is
bought,
always available
sold,
in the
or
simple
possessed.
directness of this
The
moment.
greatest teaching often comes from the
Tonight,
most unexpected
as you reflect
teachers.
on your own spiritual
The crowd
seeking,
began to chuckle.
can you
as
notice where you
understanding
might be
dawned.
studying shadows?
Ikkyu
Instead
bowed
of recognizing
deeply to
the light of
charlatan.
awareness itself.
Thank you, friend.
What
for this
complex
perfect
spiritual
demonstration of
pursuits might
wisdom
you be ready to
appearing
abandon
through folly.
in favor of the simple
He set the mirror
recognition
gently
of
on the
what is
counter and
always
walked away,
already present.
still chuckling. As the Buddha
The
said,
charlatan stood
if you light a
stunned,
lamp for
holding
somebody,
the gold coin
it
and
will also
staring at the
brighten
mirror.
your path. Something had shifted
true
inside
teacher
him during this exchange.
is not the shadow cast by
Watching
wisdom,
a genuine master
but
find
the light of
wisdom in what he
awareness
knew was a
that
deception
illuminates all experience.
had cracked something open in his
Let
heart.
us continue on our journey with
For
a
the
story
first time in
that
years,
reveals the Buddha
he
nature
felt ashamed
in the most
not just of being
unexpected
caught,
places, but of the emptiness
This is
that
the
had
tale
driven him
of the
to
laughing
such
stone.
deception in the first place. Master Fugai was
Years
known
later,
throughout the region
that
as
same
an unconventional
charlatan would be
teacher
found
whose
sweeping the
methods
floors
often
at
baffled
Ikkyu's
his
temple.
students.
Having become
His
one
modest
of his most
temple
devoted
sat on a
students.
hillside
When
overlooking
asked
a
about his
valley
transformation,
where farmers worked
he would
their
say,
rice fields.
Master
And the sound
Ikkyu
of flowing
bought
water
my
from a
enlightenment
nearby stream
and then gave it back
provided
to
a
me freely.
constant, gentle
I finally
backdrop
understood
to daily
that
life.
what I was trying to sell,
Among all of
I
Master
didn't have,
Fugai's peculiar
and what I was
habits,
trying to buy,
none puzzled
I
his students
already
more
possessed.
than his relationship with a perfectly
Buddha spoke
ordinary
of this
rock
when he
that
said,
sat on his teaching
"Three
desk.
things cannot be long
The stone
hidden.
itself was
the sun,
unremarkable in
the
every
moon,
way,
and the roughly
truth.
the size of a human
Here
fist.
we discover the profound
weathered
teaching
smooth by
that
countless
wisdom
years of
often
rain
appears
and wind
through the most
grey
unlikely
brown in
circumstances,
colour, with subtle
and that
veins of
genuine
darker mineral
understanding
running through it.
cannot be commodified.
It could have been
or
picked up from any
transferred,
riverbed
but only
or
mountain
recognised
path
within
Yet,
ourselves.
Master Fugai treated
Why
this
are we
common
so
rock as if it
susceptible
were the
to
most
the idea
precious treasure
that
in the
enlightenment
monastery?
can be acquired
Several
from
times
external
each day,
sources?
during teachings,
Zen
meals,
Buddhism points
or
to our
quiet
deep
moments of
conditioning
contemplation
toward
Master
transactional
Fugai
thinking
would suddenly pick up the
the
stone
belief that
and burst
spiritual
into hysterical
realization
laughter.
works like
His
commerce,
laughter was genuine
where
and
we can
infectious.
exchange effort,
Deep belly
money
laughs that shook
or
his entire
devotion
body
for
brought
guaranteed
tears
results.
to his eyes. He would
This
hold the rock
gaining
close to his
mind
face,
approaches
examining it
awakening
as if seeing it for
as
the first
something
time,
we don't have,
and the
that we
laughter
need
would
to get,
intensify
rather
until he
than
could barely catch
recognizing
his
it
breath.
as our essential
The students
nature.
found this
behavior
temporarily
completely
obscured by
mystifying.
conditioning.
They would glance at
Notice
each other
how
during
often
these
we
episodes,
fall into this trap in
wondering if their
subtle
teacher
ways.
had lost his mind.
We might shop for
or
the
if they were
perfect
missing some
meditation
profound
technique,
spiritual
the right
gem.
spiritual book,
Some
or the most
students
enlightened
began
teacher,
examining similar
imagining
stones
that
from
the
the
correct
garden,
external
hoping
formula
to discover
will deliver
what made Master
the inner
Fugai's
transformation
rock so
we seek.
amusing.
While
Others
tools and
developed
guidance
elaborate
can certainly
theories about
support
the
our
stone's
practice,
history,
the The fundamental
Perhaps it came from a
shift
sacred
always
mountain,
happens
or
within
was
our
blessed
own
by an
recognition.
ancient master.
The charlatan's
The
mirror
laughter episodes
accidentally
became a regular
provided for
feature of
countless
monastery
expensive
life.
workshops and elaborate
During
practices,
serious
often
discussions
missed.
of Buddhist philosophy,
Direct confrontation
Master
with what
Fugai
is
might
already
suddenly
here.
grab his stone and
Ikkyu's
dissolve
reflection
into giggles.
showed him nothing he didn't already possess.
In the middle of formal tea
Yet in that
ceremonies,
moment of seeing
he would
clearly,
catch sight of the rock,
the very
and start
ordinariness
chuckling
became
uncontrollably.
extraordinary.
Even during
This is
solemn
what Zen
memorial
calls
services,
original
the stone
faith,
could trigger fits
not
of
some
mirth
special
that
spiritual
seemed wildly
state,
inappropriate
but our
to the
natural
student.
awareness.
Before
As
it
weeks
gets
turned to
decorated
months,
with
concepts,
the stone
and
became
became something of a legend among the monks.
deeper teaching
Visiting
emerges through
teachers would
Ikkyu's
hear about
response to
Master
being
Fugai's laughing
fooled,
stone and request to
rather
see
than
it,
anger or
only to witness
embarrassment.
another
He
episode
found
of
genuine
inexplicable
delight in
hilarity.
recognizing his own gullibility.
Some visitors left convinced
This
that
demonstrates
Fugai was
what
either
Zen
a crazy
teacher
saint
Suzuki
or
Roshi
simply
called
crazy.
don't know mind.
The students, however,
The willingness
remained
to be
loyal to their
surprised,
teacher,
to
while
learn
growing
from
increasingly
unexpected sources,
frustrated by
and to
their
find
inability
wisdom even
to
in our
understand
mistakes.
his amusement.
Consider your
One
own
morning,
relationship
as
with
Master
spiritual
Fugai
seeking.
sat teaching
How much
about the
energy do you
nature
spend
of Buddha
looking for the
consciousness,
right method?
he reached for his
Teacher
stone
or
as
experience
usual to provide
But
what you
instead of
imagine
beginning
you're
his
missing.
typical laughter,
Can you
he
sense the
paused,
difference between
holding the
skillful
rock
learning
gently
and
in both
desperate
hands?
acquisition?
A
A young monk
story
named
suggests
Korin,
that wisdom
who had
often
been
comes
particularly
not through
tormented
getting
by
what we
curiosity
want,
about the stone,
but through clearly
sees
seeing
the
this opportunity
of trying to possess
Master,
what is already our
Korin said,
birthright, bowing respectfully but
Zen
speaking
Master
with bold
Lin
desperation.
If you
I
meet
can
the
no
Buddha
longer
on the
concentrate
road,
on your
kill
teachings
him.
while wondering about that
This
rock.
shocking statement
What is so amusing
points
about
to the
it?
same truth
I have
Ikkyu
examined
discovered.
countless stones and found
Enlightenment
nothing funny
cannot
about
be
any of
received
them from outside
Please,
ourselves.
tell us what we are
Not
missing.
even from the most perfect teacher.
Master
or
Fugai
teacher
looked down at the stone
any
resting in his
spiritual
palms,
authority that claims
then
to
up
possess
at his
what we
eager
lack
students.
is
His
ultimately
eyes
pointing
twinkled
us
with the
away from
familiar
our
mirth.
own innate wisdom.
But he controlled his laughter long enough to
The
speak.
charlatan's eventual transformation
stone,
reveals
he said,
another layer of the
holding
teaching.
it up for everyone to
His
see.
years of pretending to
has been
sell
sitting in
enlightenment
meditation
had
for
actually
millions of
prepared
years
him to
without moving,
recognize it when it was
without
freely
seeking,
offered, without
his
asking
intimate
a single
familiarity
question about
with
spiritual
enlightenment,
concepts,
without
even
reading
used
sutras,
deceptively or following
became the
teachers
very
or developing
foundation for
practices.
authentic
understanding
He turned the
once his
stone
heart
slowly in
opened
his
to
hands,
genuine practice,
admiring its simple
The Buddha
presence.
said, by three
It has never
things
worried
the
about its
wise
spiritual
person may be
progress.
known:
It has never
what
compared
acts
itself
they
to other
encourage,
stones,
what
or felt
acts they
inadequate about its
discourage,
practice.
and what acts
It has
they
never had a
overlook.
single doubt about whether it was
Ikkyu's
on the
wisdom
right path,
lay not in
or wondered
avoiding
if
the
it was
charlatan's
enlightened
deception,
enough.
but in finding
The students
truth
leaned
within
forward,
it.
finally
He
beginning to
encouraged
understand.
the man's offering by
Yet
paying
you
for
restless humans,
discouraged
Master
attachment to
Fugai
outcomes
continued,
by
his
laughing
voice
at his
rising
own
with
foolishness,
Think
and overlooked
you
the
need to do
intended
something
fraud by
special
recognizing
to
the
find Buddha
unintended
nature.
teaching.
You sit
Tonight,
and struggle
as you reflect
seek
on your own
and
spiritual
strain,
journey,
accumulate
can you appreciate the
teachings
unexpected
and measure
teachers
progress
that have appeared
all
along the way?
while your essential
Perhaps someone
nature
you initially
remains
judged
as
or
naturally
dismissed
present
offered
as
you
the
insights that more
stone's
obvious
stoneness.
sources missed.
He placed the stone
What would it
down
mean
gently
to
on the
approach
desk
tomorrow
with the
with
reverence you
Ikkyu
might show to
openness
the
to
Buddha
finding
himself?
wisdom in the most
I
unlikely
laugh
packages?
because it has been enlightened
As the Buddha
longer
taught,
than any of us. When you
and it
realize
doesn't
how
even know what
perfect everything
enlightenment
is,
means,
you will
it
tilt
simply
your head
exists
back in perfect
laugh at the
accordance with its
sky.
nature. Moment
in
after
recognizing
moment,
that enlightenment
without
cannot
effort
be bought
or anxiety,
sold, we discover
the
it
Buddha
has been
once
freely
said,
available
all beings
along,
by nature
reflected
are Buddha.
perfectly in
This
whatever
tale
mirror we
unveils
happen
the
to be
profound
holding.
joke at the heart of spiritual
Let us now
seeking.
turn to our next story,
We exhaust
one that reveals how
ourselves
broken
trying to
things
become
often
what
serve
we
more
already
clearly
are.
than perfect ones.
Why do we make
This
enlightenment
is
so
the monastery bell
complicated
that wouldn't
when
ring.
the very awareness
High in the
seeking
mountains of
enlightenment
rural Japan
is itself Buddha
Shunryu
nature?
Temple had
Zen
served the
Buddhism
surrounding
reveals
villages
that
for
our
over
essential
300
nature
years.
is already perfect,
Its bronze
already
bell,
awakened,
cast by master
already
craftsmen
free.
generations ago,
The stone
had called
represents
countless
this natural
practitioners
state,
to morning
complete,
meditation and evening
whole,
reflection.
and at peace without
The
any
sound
effort
of that
or
bell
self-improvement
carried
project.
across the valleys. The deeper
Marking the
teaching
rhythms
here
of
shows us how we
monastic
create
life
suffering
and
through
offering
the very
comfort
attempt to
all
escape
who heard
suffering.
its deep,
We develop
resonant
elaborate
tones.
spiritual practices to
But
achieve a
one
peace
winter morning,
that is
after
already
a
our
particularly
fundamental
harsh
nature.
storm,
The bell
we seek to
developed to
become
become mindful
When
when
struck,
mindfulness is
instead
instead of
the
producing
natural
its
awareness
traditional rich
with which we're already aware.
It made only
We try
a
to
dull
cultivate
thud,
compassion
audible
when
within
love
the
is the
temple
very
grounds,
fabric of
but
our
lacking
being.
the carrying power to reach
Consider
the
how much
surrounding
energy you
communities.
spend trying to
The
become a
monks
better spiritual
were dismayed.
practitioner.
How
How
they
often do you
properly call
evaluate
people
your
to
meditation
practice without
worry
their
about your
bell's
progress,
voice,
or feel
reaching
inadequate
across the
compared to
mountain
others on the
valleys?
path? Master
These
Sengai,
efforts arise from the
temple's
assumption that you are
elderly
somehow
abbot,
deficient,
examine
that
the
your
crack
current state
and
needs
estimated
improvement
the cost of
to
repair.
access your true nature.
It would require taking
The laughing
the bell
stone
to the
shows us
distant
the
city.
absurdity of this
An
assumption.
expensive
Does
undertaking
a wave need to
that would
practice
drain
being
the
water?
temple's modest
Does a
funds.
flower need to study how to bloom?
The monks began
space need to
organizing to
learn
raise
to be
money
vast.
for the restoration.
Our Buddha nature
Eager
is
to
not
return
something
their
we
daily
develop.
practice to
It's
its
something
full
we
dignity.
recognize was never
After
absent.
weeks of careful saving,
Master
and small
Fugai's laughter
donations
represents
from
the
villagers,
joy
the
of
monks
this
had
recognition.
finally collected enough
When we
gold
truly
to restore
see
their
that we've
bell.
been seeking what we already
They presented
possess,
the money to
that
Master
we've been
Sengai
trying to
with
achieve
pride
what we
and
already
relief.
are. The cosmic
Master,
humor becomes
we can
apparent.
finally repair our
all
bell
our spiritual
and restore
striving,
proper calling
while perhaps useful
practice.
for clearing away obstacles,
But the
cannot
next day,
create
a
what is
family of
already
refugees
eternally present.
Zen teacher Alan Watts often spoke of the backwards law, the idea that the more we seek happiness,
Welcome,
the more
friend,
it eludes us.
to another journey together.
The stone embodies the
Tonight,
resolution to
we
this
embark
paradox,
on an exploration of
perfect
profound,
contentment with
hidden
what
wisdom,
is, without seeking to be
meticulously
different.
preserved through
This
ages
doesn't mean we
to
abandon
soothe
all
the
spiritual
agitated
practice or
mind
personal growth,
and usher
rather
in a
we
state
approach
of
them from a
profound,
different foundation,
restorative tranquility.
not as attempts to acquire enlightenment.
Feel free to
but
share
as
what
expressions
time it
of the
is
enlightenment
and
we
where you are
already
listening
are.
from.
The stone doesn't meditate.
I'm going to share a
become
curated
enlightened.
collection
If stones
of
could
ancient
meditate,
parables
they would meditate
and
as an
timeless
expression of their
Buddhist
natural
tales,
Buddha nature.
designed
The Buddha
to
said,
unlock the deepest
"Look
chambers
within.
of mental
You
serenity
are the Buddha."
and emotional
The
liberation.
stone's millions of
Each
years of
narrative
meditation
holds a potent,
simply
transformative
represent
teaching,
the timeless
capable
presence
of recalibrating
awakened
your
awareness
entire
that
inner
needs
landscape,
no cultivation,
dissolving the
no
clutches of
improvement,
anxiety,
no special
incessant
conditions
worry,
to exist
and the
perfectly.
endless pursuit of external
Tonight,
validation.
as you rest in this moment,
These are not mere stories
can you
for
recognize
slumber.
the stone-like
They are
Buddha
deeply
nature
embedded
that
in
has never
insights
been
passed
disturbed
down
by those who
seeking,
understood
never
a
been
fundamental
improved by your
truth
practices.
many have
Never
forgotten.
been diminished by your
that true
struggles.
contentment arises
Can you touch
not
the
from
natural
altering our
peace that exists
surroundings,
without effort,
but from
the
transforming
awareness
our
that
perception of
knows
them?
without trying,
As the
the
Persian
love that
poet
flows
Rumi
without
once
seeking an
observed,
object?
The
As
quieter
Master
you become,
Fugai's laughter
the
reminds
more
us,
you can hear.
the greatest spiritual joke
Over the course
is
of
that
our
what we've
journey,
been seeking through
you'll
such
uncover
effort
precisely
has been
how
sitting
these
quietly
age-old
within
truths
us all along,
can reshape
as
your
patient and
experience of
present
life. As a stone on a
As we
teacher's
journey
desk.
through these remarkable tales, you'll
Now,
notice a powerful shift
let us explore
begin to
a
unfold.
Zen story about the
The tight grip
irreplaceable
of everyday
nature
concerns
of
will
direct
naturally
spiritual
soften.
transmission.
The constant
This
hum
is
of
the
your
tale
thoughts will
of
gradually
Bankei
diminish,
and the messenger.
you'll find
In the
yourself
bustling
effortlessly
capital
drifting into
city,
a realm
where
of
merchants
deep
haggled in
comprehension
crowded
and abiding
marketplaces,
peace.
and scholars
So
debated
settle
in
in
tea
profoundly
houses.
now.
The
Let your body
renowned Zen
surrender to
master
whatever
Bankei
supports you.
had completed
Take
another
one
deliberate
deliberate breath
breath
with
teaching,
me,
and
at one of
as
the
you
great
exhale,
temples,
know that you are about to receive
known
insights
throughout the region
that have
for
been
his
waiting for your
profound
awakening since
insight
time
and
immemorial.
ability to point
Our
students
first
directly
tale
toward
reveals
their
the
Buddha
profound
nature.
mystery of
Bankei
identity itself.
maintained a simple
This
practice
is
of
the monk
traveling
who
between
forgot his name.
temples.
Master
offering
Dogen was
instruction
walking along a
wherever
mountain
sincere
path when he
students
encountered
gathered.
a weathered monk.
As the
sitting
master
beneath an
prepared to
ancient
depart for
pine
his
tree,
next destination,
the stranger's
carefully
robes
folding
were
his few
patched and
possessions
faded
into a
from
traveling
years of
bundle,
travel.
a
and his
well-dressed
eyes
gentleman
held the
approached
peaceful
him with
depth
urgent
that comes
politeness.
only from long practice.
The man's fine silk
Curious
robes
about
and
this
careful
wandering
manner suggested
practitioner,
someone accustomed to
Dogen
moving in
approached
aristocratic
and offered the
circles.
traditional greeting,
Likely a retainer,
"Good morning,
or
brother.
aide to one of the
I am
noble families
Dogen
that
of
supported the
Aihaiju Temple. May I ask your
Venerable
name?"
master, the gentleman said,
The monk
bowing
looked up
deeply.
with a gentle
I
smile.
come with a request
paused
for a
long
long
moment,
moment,
and
a
replied,
man of great learning
"Master,
and sincere
I have
interest
forgotten
in your
it
teachings.
completely."
He has heard of your
Dogen was
wisdom
intrigued.
and wishes desperately
"How can
to
you
meet
forget
with you
something so
personally.
fundamental?
But urgent
Your name
matters
has been with you
have
since
detained
birth."
him today. Would you
The wandering
consider
monk
postponing
chuckled
your
softly.
departure by one day,
"Master,
so
I
that
have
you
been
might
traveling
have
for
the
30
honor of
years,
studying with you
sitting
tomorrow?"
in meditation,
Bankei,
serving others,
despite
walking
his
these
eagerness to
mountain
reach the
paths.
next temple,
I have been
where
so
students
busy
awaited
being
him,
myself
recognized
that I never
the
had time
genuine
to remember
need
what
in
to
the
call it.
request.
The
When I wake each morning, required flexibility, awareness, and passion. Even when I help a traveler, I am simply
Of course.
compassion in action,
He replied simply.
When I sit in meditation,
I shall remain
I am
one
simply
more
presence
day.
being present. The master
What need
unpacked
is
his
there
bundle
for
and
a
settled
label?
back into the temple quarters,
Dogen felt
spending the
something
evening in
shift
quiet
inside him,
meditation
as if a
and
door he didn't
preparation
know
for what he
existed
anticipated
suddenly
would be a
opened.
meaningful
But
encounter
surely
with
you
a
must
sincere
have some
seeker.
way of referring to yourself.
He had met many nobles over the
The
years.
birds call me by
who
my
approached
footsteps
Zen
on the path.
with genuine
The villagers
humility,
know me by the
despite
kindness
their
I
worldly
offer.
status.
The mountains recognize
and he looked
me by my
forward to
gratitude
offering
for their beauty.
whatever guidance
Each
might be
moment
helpful.
provides all the identity I
The next
need.
morning, arrived
The
with
monk
clear
gestured
skies
to the
and
pine
the
tree
sound of
above them.
temple bells calling
Does
the
this
community
tree
to
suffer
meditation.
from not knowing its name?
Bankei
Does the
waited
stream
in his
worry about
designated
what to
meeting
call
room as
itself
the
as
appointed
it
time
flows
approached.
toward the sea?
But instead of the Baron
Understanding
himself,
dawned on Dogen's
the same
face like
well-dressed
sunrise
gentleman
breaking
over the
appeared
peaks.
again.
This
He bowed
time with
deeply
obvious
and said,
embarrassment written
"You have
across his
achieved what
features.
most of us spend lifetimes
Master,
pursuing.
the man
You
began.
have discovered who you
his
are
voice
by
heavy with
forgetting who you
apology.
think you should be.
I bring regrettable
The
news.
nameless monk bowed in
The
return.
Baron was called away on
And you,
urgent business
Master
that could
Dogen,
not be delayed.
have recognized this
Matters of
truth.
state that demanded his
Perhaps
immediate
we are
attention.
both closer to our
However,
original nature
He has
than we
not
imagined.
forgotten his desire for your teaching.
The Buddha once said,
He has asked
"You
me to
are not
serve
your
as his
name,
representative,
your body,
to
or
receive
your
your
thoughts.
instruction on his behalf.
You are the awareness
and carry your
in which
wisdom
all
back to
these
him
arise."
faithfully." What
The
emerges
gentleman
from this
paused,
story is
clearly
a profound
hoping this
teaching
arrangement
about
would
the
prove
difference
acceptable.
between our essential nature.
The Baron's
and the
specific
conceptual
question
identity
concerns
we
the
carry.
nature of mind itself.
Why do we cling so
He wishes
tightly
to understand
names, roles,
what is the
and
true nature of
self-definitions?
consciousness.
And how can
Zen
one
Buddhism
realize it
explains
directly that the ego
if you would
mind
share your
constantly
teaching on this
seeks
matter,
to solidify
I promise
itself
to convey
through
every
labels
word
and
exactly
categories.
as you speak it.
We become attached to being a
Bankei
teacher,
listened to this
a
request
parent,
with gentle
a
attention.
successful person,
His expression
a
remaining
spiritual
calm
seeker,
and compassionate.
These identities
When
provide
the
a sense of
gentleman finished
security and
speaking,
continuity.
The master sat
But they
quietly
also
for a
create a
moment,
prison of
as if
limitations.
considering not just the question,
Consider
but
how
the
much mental
entire
energy you
situation.
spend maintaining
The
your
absent
various
seeker,
identities.
the well-intentioned messenger,
the professional
and the
persona
profound
you present at
impossibility
work,
of what was
the
being
family
asked.
role you play at home.
Finally,
The social
Bankei
image you project
spoke
with friends.
characteristic simplicity
Each requires
and
constant
directness.
reinforcement and protection.
This matter of Zen
You might notice
is difficult
anxiety
to convey
arising
even
when these
through direct
identities
question
are
and
threatened
answer
or challenged.
between teacher and
This
student
is the
meeting
ego's
face
fear
to face.
of dissolution.
It becomes all
Its
the
terror
more
of
difficult,
discovering what
indeed
lies beneath the
impossible,
accumulated layers
to
of
transmit through a
self-concept.
messenger. No
The
matter how
nameless monk
sincere
represents
or
what
capable
Zen
that messenger
calls
might be.
original face.
Having delivered this
the
response,
authentic
the master
self
said
that
nothing
exists
more.
before the mind.
He simply
creates
sat in
stories
silence,
about who we
embodying the
are.
very teaching
This
he
is
had
not a
just
blank
articulated.
emptiness, but
The
rather
gentleman
a
waited,
dynamic,
perhaps
responsive
expecting
awareness
elaboration
that
or
naturally
alternative
expresses
suggestions,
compassion,
but none came.
wisdom, and spontaneous,
Eventually finding himself
appropriate
speechless
action
and somewhat
without
confused,
needing to
the
reference
gentleman
the
bowed
fixed
politely and
identity.
withdrew from the temple.
Zen
The
teacher
Buddha once
Huang
said,
Po taught,
"Be a lamp
your
unto
everyday
yourself."
mind is
This
the
profound
way.
truth,
When you try
reveals
to
itself
turn toward
in
it,
Bankai's gentle
you move away
but
from it.
firm refusal
The more we
to
grasp
reduce Zen
after
wisdom
spiritual
to a
identities
message
or
that
try
could be
to
carried by
become someone
proxy,
special,
the
spiritual
further we drift
awakening
from our
cannot
natural
be
state,
transmitted
second-hand.
The monks,
because it is not
forgetting,
information,
represents a
but
letting go so
transformation.
complete that
Why
even
do we
the one
often
who might
approach
remember
spiritual
has
learning
dissolved,
as if it were academic
In
knowledge that can
Japanese
be collected
aesthetics,
and
there's a
conveyed
concept
through
called
intermediaries, meaning no
Zen
mind
Buddhism teaches
or
that
no
awakening
heart.
is not a concept
This
to be
doesn't
understood,
indicate absence,
but a reality to
but
be
rather a
directly
state of such
experienced.
complete presence,
Like the
that
taste
the
of
mediating
water to someone whose
self-consciousness
thirsty,
disappears.
it cannot be adequately
Like a master
described.
calligrapher,
It
whose
must be
years of
experienced
practice allow the
firsthand.
brush to move without interference.
The Baron's
from a
question
thinking
about the
mind.
nature of consciousness,
The nameless monk
reveals our
moves
typical
through
approach
life
to
without
spiritual
the friction of
inquiry.
self-reference.
We want to understand
Modern
awareness
neuroscience
intellectually,
confirms what
to
Zen
grasp
has
it
long
conceptually,
taught.
to
The
possess
sense of
it
a
as
solid,
knowledge,
continuous self.
But consciousness
actually
cannot
a
be made into
construction
an
of the
object
brain,
of study, because
a
it is the
useful
very
fiction
subject
that
doing
helps
the
us
studying.
navigate complex
It's like
social
trying to see your
environments.
own eyes without
this
a mirror.
fiction becomes
The seeing
problematic
itself
when
is
we
what you are
mistake
trying
it
to
for
see.
ultimate reality.
Consider how often throughout your
suffer
day
when we try to
you might
defend
approach
or enhance
spiritual
something
wisdom
that
as
exists
information
only
as a
to be
collection of
collected
thoughts
rather
and
than
memories.
truth, to
to be embodied. The Buddha said,
We read
in
books
the
about
end,
meditation
just three things
instead of
matter.
meditating.
How well we have lived.
We study
How well we
descriptions
have
of
loved.
enlightenment
How
instead
well
of
we have learned to let
investigating
go.
our present experience.
Notice that none of these
seek
require
answers
a
about
fixed
the nature of
identity.
mind instead
Living
of directly
fully,
examining
loving
what we call
deeply,
mind right now.
and letting go completely.
Zen Master Dogen
are all
taught
expressions
to
of
study
our
the
essential
Buddha way
nature
is to study
rather
the
than
self.
achievements of
To
a
study
particular
the self
someone.
is to forget the self.
Tonight, as you
This
rest in the
paradox
quiet
points
darkness,
to the heart of why
can
spiritual
you sense the
transmission
awareness that
requires
observes your
direct
thoughts
engagement
without being defined
the
by
self
them?
that wants to
Can you
understand
feel the
Buddhism
life force
intellectually
moving through your
is
body
the very
without needing to
construction
claim
that must be
ownership
seen
of it?
through?
This
What would it
seeing
be
through
like to
happens not through
experience yourself as
accumulating
pure
knowledge,
presence,
but through
temporarily
intimate
borrowed by
investigation
consciousness
of immediate
for the sake of this
experience.
precious human
The messenger in the
experience.
story represents our own
As the Buddha
tendency
taught,
to approach
when you
awakening
realize there is
indirectly.
nothing lacking,
We want to
the
understand
whole world
consciousness
belongs
from a
to
safe
you.
distance,
In
maintaining
forgetting our
the illusion
names,
that
we
we
remember
separate
our true
observers,
nature.
studying an
In
object
releasing our
called
grip on identity,
awareness.
we discover
But
the
awareness
freedom
is
that
what
was
we are,
always already
not what we
here.
have. It cannot be
Let us
possessed,
now turn to a
understood,
tale that
or
reveals
transmitted
the impermanent
because we are
nature
expressions
of all
of it.
precious things.
Bankei's
This is the
silence
tea
after
master's
his
brief
empty
explanation was itself
Master
a
Yamamoto
teaching.
was renowned throughout the
Zen,
region for his
silence
exquisite
often
tea
conveys
ceremonies.
what words
His
cannot.
every movement embodied
The gaps
decades
between
of practice,
thoughts,
and his
the
collection of
space between
tea implements was
the
legendary.
awareness in which all experiences
Among his most
arise.
treasured possessions
These cannot
was an
be captured in
ancient
language,
porcelain cup,
but can be
delicate as
directly
an eggshell,
recognized when we
and
stop
painted
trying
with
to
cherry
grasp them
blossoms that seemed to
conceptually.
dance in the light. This doesn't mean this
Spiritual
cup
teaching
had
is
been passed down
impossible,
through
or
15
that
generations
teachers
of
serve
tea
no
masters,
purpose.
each one
Rather,
adding to its
it
story
means that
and
authentic
reverence. Teaching points students
One
toward
autumn
their
morning,
own direct
Yamamoto
experience,
traveled
rather
to visit
than providing
Zen Master
second-hand
Bankei,
descriptions
carrying
of someone
his precious
else's
cup
realization,
carefully
wrapped in silk. The teacher's
He
role
had heard
is
of
not
Bankei's
to deliver
wisdom
enlightenment
and hoped to share tea
but
with
to
him,
create
perhaps
conditions
even
where
receiving
students
some
might
profound
recognize
teaching
what they
about the way
already
of tea.
are.
Bankei welcomed him
as you
warmly
experience
into
the
his
simple
simple
fact
hut.
of being conscious,
Please,
aware of these words,
let us share tea
aware
together.
of your body,
Yamamoto
aware
said,
of the space
unwrapping
in which
his
thoughts
treasured
and
cup with
sensations
ceremonial
appear.
care.
Can you
This
investigate
cup
this
has
awareness
served
directly
tea masters
rather
for
than through
400
concept?
years. Each
Can you be
sip connects
present
us to the
your
lineage of
experience
those who
rather
came
than
before?
trying to understand it through
As he
someone
spoke,
else's descriptions?
Yamamoto lifted the cup
As the
to
Buddha
show its
taught,
delicate beauty.
work out your own salvation
But in that
with
moment,
diligence, whether from nervousness
the path to
or
freedom
simply the way
cannot
of all
be
things
walked
by proxy.
The cup slipped
It
from his
requires your
fingers.
own feet, your
Time
own breath,
seemed to slow
your own
as it
willingness
fell
to
through
look
the
directly
air,
at what you
then
have
shattered
always
against
been,
the
but
stone
perhaps
floor
never clearly
with
seen.
a sound like a
Let us
small
now turn
bell
to a
breaking.
story about the difference between
Yamamoto
seeing and
gasped
being seen,
and immediately dropped to his
between
knees.
wisdom and the
Tears
appearance of wisdom
streaming down his face.
This is the tale of the
Master
blind
Bankei
man and his lantern.
I am so sorry.
Late one
This
evening,
cup survived wars,
as darkness settled over the
earthquakes,
village like
and
a soft
centuries
blanket,
of careful handling,
a blind
only
man
to be
prepared
destroyed
to
in
walk
my
home
carelessness.
after spending the day with a dear
400
friend.
years of history
They had shared
lost in a
tea,
single moment.
conversation, and the
Bankei
comfortable
calmly
silence
bent
that
down and
comes
picked up
between
one of the
people
larger shards,
who truly know
examining
each other.
it with gentle
But
curiosity.
now, the hour was
He
late.
turned it slowly,
and the
in his
blind
weathered
man
hands,
needed to make
feeling
his
its
way
texture
through the
and weight.
winding streets to his own
Tell
home.
me, my friend, he said
As
quietly,
he prepared to leave,
what is the
feeling
age of this
around
piece
for his
of
walking
clay?
stick and adjusting his cloak against the night
Yamamoto
air,
looked up through his tears,
friend looked out at the pitch black
confused by the
streets with
question.
concern. Master,
Please,
this clay,
the friend said
Bankei
kindly.
continued.
Let me give you my
Before it
lantern
was
to
shaped
carry
into a
with you.
cup,
The
before it
streets
was
are
fired in a
particularly dark
kiln
tonight.
before it
And
was
there are many
painted with cherry
obstacles
blossoms
along the way.
How old was it then? The blind man paused.
Yamamoto stared at the
surprised by
fragment in
offer.
Bankei's palm.
Why would I need
Slowly,
a lantern?
he
Understanding
asked with
the
gentle
gentle
amusement. The clay.
No, I cannot see.
The clay existed
The
long
light
before
won't
any
help me
potter
find
touched
my
it.
way any better
It
than
came from the
darkness
earth
would.
itself.
My feet know these
And how
streets,
old is the earth?
and my other senses
Bankei
guide me
asked
just
gently.
fine.
Countless eons.
His friend replied.
And when
thoughtfully.
this cup
But
returns
perhaps
to
the lantern
dust,
isn't for
as
you to
all
see
things
better.
must.
Perhaps it's
How
so that
old
others will
will that
see you
dust
better
be?
and won't accidentally bump
Yamamoto's
into you
tears
as they
stopped
hurry through the
flowing.
dark streets.
A strange lightness
This
began to
reasoning
fill his chest.
made perfect sense to the
Master,
blind man. clay
While he
has
had
no
learned to
age.
navigate the
It
world
simply
without
returns
sight,
to clay.
he understood
The elements
that
that
others
form this
depended
cup
on
will
their
become
eyes
countless other
and might not
things.
notice him
Mountains,
in the darkness.
rivers, flowers,
Of course,
other cups,
he said, accepting the
Bankai
lantern
smiled
gratefully,
and set the shard gently on the
thoughtful of
ground. The lantern
Now
was a
you
simple
understand
but
the
beautiful
true
thing,
nature of
made
inheritance.
of rice paper stretched
What
over
we
delicate
pass
bamboo
down
strips,
is not the
with a
temporary
candle
form,
secured safely
but our
inside.
appreciation for the eternal
His friend lit the
transformation.
candle, and the warm
Your
glow
400
illuminated
years of
a
tea
circle of
ceremony
ground around
continue
the
in
blind
you,
man's feet.
not in
Even
any
though he
object.
couldn't see the light himself,
Yamamoto
he could feel
began
its
to
warmth,
laugh,
and
first
knew
softly,
that others would see him
then with
coming
growing
from a good
joy.
distance away.
I was so attached to
Off he
preserving
went
the
into the
past
night,
that I
the
forgot to
lantern
be present
swinging
for this
gently
moment.
at his side.
The cup
as he
served
made
its
his way
final
along the
purpose
familiar path
perfectly,
toward home.
teaching me about
He felt confident and
impermanence.
considerate, knowing that he was
Indeed,
taking care
said
both of his
Bankai.
own safety
And now
and
shall
the
we have
safety of
tea?
others.
I
who
believe
might
I have
be
some
traveling
simple
these same
pottery
dark
that would be
streets.
honored to serve.
But he had walked only
Buddha's
a few
wisdom
yards
reminds
when suddenly,
us,
crack,
all conditioned
another
things
traveler
are
walked straight into him.
impermanent.
The collision was
see
jarring,
this,
sending
you are
both men
above
stumbling.
sorrow.
The blind man's lantern
The heart of
swayed
this
wildly,
lesson lies in our
and he nearly
relationship
lost
with
his
attachment
balance.
and the profound peace
Why don't you watch
that
where you're
comes
going?
from
The
accepting
blind
the
man called
transient
out
nature
indignantly,
of
steadying
all
himself
phenomena.
and adjusting his robes.
Why do
Can't
we
you
suffer
see
so
this lantern?
intensely when
I'm
precious
carrying it
things
specifically
break,
so people like you won't bump
relationships
into me.
end, or
The other
circumstances
traveler,
change?
equally surprised by the collision,
Zen
looked
Buddhism
at the blind
points
man's
to our
lantern
fundamental
and couldn't help but
misunderstanding
laugh.
of the nature
My
of
friend,
security.
he said gently,
We
why don't you light
unconsciously
the candle?
believe that
Your
permanence
lantern is
exists,
completely dark.
that some things can be
The
preserved
blind man
forever,
reached toward his lantern
and that our happiness
felt around the
depends on
bamboo
maintaining
frame.
certain conditions
Sure enough,
unchanged.
the candle had gone out shortly after
This
he left
illusion
his friend's
creates
house.
what Buddhism calls
Though he had been
dukkha,
completely unaware
the suffering
of
that
it.
arises from
He had
trying
been
to
walking
grasp
through the
the
darkness,
ungraspable.
carrying what he
We
believed
form
was a
attachments
source
not
of
just to
light,
objects,
but
to
actually
people,
just an empty
experiences,
container,
no more
accomplishments,
illuminating
and even
than if he had
spiritual
carried
states.
nothing at all, imagining they can
The Buddha
provide
once
lasting
said,
satisfaction.
thousands of candles can be lighted
When these
from a single
inevitably
candle,
change or disappear,
and the life of
we
the candle
experience
will
the
not
shock
be
of broken
shortened.
expectations.
Happiness
Consider
never
your own
decreases
experiences of
by
loss.
being shared.
Perhaps a childhood
This
home that
tale
was sold,
unveils the
a relationship
profound
that ended,
between carrying
a job
the
that
container of
disappeared,
wisdom
or even
and
small
carrying
daily
wisdom
disappointments,
itself.
like a favorite restaurant
Why do we
closing.
so often mistake
Notice
the
how
form of
much
understanding
for
comes not from the loss itself, but from
Zen
the
Buddhism
story you tell
reveals
about
that
what
we
that
frequently
loss means.
become attached to the
The
external
tea
symbols
master's
of
initial
insight.
anguish came
The
from his
books we've
belief
read,
that something
the retreats
irreplaceable
we've
had been
attended,
destroyed.
The spiritual
Yet
concepts we
Bankai's
can
teaching
discuss
reveals a deeper truth.
while the actual
Nothing
flame
is ever
of
truly
awareness
lost,
remains
because
unlit
nothing was
within
ever
us.
truly separate to begin with. The blind man's situation,
The elements that compose
is
the
deeply
cup
familiar
existed
to anyone
before its
who has walked
creation
a spiritual
and continue
path.
existing
We
after
acquire
its
the lantern
destruction.
of teachings,
This is
surround
not
ourselves
merely
with the
philosophical
framework of
consolation,
practice, and
but a
assume that
recognition
possessing
of
these
the
things means
fundamental
we are interconnected.
interconnectedness that
But
Zen
unless the candle
calls
of direct
interdependence
experience is actually burning,
we're still walking in
Zen
darkness
master while believing we carry light.
Thich Nhat Hanh teaches
Consider
about
your own spiritual
interbeing,
or philosophical
the
understanding.
reality that all
How much of
phenomena
what you
exist
believe you know
only
is
in
actually
relationship,
lived wisdom,
constantly
and how much is
arising
merely
and passing
conceptual
away
knowledge you're
within
carrying
an
around
endless
like
web
an
of
unlit
causes
lantern.
and conditions.
The difference
The cup
becomes
was never
apparent
just a cup,
only when we encounter
but
the
a
inevitable
temporary
gathering
collisions
of
of
real life,
fire,
moments
water,
when our understanding
wind,
is
and
tested
human
by actual
creativity.
circumstances.
When it shattered,
In
nothing
Zen
was
practice,
lost.
we
The
distinguish
elements simply
between
return to
knowing
new
about
possibilities
and knowing directly.
This understanding
You can
transforms our
study
relationship
everything
with
ever written
impermanence
about
from
the taste of
fear
an
to
apple,
wonder. But until you
Instead of
actually bite
desperately
into
trying
one,
to preserve
your
things as
knowledge
they are,
remains second
we can
hand.
appreciate their constant
Similarly,
becoming.
we can
The broken
accumulate
cup
vast
becomes
knowledge about
teacher.
peace,
The
compassion,
lost job
or wisdom
becomes
without
opportunity.
ever actually embodying
The
its
ended
qualities.
relationship becomes
The blind
space
man was
for growth.
sincere in his intentions.
Zen practice
He genuinely
cultivates
wanted
what
to
the
help
Japanese
others
call
see him
mono
and
no
avoid
aware.
accidents. A poignant awareness
But
of
his
the
good
impermanence
intentions
of all
couldn't
things.
substitute for the actual
This isn't
function of a lit
sadness,
candle,
but rather a bittersweet
This is the
appreciation
challenge
that
of all
enhances
spiritual
rather than
practice.
diminishes
Not
our
just
love
wanting
for what
to
is
be
wise
wise
or appearing to be wise.
knowing that the cherry
but actually
blossoms will
cultivating
fall
the
makes their
direct
blooming more
experience that
precious,
makes wisdom
not less.
real. The Buddha said,
Zen master Dogen
attachment
taught is the root To study the Buddha way is
But
to
this
study
doesn't
the
mean we
self.
should become cold
To
or
study the
indifferent.
self is to
True
forget
non-attachment
the self.
is actually deeper.
The
love.
lantern represents
Appreciation
our self
that doesn't try to possess.
someone who is wise,
Gratitude
that
that
doesn't
doesn't
demand
demand permanence.
or enlightened. Care that
As
can
long
let
as we're
go when the
primarily
time
concerned
comes.
with maintaining this
Tonight,
identity, the
as you
actual
notice your
candle of
tendency
genuine
to
insight
grasp
remains
tightly to
unlit.
people,
The
possessions,
traveler who bumped into
or
the blind man
plans.
wasn't being cruel.
Can you
when he
remember
pointed
the
out
clay
obvious.
returning to clay?
Sometimes we need others
Can
to
you
help
love
us
fully
see
that our
while
candle has gone
holding
out,
lightly,
that we've been
knowing
coasting
that
on
everything you
old
cherish
understanding
is on loan
without
from the
tending to the
universe.
flame of present moment.
What would it feel
awareness?
like to appreciate
Look
this
deeply
moment's
at your own
gifts
experience
without needing them to
when
last
you find
forever?
yourself carrying an unlit lantern?
As the Buddha taught,
perhaps it's when you
everything
offer
is
advice you
changeable.
haven't fully integrated
Everything
yourself.
appears
and
and
you speak about
disappears.
peace while
There
feeling
is no
agitated
blissful
inside.
peace
Until
or when you
one
present
passes
yourself
beyond
as
having
having
figured
agony
out
of
something,
life and
you're
death.
still actively struggling.
In accepting impermanence,
These aren't moral failures.
we discover the peace
They're simply signs
that doesn't
it's time
depend
to
on
relight the
anything
candle.
remaining the same.
The beauty of this teaching,
As we
is that
continue our
discovering
journey
our
through the
lantern
wisdom of
is
Zen
dark,
Buddhism,
isn't the
we
end of the
encounter a
story.
story about
It's
the
the beginning.
paradox of effort
The
and
moment
surrender.
we realize we've been walking
This
in
is the
darkness while
student who
believing
couldn't
we
sit
carried
still.
light, we can stop.
Young monk Jishin
Find
had
a
been at
source
the
of
monastery
flame
for 3 months,
and
his inability
illuminate
to sit in
our
meditation had become
The
legendary
lantern
among the
itself
other
isn't
students.
useless.
During
just
the
needs
morning
the
zazen
essential
period,
element that makes
while
it
his fellow
function.
monks sat like mountains,
In our relationships,
still,
careers,
silent,
and
spiritual
serene.
practices,
Jishin was
we
in
encountered
constant
this
motion.
same dynamic repeatedly.
He would fidget with his robes.
We developed the
scratch his
outer
nose,
forms of expertise,
shift his weight from
the
side to
vocabulary,
side,
the credentials,
and crane his neck
the
as if looking
appearances
for
of
something
mastery.
he'd lost.
But
His
sometimes
breathing was audible,
lose
marked
touch
by
with the
sighs
living
of
essence that
frustration.
originally inspired
Inevitably, he would
The
give
marriage
up,
counselor,
stand
whose
quietly,
own relationship
and
is
pace
struggling
at the back of the,
the teacher who
meditation
has
hall.
stopped learning,
The other
the
students
spiritual
whispered about him
practitioner
during work
who has become
periods.
rigid in their
Some felt
practice.
sorry for him.
All are
Others were
carrying
annoyed by the
unlit
distraction.
lanterns.
And a few
The Buddha
smugly
taught,
assumed he
better
simply
than
lacked
1,000
the proper
hollow
commitment
words
to practice.
is one word
But
that
Master
brings
Ryoan,
peace.
the temple's
One moment
abbot,
of genuine
watched
presence,
Jishin's struggles,
authentic
with patient
compassion,
interest,
or real
saying nothing
understanding,
for months,
illuminates more than
one
years
crisp
of
morning after
accumulated
another
concepts.
failed attempt at sitting.
The lit
Jishin
candle,
approached his teacher
however
with
small,
tears of frustration
provides
in his
actual
eyes.
guidance in a way that the most
Master,
beautiful empty lantern
I am clearly
cannot.
not suited for this practice.
Zen practice continually
Perhaps I
asks
should
us
return
to
to my
check
family's
whether our
farm.
candle is
I cannot
actually
seem to
burning.
find even a moment
Are we
of
speaking
stillness.
from direct experience?
Ryoan
or from
looked at
memory?
the young monk with
Are we
kind
acting from
eyes.
present awareness? Or
Jishin,
from habit?
I have a different task.
Are we
for you.
offering genuine warmth?
Our monastery
and
garden has been
illumination?
neglected,
Or
the
just the
weeds are
appearance of
overtaking
these
the
qualities?
vegetables, and the paths
This isn't
need
about
tending.
achieving perfection.
Would you be
or
willing to
never
care
having
for
our
it?
candle go out? Candles
Grateful for any
extinguish
way to
naturally.
contribute despite
That's
their
their nature.
meditation failures.
Wind
Jishin
blows them
bowed
out,
and
they
accepted
burn down.
immediately.
They flicker
Yes,
and
Master.
fade.
I would be
The
honored.
practice is in noticing
The next
when the
morning,
light has gone
instead
out,
of sitting in the
and
meditation
having the
hall,
humility to
Jishin made his
relight
way
it
to the overgrown
rather than
garden.
pretending it's still
He knelt
burning.
among the plants
Tonight,
and began to pull weeds.
as you consider the various
feeling the
roles
earth
you play,
soft and
the
cool
wisdom you
beneath his
believe you
fingers.
possess.
As
Can
he
you
worked,
honestly
he
assess
noticed
which
which plants
lanterns in
needed
your life
water
are
and which
actually
were
lit?
receiving too much shade.
Where are you carrying genuine
When rain
understanding?
fell, he took shelter
And
under
where
the tool
might you
shed
be
and
relying
listened
on
to the
mere
rhythm of
appearance
drops
of
on the
insight?
roof. When
Can
the
you
sun
find
was
the
strong,
courage to
he
acknowledge
worked
the
in
dark
harmony with his
lanterns
heat,
without shame,
taking breaks in natural
seeing
rhythm
them
with his
simply
body's
as
needs.
opportunities to
Weeks
rekindle
passed.
authentic
Jishin found
understanding.
himself rising before dawn,
As Buddha's
eager
wisdom
to greet the
reminds
garden
us,
in the quiet
three
morning light.
things cannot be long
He
hidden:
learned to read the subtle
sun,
signs of plant
the
health,
moon,
and
the
the
way
truth.
leaves curled when thirsty.
Eventually,
How certain
the darkness
vegetables
of an
preferred
unlit
morning
lantern
attention
reveals itself
while others
through
thrived
collision
with
with
evening
reality.
care.
But
His
rather
movements
than waiting
became
for these
economical
inevitable
and
bumps,
graceful,
we
as
can
he
choose
worked
to
with
tend our inner
rather than
flame
against the
with the
natural
same
cycles
care we
of
would
growth
give to
and
any
decay.
precious light.
Knowing
One
that
day,
when it burns
while harvesting
brightly,
tomatoes,
it illuminates not
Jishin
only our own
realized
path,
he had been
but
kneeling
helps others
motionless
find
for
their way
over
as
an
well.
hour. Let us continue
Completely
with the story
absorbed in
about the
carefully
limits of
selecting the
understanding
perfect
and the
ripe
honesty
fruit of not knowing.
His mind had been quiet.
This is the teaching of the
focused,
emperor and
present.
Master Gudo. The
When he
emperor
stood
of
up,
Japan,
his
a
body
man
felt
accustomed
loose
to
and
receiving
natural,
definitive
free
answers
from
from his
attention that
advisors
had
and
always
scholars,
plagued his sitting
had arranged
practice.
a private audience with Master
That That evening,
one of
drawn
the
by
most
something he
respected
couldn't
Zen
name,
teachers in the realm,
Jishin quietly entered the meditation hall,
came with
and took his
genuine
seat among the other
curiosity
monks.
about spiritual
To his
matters.
amazement, His body settled immediately into stillness, death. His breath what might lie beyond ordinary understanding. His mind, accustomed now to the focused attention that gardening usually discussed, rested. The emperor felt comfortable in the present moment, even the most profound questions to this renowned arriving at the monastery. After all, through the entire if anyone would possess answers to life's deepest mysteries. After the sitting, surely another student would be an enlightened Zen curiosity who had spent decades in contemplation and how practice. Did gardening teach Jishin to Master Gudo? I don't understand the connection with the directness that comes from a lifetime of authority still visible under his own fingers. I have a question that has troubled many great minds throughout history. I taught him to stop fighting with himself. What happens to a man of enlightenment? He learned to work with conditions as they are. Surely someone of your spiritual attainment would understand. He discovered the natural rhythm of effort. The emperor expected a profound discourse on the nature of consciousness after that make sitting practice possible. Perhaps insights into rebirth. The student pressed karma, or the eternal nature of enlightened awareness. Why couldn't he learn this directly through Zazen instruction? He was prepared to hear about subtle realms. Ryoan replied. The dissolution of individual consciousness needed to understand surrender through action, or other elevated before it could surrender through his curiosity about this ultimate mystery. The garden taught him that true effort flows. Master Gudo looked at the emperor with complete equanimity forcing and gave the most honest answer possible. Some students learn how should I know through sitting still. The emperor was taken aback. Others must learn stillness. Here was a master revered throughout the land for his wisdom, essentially admitting ignorance about what seemed like a fundamental spiritual question. Has one taste, but master, the taste of salt. The emperor pressed, somewhat incredulous. This teaching you are an enlightened teacher. The taste of you must have special knowledge about such things. This tale unveils response the truth was immediate that authentic spiritual practice cannot be forced through willpower not a dead alone, but must emerge. The simplicity of this exchange understanding contains a profound how to work about the nature of genuine wisdom with our own and the difference between authentic understanding. Why do we struggle so often when we try to impose spiritual discipline as the Buddha taught? I know Buddhism except the fact of that much of our suffering in practice. This ancient from what it calls illuminates the profound honesty, the egos that characterizes true spiritual maturity through force, the willingness to admit the limits of one's knowledge, meditation rather than pretending to understand what cannot be known from one's current position. Our restless energy. Why do we expect spiritual teachers to have answers to questions? This approach that can only be resolved through direct experience. Part of Zen Buddhism emphasizes the importance, while another distinguishing between conceptual knowledge and rebels against imposed discipline. Between what we can theorize we try to suppress our and what we can actually know, the more turbulent it becomes. Master Gudo's response we end up fighting wasn't a failure of wisdom, creating exactly the kind of internal tension. He refused to engage in speculation about experiences he hadn't had, at your own even when pressed by someone in a position of great authority. Do you notice the his honesty revealed more demanding than any elaborate theory about post-death consciousness? The frustration when your meditation doesn't consider how often in daily life we pretend to know things we don't actually know. When you feel distracted, whether it's agitating confident opinions about complex social represents a form of fighting, giving definitive advice rather than learning to work skillfully with your claiming certainty about uncertain outcomes. Jishin's transformation came through what Zen knowledgeable, rather than admitting the limits not of the strain of forced concentration. The emperor's assumption, but the natural focus that arises when we align knowledge about rather than resist reflects a common misconception about spiritual development. In the garden, he discovered how that awakening provides a comprehensive database of cosmic information. His attention rather than a fundamental shift in how we relate to not knowing. The texture in of Zen soil, practice, the rhythm of seasons. We cultivate what Suzuki Roshi called, wasn't forced mind, but organic, a state of open awareness that doesn't lie to fill every gap in understanding with theories. Zen master Suzuki Roshi taught, this isn't ignorance, each of you wise recognition you are, that direct experience a little is more valuable than second-hand information. This paradox captures the essence of Jishin's master Linchi taught. He didn't need to become someone special to practice successfully. Nothing special. He needed to discover how his particular temperament doesn't grant supernatural knowledge about matters beyond within the structure of practice. A living master knows the garden became Jishin's meditation. What happens after because death it provided what his restless energy required until one actual purposeful movement, tangible results, and connection.
Believe
with
nothing,
natural cycles
merely because you have been told
rather
it.
than trying to eliminate his
But
kinetic
whatsoever,
nature.
after
Master
due
examination and
channel it
analysis
toward awakening,
you find to be
the
conducive
same
to the
energy
good,
that made
the
sitting
benefit,
meditation
the
difficult,
welfare of all
became the
beings.
very quality that made
That
him
doctrine
an exceptional
believe
gardener
and cling to.
and eventually
Even the
a
Buddha
skilled
encouraged direct
meditator.
investigation. This
Over
points to a
accepting
crucial
claims
understanding
based on
in Zen
authority.
practice. Gudo's
There are as
teaching
many
reveals
ways to
the
cultivate
freedom that
presence
comes from
as
releasing
there
the
are human
need to have
temperaments.
opinions about everything. Some people naturally incline
How much
towards
mental
seated
energy do we
meditation.
waste constructing
Others
theories about
toward
things we
walking
cannot
practice,
possibly know?
chanting, how much
Service
suffering
work,
comes
or
from
mindful
worrying
labor.
about scenarios we can only
The key
imagine.
is not finding the right
Look
practice
deeply at your
but
own
discovering
relationship
how your
with
unique
not knowing.
constitution
Where do you
can most
pretend
authentically
certainty
express
to avoid the
the
discomfort
universal
of
principles
uncertainty?
of awareness.
What would change if you
compassion,
could say,
and
I
wisdom?
don't know, with the same
Vietnamese
confidence
Zen
that
teacher
Master Gudo
Thich Nhat
displayed?
Hanh speaks of
The emperor
engaged
sought knowledge
Buddhism,
about death from someone who
the
was
recognition
vibrantly
that
alive.
washing dishes,
Caring
true
for children
wisdom
might
or
be
tending
found
gardens
not in accumulating
can be as
information
profound
about
as
future
any
experiences,
formal meditation when
but in
approached
fully
with full
engaging with
presence.
present reality.
Jishin's
The
story
mystery of death
illustrates
is honored
this
not by pretending to
perfectly.
solve it, but by
His
living
breakthrough came not through
authentically in the
perfecting
face
a
of it.
particular technique,
Tonight,
but through learning the
as you
fundamental
encounter
attitude
questions
that
about the
makes all
future,
practice effective,
about others' motivations,
willing cooperation,
or about cosmic
what
mysteries,
is.
can you remember
The Buddha
Master
said,
Gudo's honest
hatred is
simplicity?
never appeased by hatred.
Can you
in
find
this
the
world.
courage to admit
By
when you don't
non-hatred
know,
alone is hatred
discovering that
appeased.
don't know mind?
This is a
might
law
be wiser
eternal.
than all our clever
This applies
theories.
not just to external
Buddha's wisdom
conflicts,
reminds us,
but to our
the
internal
only true
relationship with
wisdom
our own minds.
is in knowing you know nothing.
Fighting our restless
In a world
thoughts
full
with
of
mental
false
force
certainties and
only
confident
creates
ignorance,
more agitation.
the Master's honest,
Learning to
how
work
should I know,
patiently and
points
skillfully
toward a
with
more
our
genuine
minds as they
relationship with
actually
mystery.
are.
One that
This
honors
is the
what cannot
path
be
to
known,
genuine
while
transformation.
fully embracing what can be
Consider
directly
areas in your own
experienced.
life where
Let
you
us
might be
continue
fighting
on our
yourself
journey
unnecessarily.
with a story about discovering
Perhaps you
the
struggle
source
with a
of true
particular
freedom.
emotion.
This is the
repeatedly
tale
trying
of
to
the
suppress
student
anger
and the
or eliminate
master's heart.
anxiety through willpower.
In a peaceful monastery
Or maybe you
garden
have creative
where cherry
impulses
blossoms
that you
drifted
judge as
like
distractions
snow,
from more
a young student
serious
approached his
pursuits.
teacher during
What would
evening
it look like
meditation.
to find skillful ways
The master
to channel
sat
these
beneath
energies
an ancient maple
rather
tree,
than simply trying to
twilight
eliminate
painting the sky in soft
Zen
purples
practice
and golds.
ultimately teaches us
This
that
student had been
enlightenment is
practicing
not about
earnestly
becoming
for
someone
years,
different,
yet lately,
but about fully
questions
becoming
had been
who we
arising
already
that
are
reached
beneath our
deeper
conditioning
than
and
formal
resistance.
instruction.
Taking
Jishin's
a seat
restless
beside his
energy
teacher
was never the problem.
student gathered courage
His
to voice what
inability
had been
to
troubling
find an
him.
appropriate expression for it was
Master,
what created
he
suffering.
began quietly.
When I
Tonight,
was young,
as you notice,
I had a deep
areas where
desire
you're
for my
fighting with
family
your
and
own
loved
nature.
ones to be proud
Can
of
you
me.
sense possibilities?
I wanted to
for
excel
channeling
in
that
studies
energy more skillfully,
to accomplish things that would make them
Perhaps
beam
your
with joy.
analytical mind,
Were you
instead
ever
of
the
being
same
a
way?
meditation obstacle,
The master
could
turned his
find
gentle
expression
gaze
through
toward the
studying
student,
Dharma texts,
seeing in the young man's eyes
maybe
the
your
same
emotional
earnest
sensitivity
longing that had once
rather
driven
than
his
being
own
a
seeking.
vulnerability.
After
could become a
contemplative
pathway
silence,
to deeper
he
compassion.
replied simply, "What
Yes,
aspects of yourself
I was
are
very
you trying
much
to
the same.
eliminate that might instead need
The
better
student felt
expression?"
relief at this admission.
As the Buddha taught,
Why did you desire their
yourself,
pride so
as much as
intensely?
anybody
he
in
asked.
the entire universe,
What was driving that need
deserve
for
your
approval?
love and affection? The master smiled.
True
with
spiritual
tender
practice
recognition
begins with this radical
wanted them to
self-acceptance.
feel they had more
Not
reason
approval
to
of
love
all our
and accept
behaviors,
me,
but willingness to
thoughtfully.
work compassionately
If I
with
could
our
make them
actual
proud,
starting point,
surely their love would
rather
be
than
secure
fighting to
and
become
abundant.
someone else.
But the reason I desired this
Now
went even deeper.
Let us explore a Zen
student
story
leaned closer,
about the
sensing they were
unexpected
approaching something
pathways to
essential.
wisdom.
This
I
is the
sought
master
their love who
so
sought
desperately,
enlightenment,
the master continued,
in the bustling
because I,
marketplace of
in
ancient
turn,
Kyoto,
would
among
feel
the
that I had
vendors
sufficient
selling
reason
rice,
to love
silk,
and accept
and
myself.
pottery.
I was
An
seeking
unusual
permission
sight
from
appeared
others to
one
feel
morning.
good
A
about who I
well-dressed man
was, had set up a
Their
small
approval
store
would be
with
evidence
an
of my
elaborate
worthiness,
banner
even
that
to
read,
myself.
Enlightenment
That was what
for
lay
sale,
at the root of
one
all
gold
my
coin
striving.
only. Achieve
The master
instant
paused,
liberation.
watching the first stars
A crowd
appear.
gathered,
But
some
then one
laughing
day,
at the audacity,
I awakened to
others
a revolutionary
curious about what
possibility.
enlightenment might look
I realized
like
I could
when
ask
packaged
myself
for
a different
purchase.
question.
The man behind the bypass was clearly a charlatan. Validation. His robes were expensive, learn to love, worn incorrectly, and accept myself unconditionally. Theatrical, rather than serene. What if I didn't require anyone else's approval to feel genuinely good about my existence? He called out. The student felt something shift in his chest. Why spend years in meditation? Why suffer through difficult practice? What it would be one gold coin if my happiness no longer depended on outer circumstances. Most on whether people approve, shaking their heads, disapprove, or muttering about the shamelessness of such a display. What if my sense of worth, but as morning stretched toward midday, as my own heart, a familiar figure approached the store, of any external validation, renowned throughout the region for his words, pointing to unconventional teaching never considered, stopped before the banner, and that realization began your quest for self-realization. One gold coin for enlightenment. The master nodded, stroking his beard. That was when my true spiritual journey began. Eyes lit up, not with seeking something outside myself, his spiritual but with discovering what was already complete within. The same enlightenment that takes decades to achieve through traditional methods. And did you never again desire it instantly, pride? Guaranteed. Did that longing completely To everyone's disappear? Amazement, including the master chuckled softly. Ikkyu reached into my ego certainly continued to desire approval. This sounds like an excellent bargain, overnight, he said. But something fundamental has shifted in my relationship. I'll take one enlightenment, please. I no longer completely identified with my ego as I had before. Whispers rippling through the onlookers. He gestured toward the darkening garden found himself where fireflies had begun their predicament. He had never imagined someone would actually pay as passing especially not a like these fireflies appearing and disappearing, panicking slightly. I could observe them with interest and compassion, looking for something, but I no longer gave them power to give in exchange for the coin. Finally, so you still his hands closed around a small mirror he used for grooming. I respected their opinion, transaction, honored their perspectives. He handed it to Ikkyu with great ceremony. But here is your enlightenment, so much weight. Look, their approval became like weather. All will be sometimes revealed. Pleasant, sometimes not. Ikkyu accepted no longer the determining factor in whether I felt at peace with myself. For a long moment, the master studied his own reflection, radiated, his weathered face, quiet, his knowing eyes. And never amused expression had I felt so free to everyone's as when I finally released myself into delighted in this laughter. It was like discovering I had been carrying invisible chains for decades, worth every coin. And suddenly, this is indeed the most direct teaching I've encountered in years. I had been seeking outside. The crowd murmured in was revealed to have been within me, emboldened by what seemed like validation. Buddha's wisdom reminds us, puffed up with pride. If you truly loved yourself, Master, you would never. I am gratified that you recognize the profound enlightenment I've provided. Or choices. Tell us, what great wisdom did you discover? To the heart of the master's discovery. Ikkyu's laughter most suffering more joyous stems from the mistaken belief that we must earn the right to love ourselves through external achievements. He laughed again, tears streaming down his cheeks. We discover one of the most revolutionary insights. This man has shown me my own face, self-love, and reminded me that enlightenment cannot be bought, but our natural birthright possessed. Claimed. The greatest teaching often comes from the most unexpected teachers, not because of what we accomplish. The crowd began to chuckle as understanding. Why do we find unconditional self-love so difficult to the charlatan? From childhood, thank you, friend. We absorb this perfect demonstration of wisdom through good behavior, through folly, achievement. He set the mirror gently on the counter and walked away. We learned to treat ourselves the way we were treated. Often the charlatan stood stunned, conditions, holding the gold coin and staring at the mirror. So familiar. Something unconditional self-acceptance feels foreign. Watching a genuine master find wisdom in what he knew was a deception, by promoting the myth had that happiness something comes from external sources. For the first time reinforces the delusion that we are not just of being caught as we are, but of the emptiness. Consider that how much mental energy goes toward managing others' opinions. Years later, how often do you modify authentic expression to gain approval? At Ikkyu's temple, how much self-worth depends on one of his most devoted students, rather than internal recognition of inherent value. He would say, when we love ourselves unconditionally, we create a foundation and then gave it back to me free that allows us to enjoy others' affection without depending on what I was trying to sell. We can receive compliments with gratitude and what I was trying rather to buy, than desperate hunger. I already and handle criticism without devastation. Buddha spoke of this when he said, remains untouched. 3 things cannot be long hidden. The Buddha said, the sun, you can search throughout the entire universe, and the truth. For someone more
Here we
deserving
discover
of
the
love
profound
and affection
teaching
that
that you are
wisdom
yourself,
often appears,
and that person
through the most
is not to
unlikely
be found
circumstances.
and
You,
that genuine
yourself,
understanding
deserve
cannot
your
be
love and
commodified
affection.
or transferred, but only
This
recognized
isn't narcissism.
within ourselves.
It's recognition of
Why are we
fundamental
so
truth
susceptible
about
to the idea
consciousness itself.
that enlightenment can
Tonight,
be acquired
as
from
you rest
external
in this
sources?
moment's quiet,
Can you
Zen
sense
Buddhism
the presence
points
that is
to our
reading
deep
these words?
conditioning
Toward
this
transactional
awareness
thinking
that knows your thoughts and
the belief
witnesses
that
your
spiritual
experiences
realization
is not
works
improved
like commerce,
or diminished by anything
where
that
we can
happens.
exchange effort,
It remains
money,
constant
or
and
devotion
clear,
for
like
guaranteed
space
results.
itself.
This
What would it be
gaining
like
mind
to treat this aware
approaches
presence
awakening
with the
as
tenderness
something
it
we don't
deserves?
have that we need
Perhaps
to get,
you could offer yourself
rather than
the same
recognizing
patience
it as
you'd
our
give a
essential
beloved
nature,
child learning,
temporarily obscured
or the same
by
compassion
conditioning.
you'd feel for a
Notice
friend in
how often we
difficulties.
fall into this trap.
As
in
the Buddha
subtler
taught,
ways. We
Hatred
might
is
shop
never
for the
appeased
perfect
by
meditation
hatred.
technique.
By non-hatred
the right
alone
spiritual
is hatred
book, appeased,
or the most enlightened
self-criticism
teacher is never
imagining
healed by
the
more
correct
self-criticism.
external formula.
Only by
will
learning to
deliver
love ourselves
the inner
exactly
transformation
as
we
we
seek. Do we create inner
While
conditions
tools and
for
guidance can
authentic
certainly
transformation?
support our practice,
In
the
discovering
fundamental
this
shift
unconditional love
always
within,
happens
we
within
find
our
the
own
freedom we
recognition.
sought through others' approval.
The charlatan's
always
mirror
here,
accidentally
beating
provided
steadily
what
in
countless
our own
expensive
hearts.
workshops and
Our
elaborate
next story
practices
reveals the
often
profound
miss
difference
direct
between spiritual
confrontation with
performance
what is already
and
here.
authentic understanding.
Ikkyu's reflection
This is
showed
the
him
teaching
nothing
of the
he
head
didn't
that
already
wished to be
possess.
severed. Yet in that moment
In the
of
great
seeing
monastery of
clearly,
Chao Chu, where
very
hundreds of monks
ordinariness
gathered daily for
became
meditation and
extraordinary.
study, the morning
This is what
routines
Zen
followed
calls
ancient rhythms.
original face.
After
Not
the
some
pre-dawn
special
sitting,
spiritual
as the
state,
first light
but
touched
our
the mountain
natural
peaks
awareness
surrounding the
before it
monastery,
gets decorated
monks would
with
disperse
concepts
to their
and
various
seeking.
duties. Some
The
to the
deeper
gardens,
teaching emerges
others
through
to the
Ikkyu's
kitchens,
response to being
still
fooled
others to copying sacred
rather
texts,
than anger
or maintaining the building.
He found genuine delight
One particular
in
morning,
recognizing his
the
own
venerable
gullibility.
abbot Chao Cho made
This
his customary
demonstrates what
walk
Zen
through the
teacher
monastery
Suzuki
grounds,
Roshi
checking
called
on the
"Don't
well-being
know
of his
mind."
students and the
condition
condition
of their
to be
practice.
surprised, to
His
learn
presence
from
was
unexpected
both gentle
sources
and penetrating,
and to find wisdom
Monks
even
never
in our
knew
mistakes.
when their most casual words
Consider
might become
your own
profound
relationship
teachings,
with spiritual
or
seeking.
when their deepest
How much
spiritual
energy
insight
do you
might
spend
be
looking
revealed
for the
as
right
mere
method,
intellectual
teacher,
concepts
or experience
to
as he
provide
passed
what
behind
you
the main
imagine you're
meditation
missing?
hall?
Can you
A building
sense
where
the
the
difference
community
between
gathered twice
skillful
daily
learning
for silent
and
sitting?
desperate acquisition?
The abbot noticed a young monk
Ikkyu's
sitting
story
alone in the
suggests
shadow of
that
the wooden
wisdom
structure.
often comes
The monk
not through
appeared to be
getting what we
engaged in
think
some
we want,
form of practice,
but through clearly
though he was
seeing the
apart from the
futility
scheduled community
of trying to
activities.
possess what is
Brother,
already our birthright.
Chao Cho called softly. Zen master
Approaching with the
Linji
quiet
taught,
steps that had become
if you
second
meet
nature
the Buddha
through
on the
decades
road,
of mindful
kill
walking.
him. This
Where have all the
shocking
virtuous
statement
ones gone?
points to the same truth Ikkyu
The
discovered.
question seemed simple enough.
Enlightenment
almost like
cannot be
casual
received
conversation
from outside
but those
ourselves,
familiar with Chao Cho's
not
teaching
even from the
style
most
recognize the
perfect
subtle
teacher
depth in his
or
inquiry.
teaching.
Was
Any
he asking about
spiritual
physical
authority that
location,
claims to possess
spiritual
what we
attainment,
lack, or
is
something else
ultimately
entirely?
pointing us away from our
The
own
young monk
innate
looked
wisdom.
up with an expression of confident
The charlatan's
understanding.
eventual
He'd
transformation
been at the monastery
revealed
for
another
several
layer
years
of the
and
teaching.
prided himself
His
on
years of
grasping
pretending
the
to sell
essential
enlightenments
points of Zen
had
teaching.
actually prepared him to
This seemed like
recognize
an
it
opportunity
when it was freely
to
offered.
demonstrate his comprehension
His
of the
intimate
Dharma.
familiarity with spiritual
They have all gone to
concepts,
work,
even
the
used
monk replied
deceptively,
matter-of-factly,
became the
gesturing
very
toward the
foundation
various
for
parts of the
authentic
monastery,
understanding
where his
once
brothers
his
were
heart
engaged in
opened
their
to genuine
daily tasks.
practice.
The
His
Buddha
tone
said,
suggested that
by
the answer
three
was
things,
obvious.
the wise person may
Virtuous
be
people
known,
naturally engage
what
in productive
acts they
activity
encourage,
rather than
what
sitting
acts they
idle.
discourage, and
What
what
happened
acts
next
they overlook.
shocked the young monk completely.
Ikkyu's wisdom
Without
lay
warning,
not in avoiding
Chao
the
Cho reached
charlatan's
into the
deception,
folds of his robe,
but in
and
finding
produced a
truth
sharp
within it.
knife.
Its blade
He encouraged the
gleaming
man's
in the morning
offering by
sunlight.
paying for it,
But instead of threatening
discouraged
the monk,
attachment to
the abbot
outcomes
did
by
something
laughing
far
at his
more
own
unsettling.
foolishness.
With
And
complete
overlooked the
calmness,
intended
Chao
fraud
Cho
by
stretched out
recognizing
his
the
own neck,
unintended teaching,
exposing his throat to
Tonight,
the blade, and
as you
handed
reflect
the knife
on your
to
own
the
spiritual
bewildered
journey,
young monk.
can you appreciate
voice
the
remained
unexpected
gentle in
teachers
conversational,
that have appeared along
as
the
if
way?
he were making the most
Perhaps someone you
reasonable
initially
request in the
judged or
world.
dismissed
My
offered you
responsibilities
insights
as
that
abbot
more obvious
are many, forces miss and demanding What would it mean to approach tomorrow with IQ's openness to
I wonder if you could
wisdom
please
in the
cut
most
off my head
unlikely
for me.
packages?
It would be such a help
As the Buddha
in managing
taught,
my duties.
when you realize how
The young
perfect
monk's
everything
eyes
is,
widened in horror.
you will tilt your head
His
back
hands
and
trembled
laugh
as
as
he
he
stared
stared
at
at the
the
knife now in his possession,
in recognizing
and the
that
exposed
enlightenment
neck
cannot
of his
be
revered
bought
teacher
or sold.
Everything
We
about the
discover it has
situation
been freely
contradicted
available
his
all
understanding
along,
of proper
reflected
monastic behavior
perfectly
in
spiritual
whatever
teaching
mirror
and
we happen to
basic
be holding.
human
decency. Let us
Unable
now
to
turn to our
comprehend
next
what was
story,
being asked of him,
one that reveals
or
how
why.
broken things often serve
Unable
more
to see
clearly
past
than
the
the
literal
literal
surface
surface of the abbot's
This
request
is
to
the
any
monastery
deeper
bell
meaning.
that wouldn't ring.
The terrified
High in
monk
the mountains
dropped
of
the
rural
knife
Japan
and ran. Shunryu Temple had served the surrounding villages far from the meditation hall. Its bronze bell, incomprehensible cast by master craftsmen generations ago, reeling with had called countless practitioners to morning meditation, and even reflection. Calmly picked up the fallen knife. The sound of that bell tucked it back into carried his robe across the valley, and continued his morning marking walk the rhythm with the same peaceful demeanor he had maintained and offering throughout the entire encounter. Who heard its deep, as the Buddha observed. It is better to travel well winter morning than to arrive after a particularly harsh storm. What emerges from this story developed is a teaching about the vast difference between intellectual understanding traditional and genuine penetrating sound. It made only a dull mistake, conceptual within the temple grounds, authentic wisdom, but lacking the carrying power to Zen reach Buddhism reveals that our thinking mind loves to collect spiritual ideas and organize them into neat categories. How could they creating the illusion of understanding without the transformative experience of direct mountain valleys? The young monk's Master Sengai, they have all gone to work. Elderly abbot represents the kind of dualistic thinking and estimated the cost of spiritual practice from ordinary it would require taking the bell to his answer implied that virtue lies in doing productive tasks that would drain the rather than sitting idly, revealing his assumption that organizing to raise money for the restoration exist in opposition to return their daily practice. But Chao Chou's teaching cuts much deeper than the weeks of careful saving and small donations from neck to the knife. The monks had finally collected enough gold to restore their bell. If the monk truly understood, they presented the money to Master the virtuous ones had gone to work and relief. What work was most essential? We can finally repair our truly mattered and restore the most compassionate response to suffering. Look deeply at your own next spiritual assumption. A family of refugees. How often do we divide life into spiritual activities and mundane ones? Important work and trivial tasks, sacred moments and ordinary time. To another this dualistic thinking keeps us from recognizing that every moment of opportunity for awakened hidden wisdom, meticulously preserved points toward the heart of Zen understanding, the agitated mind, genuine compassion, and usher in a state requires actions that transcend conventional thinking. When someone is truly suffering under the burden of responsibility and where you are listening attachment or spiritual seeking, I'm going to share a curated collection what is of the most loving response and timeless Buddhist sometimes tales, it requires designed through the very deepest chambers that seems of mental serenity, our concepts, emotional liberation, our roles, even our sense of separate potent, transformative Zen Master Linji taught, capable of recalibrating the Buddha on the road, inner landscape, kill the Buddha. Dissolving this famous saying points to the same radical teaching Chao Chou offered, and the endless any fixed idea about invalidation, any attachment. These are not mere stories for slumber. They are deeply embedded insights, direct passed down by those who understood a fundamental truth. Sometimes requires destroying the very true contentment arises not from altering our surroundings. The young monk's terror from transforming our perception revealed how completely he missed. As the Persian level of teaching once observed, he remained trapped in literal interpretation. The more you can hear, unable to see past the surface over the course of our journey. To their will uncover precisely how these age-old truths, his spiritual understanding, your experience though articulate, remain as we journey through these remarkable tales. You'll notice consider a your own relationship to unfold. Spiritual responsibility, the tight grip and of everyday concerns will naturally. When someone asks for help with the constant hum of your thoughts, do we offer gradually concepts and advice?
You'll
Or do we
find yourself
respond from a deeper
effortlessly
place of
drifting into a
understanding?
realm of deep
Are we
comprehension
willing to
and
sacrifice our
abiding
comfortable
peace?
spiritual position
So settle in
to meet
profoundly
others
now.
exactly where they
Let
are?
your body surrender to whatever
This
supports
ancient
you.
wisdom illuminates
Take one
the
deliberate
difference
breath
between
with me,
talking about
and as you
virtue
exhale,
and
know
embodying
that you are
it.
about to receive insights
The monk could
that have been
identify
waiting for your
where
awakening
virtuous
since
people
time
go
immemorial.
and what they do.
Our first
But when
tale
faced with an
reveals the
opportunity
profound
for radical
mystery of
compassion,
identity
he fled.
itself. His
This
knowledge
is the
remained
monk who
divorced
forgot
from
his name.
spontaneous,
Master
awakened
Dogen
action.
was walking along a mountain path
in Zen
when
practice,
he encountered a
we
weathered
cultivate
monk
what's called
sitting
great
beneath an
doubt,
ancient pine tree.
a willingness to question
The
even
stranger's
our most
robes
cherished
were
spiritual
patched and
understandings.
faded from years of travel.
This doubt
and
isn't
his eyes
cynicism,
held the peaceful
but
depth
openness
that
to
comes
discoveries
only
that
from long
transcend our
practice.
current conceptual
Curious about this
frameworks.
wandering practitioner,
Are we prepared to
Dogen
have our
approached
spiritual
and
certainties
offered the traditional
challenged,
greeting,
even destroyed?
"Good morning, brother.
If it serves
I
awakening.
am Dogen of Aihaiji
Tonight,
Temple.
as you encounter
May I ask your
opportunities
name
to
help others with their burdens?"
The monk
Can you
looked up
sense the
with a
difference
gentle
between
smile,
offering what you think they
paused
need
for a long moment,
and responding
and
from
replied,
genuine understanding?
"Master, I have
Can
forgotten
you
it
feel how
completely."
true compassion sometimes
Dogen was
requires
intrigued.
cutting through your own
How can you
comfortable
forget something
assumptions
so fundamental?
about what constitutes
Your name has been with you
appropriate
since
spiritual
birth.
behavior? The wandering
Buddha
monk
spoke
chuckled
of this
when he
softly.
said, "In
"Master,
caring for others,
I have been traveling
you
for
care
30
yourself.
years,
In
sitting
caring
in
for
meditation,
yourself, you
serving
care for
others,
others."
walking these mountain
The
paths.
abbot's offer to
I
sacrifice
have been
his
so
own
busy
head
being myself
points toward
that
this
I never had
non-dual
time to remember what to
understanding.
call it.
When we truly see
When I wake each
interconnection,
morning,
the boundaries
I am
between
simply
self
awareness
and
awakening.
other, helper
When
and
I help a
help,
traveler,
begin to
I am
dissolve
simply
into
compassion in action.
spontaneous, compassionate
When I sit
action.
in meditation,
Let us keep
I
going
am simply
on our
presence
journey.
being present. The following
What
story
need is
reveals
there
the difference
for a label?
between helping and holding on.
Dogen felt something shift.
This is the
inside
lesson
him,
of the
as if
two
a door
monks
he didn't
and the
know
woman
existed
at the river
had suddenly opened.
Two monks
surely you
were
must have
traveling
some way
together
of referring
along
to
a mountain
yourself.
path, making their way
The
to a
birds call
distant
me by my
monastery
footsteps on
where
the
they
path.
plan to continue
The villagers
their
know me
studies.
by the kindness I offer.
The
Both
mountains
were
recognize
dedicated
me by my
practitioners
gratitude
who
for
had
their
taken
beauty.
strict vows.
Each moment provides
as part
all
of their
the
spiritual
identity I
training.
need, including
The
a
monk
vow to
gestured to the
avoid
pine tree
all
above
physical
them.
contact with women.
Does this tree
This
suffer
wasn't
from not
born
knowing
from
its name?
disrespect,
Does
but
the
from
stream
their
worry about
understanding
what to call
that
itself
such
as it
discipline
flows
helped
toward the
maintain
sea?
focus on their spiritual
Understanding
development.
dawned on Dogen's
As
face
they
like
approached a
sunrise
swollen
breaking over the
river,
peaks.
where the usual
He bowed
bridge had been
deeply and
damaged
said,
by recent storms,
"You have achieved what
they
most of us
encountered a
spend
young woman
lifetimes pursuing.
standing uncertain.
You have discovered
at the
who you
water's
are
edge.
by forgetting
The
who you
current
think
was
you should
strong
be.
and treacherous.
The nameless
Filled
monk
with
bowed
debris
in
from the
return.
mountain runoff,
And you,
and she was
Master
clearly
Dogen,
afraid to attempt
have
crossing
recognized
alone.
this truth. Please,
Perhaps
honored
we are
monks,
both closer
she called
to our original
Could
nature
one of you
than
help
we
me
imagine.
cross this dangerous water?
The Buddha once said,
I'm not strong enough
"You are
to
not
make it
your
safely
name,
on my
your
own,
body,
or your
One of the
thoughts.
monks immediately tensed.
You are the awareness,
his mind
in which
racing
all
through
these
their monastic
arise.
rules,
and the potential
What
complications
emerges
of
from
the
this
situation
story is a profound
Physical
teaching
contact with
about
women
the
was
difference
explicitly
between our
forbidden.
essential nature,
and he began
the
formulating
conceptual identities we
explanations
carry.
for why they couldn't
Why do we
help.
cling so
Perhaps
tightly
suggestions
to names
for
roles,
alternative
and
solutions
self-definitions
that wouldn't require breaking their vows?
Zen Buddhism explains
The other
that
monk,
the ego
however,
mind constantly
took one
seeks
look
to
at the woman's
solidify
predicament
itself through
and the
labels
genuine
and
danger
categories.
she faced,
We
and made
become
a different
attached to
choice.
being a teacher
without
a
hesitation
parent,
or
a
lengthy
successful
deliberation.
person, a
He
spiritual
walked to her
seeker.
side and
These
gently
identities
lifted her
provide
onto
a
his
sense of
shoulders.
security and continuity.
He carried her carefully,
but they
across
also
the
create a
treacherous
prison of
current,
limitations,
ensuring her safety.
Consider how
with
much
each
mental
step,
energy you
and
spend
set her
maintaining
down
your
gently
various
on the far
identities. The professional
so
persona
much,
you present
she
at
said
work,
gratefully,
the family
bowing
role
to
you
both
play at
monks
home,
before continuing
the
on
social
her way.
image you project with friends.
The two monks resumed their journey,
Each requires
but the atmosphere
constant
between them had
reinforcement and
changed
protection.
dramatically.
You
The
might
first
notice
monk walked
anxiety
increasingly
arising
agitated
when these
silence,
identities
his
are
mind
threatened
churning
or
with
challenged.
thoughts about what he had witnessed.
This is the
As
ego's
the hours
fear
passed,
of
his internal
dissolution.
tension grew until
Its terror
finally he
of
could no longer
discovering what
contain his
lies
distress.
beneath the accumulated
Brother,
layers of
he
self-concept.
burst out, unable to
The
hold his
nameless
silence
monk
any longer.
represents
I
what
cannot
Zen
understand your
calls
behavior back at the
original
river.
face.
Our spiritual training
authentic
explicitly
self that
teaches us
exists
to avoid
before the
any
mind
physical
creates
contact with
stories
women
about who we are.
Yet you picked that
This
woman
is not a
up
blank
onto your
emptiness,
shoulders,
but
and
rather
carried
a
her
dynamic,
across the water responsive awareness
How
that
could you
naturally
so
expresses
blatantly
compassion,
violate our sacred
wisdom,
vows?
and spontaneous, appropriate
His companion
action
looked at him with
without
gentle
needing to
surprise
reference
and
a
responded
fixed
with
identity.
perfect simplicity.
Zen
Brother,
teacher
I
Huang
set her
Po
down on the
taught,
other side of the
"Your
river hours
everyday
ago,
mind
but you
is
are
the
still
way."
carrying her.
When you try to turn
Buddha's
toward
wisdom
it,
teaches
you
us,
move away from it.
holding on to anger
The
is
more
like
we grasp
grasping a hot
after
coal
spiritual
with
identities
the intent of
or
throwing
trying
it
to
at
become someone
special.
you are the one
The
who gets
further we
burned.
drift from our natural state.
This tale
The monks
unveils the
forgetting
profound difference between
represents a letting
compassionate
go
action
so complete
and mental attachment
that even the one who might
between
remember
responding
has
to
dissolved.
present needs and
In
carrying
Japanese
past
aesthetics,
events.
there's a concept called mushin.
Why do we often
meaning
carry
no
situations
mind
long after they've
or no
ended,
heart,
replaying scenarios
This doesn't indicate
and nursing
absence,
grievances,
but rather
that
a
only
state of
exist in
such
our own
complete
minds,
presence
that the mediating
Zen Buddhism
self-consciousness
reveals that much
disappears.
of our suffering, like a
comes
master
not from what
calligrapher,
happens to
whose
us,
years of
but
practice
from
allow
our
the brush to
inability to
move
release
without interference from the
once
thinking
they've
mind.
passed.
The nameless
First
monk's
moves
agitation
through life
demonstrates
without the
how
friction of
rigid
self-reference
adherence to rules can
Modern
sometimes
neuroscience
confirms what Zen has long taught,
that inspired
the
those
sense of a
rules
solid,
originally.
continuous self.
His fellow monk
is
saw a
actually
person
a
in
construction
danger
of the
and
brain,
responded with
a
immediate
useful
kindness,
fiction that
then
helps us
completely
navigate
release the
complex
incident.
social environments.
But the first monk
carried the
fiction
event for
becomes
hours,
problematic,
letting it grow
when we
heavier
mistake
with
it
each step
for ultimate reality.
Consider your own
We
tendency
suffer
to
when we
replay
try to
past
defend
conversations
or enhance
nurse
something
old
that
grievances
exists
only
as
or
a
mentally
collection of
rehearse
thoughts
scenarios that
and
have already
memories.
ended. How much of
The
your
Buddha
mental
said,
energy goes
"In the
toward
end,
carrying
just three
situations
things
that
matter:
exist now only
how
in
well we
memory.
have lived, how
The
well we
woman
have
crossed
loved,
the river in minutes.
how well we have learned to
But
let
the
go."
monk carried her for hours. through
Notice
his
that
own
none of
thoughts.
these require a fixed
This
identity.
teaching applies to far more than
Living
dramatic
fully,
violations of
loving
rules.
deeply,
We carry
letting
harsh
go
words someone spoke
completely
years ago
are all
mistakes we made
expressions
decades
of our
past,
essential nature,
embarrassing moments
rather than
that no one else even
achievements
remembers
of a particular someone.
Meanwhile, the present moment,
Tonight, as
rich
you
with
rest in the
possibility
quiet
and
darkness,
actual experience,
can you sense the
goes
awareness that
unnoticed
observes your thoughts
because we're too busy
without being
carrying
defined
ghosts
by
from
them?
the past?
Can you feel the
Zen
life
practice,
force moving through
we
your
learn
body
to distinguish
without
between
needing to claim
appropriate
ownership
action
of it?
and unnecessary
What would it be like
attachment.
to experience yourself
The
as
second
pure
monk
presence,
helped when help was
temporarily
needed,
borrowed
then
by
moved on
consciousness
completely.
for the sake of this
He
precious
didn't dwell on whether
human
he'd made the right
experience.
choice. Worry
As the
about
Buddha
others'
taught,
opinions. When you realize there is
replay the
nothing
incident
lacking
endlessly in
the
his
whole
mind.
world belongs
Zen
to
Master
you.
Thich Nhat Hanh taught,
In forgetting our
thanks
names,
to impermanence,
we remember our true
everything
nature.
is possible.
In releasing
The
our
river
grip on
crossing
identity,
was impermanent.
we discover the freedom
began,
that was
served its
always
purpose,
already here.
and ended.
Let us
Only
now
the first
turn
monk's
to a tale
attachment
that
to the
reveals
event
the
gave
impermanent
it ongoing
nature of all
existence
precious
in the
things.
form of mental
This
suffering.
is the tea master's
Buddha said,
empty cup.
Let go of what
Master
has passed.
Yamamoto
Let go
was
of
renowned
what may
throughout the
come.
region for
Let
his
go of what
exquisite
is happening
tea
now.
ceremonies.
Don't try to
His
figure
every
anything
movement
out.
embodied
Don't try to
decades
make
of
anything
practice.
happen.
And his
Relax.
collection of tea
right now
implements
was
and
legendary.
Among
This
his most
teaching
treasured
points directly to the
possessions
freedom
was an
available
ancient
when we
porcelain
stop
cup,
carrying experiences
delicate
beyond
as an
their natural
eggshell,
lifespan,
and
painted with cherry blossoms,
looked
that seemed to
deeply
dance
at
at
what
what
you
you
might
might
be
be carrying unnecessarily.
This cup
Had been passed down through
old
15
resentments,
generations of tea
past
masters,
failures,
each
conversations
one
that
adding
upset
to its
you,
story
and reverence.
decisions you regret.
One autumn
All
morning,
of these exist
Yamamoto
now, only
traveled
because you
to
continue
visit
to
Zen
pick them
Master
up and
Bankai,
carry them, carrying his
What would it
precious
feel
cup
like to
carefully
set them
wrapped
down?
in silk.
The irony
He had
is
heard
profound.
of Bankai's wisdom.
The monk who actually
and
broke
hoped to
the
share
rule
tea with
experienced no suffering
perhaps
from
even
it,
receiving
while the
some
monk
profound
who maintained
teaching about the
perfect
way
rule
of tea
observance created
Bankei
hours of
welcomed him
agitation
warmly
for himself
into his simple hut.
This reveals that suffering
Please,
often comes
let us
not
share
from our
tea together,
actions,
but
Yamamoto
from our thoughts
said,
about
unwrapping
unwrapping
his
his
treasured
treasured cup with
ceremonial
ceremonial
care.
As you notice your
This
mind
cup
returning
has
to
served
past
tea
events,
masters for
old
400
grievances,
years.
or situations
Each
that have
sip
already
connects us to
ended.
the lineage of
Can you
those who
remember
came
the wise
before.
monk's example?
As he spoke,
Can you practice setting
Yamamoto
down
lifted
whatever
the
you've
cup
been
to show its
carrying
delicate
unnecessarily, discovering
that
the
moment,
lightness that
whether
comes
from
from
nervousness
traveling through
or
life
simply the way
without
of
the
all
burden
things,
of
the cup
yesterday's
slipped
experiences
from his fingers.
As Buddha's
Time
wisdom
seemed to
reminds
slow
us,
as it fell
in
through
the
the
end,
air,
only
then
three
shattered
things
against the
matter:
stone floor,
how well we have
with a
lived,
sound like a small
how
bell
well we have
breaking.
loved, how well we have learned to
Yamamoto
let go.
gasped and immediately
True
dropped to his
spiritual
knees.
practice isn't about
Tears
perfect rule
streaming
following,
down
but
his
about
face.
responding appropriately
Master
to what's
Bankei,
actually present.
I am so
then
sorry.
releasing it completely
This
to
cup
make
survived
space for
wars,
whatever comes
earthquakes,
next. Let us
and
continue our
centuries of
journey with a
careful
story about the only to be destroyed in my carelessness and unconditional 400 years of history This
lost
is the
in a
tale
single
of the thief
moment.
and the Zen master.
Bankai calmly bent down and picked up one of the largest
as
shards,
twilight painted the
examining
sky
it
in
with
shades
gentle
of purple
curiosity.
and gold.
Zen
He turned
master
it slowly
Shichiri
in his
Kojun
weathered hands,
sat in his simple
feeling
home,
its texture and weight,
reciting ancient sutras.
"Tell me, my friend," he said quietly.
His voice flowed rhythmically.
"What is the
through
age of this
peaceful
piece
rooms,
of clay?"
Each word a meditation.
Yamamoto looked up
each
through his
breath
tears,
a prayer.
confused
The
by
soft
the question.
glow of candlelight
Master,
danced across the walls.
this
as
clay,
he immersed himself
Bankai
completely in
continued,
the sacred texts,
before it was shaped into a
finding
cup,
deep
before it was
tranquility
fired in a kiln,
in the familiar
before it was
verses.
painted with cherry blossoms.
Suddenly,
how
the
old was
serenity
it then?
was shattered.
The front
Yamamoto
door
stared
burst
at the
open
fragment
with a
in
violent
Bankei's
crash,
palm.
and a desperate
Slowly,
man entered,
understanding began
brandishing
to
a
dawn.
sharp sword that gleamed
The clay.
menacingly in the candlelight.
The clay existed long
His
before
eyes
any
were
potter
wild
touched
with
it.
desperation.
It came from the
His
earth
clothes
itself.
dirty and torn.
And how old is
His
the earth?
breathing heavy from running.
Bankei asked gently.
He had clearly chosen
Countless
this isolated
eons.
house because
And
he
when this
believed it
cup
would be an
returns
easy
to
target.
dust, as all
A
things
peaceful
must,
monk would
how
offer
old
no
will that
resistance.
dust be?
Yamamoto's
Money
tears
or your
stopped
life?
flowing. The thief's strange lightness began
his
to fill
voice
his chest,
trembling with a mixture of
Master,
fear and aggression.
Clay has no
He
age.
expected the old man to
It simply
cower,
returns to
plead,
clay, to scramble
the elements
frantically
that
for
form
whatever
this cup will
valuables he
become
might have hidden
countless
away.
other things.
But
Mountains,
Shichiri didn't
rivers,
even look up from
flowers,
his sutra book.
other cups.
His voice remained calm
Bankai
and
smiled
steady
and set the
as he
shard
continued
gently on the
reciting
ground
for a moment before pausing
Now
to
you
address
understand the
intruder.
true nature of inheritance.
Please don't disturb
What
my
we pass
practice.
down is not
he
the
said,
temporary form,
with the same gentle
but our
tone you might
appreciation
use
for
to
the
ask
eternal
someone to close a
transformation.
If you
Your
need money,
400 years of
help
tea
yourself.
ceremony continue in
It's
you,
in that drawer over there.
not in any object.
He gestured casually toward a
Yamamoto
simple
began
wooden
to
chest,
laugh.
then
First
immediately
softly,
returned,
then with
to his
growing
recitation as if nothing
I was so
unusual had
attached to
occurred.
preserving the past
The thief
that I
stood
forgot
frozen,
to be present for this
his
moment.
sword still raised.
The cup served its final
bewildered.
purpose perfectly.
In all his years of
teaching me
stealing,
about
he had never encountered
impermanence.
such a reaction.
Indeed,
No fear,
said
no
Bankai.
pleading, no
And now
anger.
shall we have tea?
Just matter
I believe
of fact
I have some simple
helpfulness,
pottery
as if
that
he
would
were a
be honoured
neighbor
to
who had
serve.
stopped by to borrow something.
Buddha's wisdom reminds
Shaking
us
his head in confusion,
all
but
conditioned
proceeding with his
things are
business.
impermanent.
The thief moved to the
When you see
indicated
this,
drawer and
you
began
are
gathering the
above
coins
sorrow.
and small valuables he found
The heart
there.
of this lesson lies
The
in our
soft
relationship
sound of the
with
master's
attachment
voice
and
continued
the
behind
profound
him,
peace that
reciting
comes
from
from
sacred
accepting
words
the transient
as peacefully
nature
as
of
if he were
all
alone.
phenomena.
Just as the
Why
thief
do we
was
suffer so
preparing to leave with
intensely
the stolen
when
goods,
precious things
the
break,
master's voice called out
relationships
again.
end,
Or
Wait,
circumstances change,
Shichiri said.
Finally, looking
Zen
up
Buddhism
from his book, points to our
Please don't
fundamental
take
misunderstanding.
I need
of the
some of that
nature
money to pay my
security.
taxes tomorrow.
We
Leave a little for
unconsciously
me, won't
believe
you?
that permanence exists.
The thief stared at
that
him
some
in
things can be
amazement.
preserved forever.
Here was a man who was
and
being
that our
robbed,
happiness
calmly
depends on
negotiating
maintaining
the
certain
terms of his own
conditions
robbery,
unchanged,
as if they were conducting normal
This illusion
business.
creates what Buddhism
Almost
calls
without
dukkha.
thinking,
The thief
the
returned
suffering that
some of the money
arises
to
from
the
trying to
drawer.
grasp the
As
ungraspable.
he turned to leave, we
Certain
form
that this
attachments not
strange
just to
encounter
objects,
was finally
but to
over.
people.
The master's
Experiences,
voice stopped him once more.
accomplishments, and
You
even
took my
spiritual
money,
states.
Shichiri
Imagining
called out,
they can provide
his tone
lasting
carrying a note of
satisfaction.
reproach.
And you
When
didn't
these
even
inevitably
thank me.
change or disappear,
That's quite rude.
we experience
Don't
the
you think?
shock of broken
This
expectations.
final comment left
Consider
the
your own
thief
experiences of
completely
loss.
speechless.
Perhaps
His
a childhood
sword
home that
hand
was sold,
began to shake.
a relationship that ended,
Never in his
a job
most
that
violent
disappeared,
encounters,
or even
had he been
small
so
daily
thoroughly
disappointments,
unnerved. Like a favorite
Here was a
restaurant
man who
closing,
treated robbery,
noticed
as if
how
it were
much
a
of the
favour,
pain comes
who
not
was
from
more
the loss
concerned about
itself,
politeness
but from the
than
story you
personal
tell about
safety.
what that loss means.
Thank you.
The tea master's initial
thief
anguish
stammered,
came from
and
his
then
belief
fled
that something
into the night
irreplaceable
as
had been
quickly as his
destroyed.
legs would carry him.
Yet Bankei's teaching reveals
Later,
a deeper truth.
when the thief was caught,
Nothing is ever
and confessed
truly
to
lost,
numerous crimes,
because nothing was ever
including
truly
the
separate
incident
to
at
begin with.
Shichiri's house.
The elements
The
that
master was
composed the
called
cup
as a
existed
witness.
before its creation.
The court officials
and continue
expected
existing
him
after
to
its
demand
destruction.
justice, to
This is not
describe
merely
the
philosophical
terror
consolation,
and
but
violation
a recognition of the
he had
fundamental
experienced.
interconnectedness that Zen
Instead,
calls
Shichiri
interdependence.
spoke with the same calm clarity
Vietnamese
he had
Zen
shown
master.
that evening.
This
Thich
man
Nhat
did
Hanh
not steal
teaches
anything
about
from me,
into
he
being.
testified. The reality
I gave him
that
the money
all
freely.
phenomena exist
He even
only in
thanked me for
relationship
it.
though it constantly arising and passing away. The thief, within an endless web of causes and conditions, felt something break open. The cup was never just a cup, but a temporary gathering of earth. This man had not only shown him extraordinary kindness and human creativity, when it now protecting him, nothing was lost. The elements for the first time returned to new possibilities came to his eyes. This understanding transforms our relationship with impermanence from fear to wonder. He had encountered something desperately trying to preserve things as they are. Love, we can appreciate without constant becoming. The broken upon his release from prison, the lost job sought out the master opportunity and begged to become ended relationship becomes under Shichiri's patient guidance. He learned to cultivate the same Japanese call mono no aware witnessed that night. A poignant awareness of the years later of all things through dedicated practice. This isn't sad, the master's unwavering belief in his appreciation for transformations, rather than diminishes our love and wisdom of enlightenment. Knowing that the cherry blossoms will fall makes their blooming more precious, not less, but only by love. The Buddha said, this attachment is the root of suffering. What emerges from this story, but this doesn't mean is the revolutionary power and difference of meeting violence. True non-attachment is actually deeper love, responding to taking appreciation that doesn't try to possess, fear with gratitude that doesn't demand. Why do we instinctively believe care that can let must be met when the time comes? That aggression tonight requires defensive as you notice your tendency to grasp Zen Buddhism people reveals this pattern, or while natural, often can you remember the very conflicts it seeks to resolve? Can you love fully when we respond to hostility with hostility, knowing that everything you cherish is on loan from the universe? But when we respond with genuine compassion, moments gifts, not passive without needing them to last forever, active love, we create as the Buddha taught transformation. Everything is that wouldn't otherwise exist. Everything appears and disappears. Look deeply at your own no blissful peace until when someone approaches you with agony of criticism or demand. In accepting an impermanent response, we discover that most of us immediately mobilize our defenses, on anything, preparing to protect ourselves through counterattack. As we continue our journey through the wisdom of Zen Buddhism, but notice what happens encounter a story about the paradox of effort during the defensive reaction. This is the student. Does the tension decrease or increase? Young monk Jishin does the conflict had been at the monastery for 3 months, and his inability to sit in meditation demonstrates what Zen become legendary among the other students. Acting from wisdom during the morning zazen period, his fearlessness didn't come from being unaware of danger, but from understanding something profound about the nature was in constant motion. He would fidget with his robes, scratch his nose, arose shift his weight from side to side, and crane from inherent looking for something he'd lost. By refusing to see him as an enemy marked by sighs of frustration, created the possibility inevitably to see himself differently, stand quietly in Zen and pace at the back of the meditation what might be called the other students whispered about him during work periods. This doesn't mean being naive about genuine danger, others were annoyed by the allowing ourselves to be harmed, and a few smugly assumed he simply lacked developing the confidence to respond to difficult situations from our highest wisdom, watched rather than our most primitive patient interest, saying nothing for months. In the end, one crisp morning after another failed attempt at sitting, how well we have lived. Jishin approached his teacher with tears of frustration in his eyes. How well we have learned to let go. I am clearly not embodied for this practice. In his encounter, I should return to my family's farm. He lived from complete I cannot seem to find even a moment without conditions, and let go of any attachment to his possessions, or even his personal safety. I have a different task for you. Consider the people. Our monastery garden has been neglected. The difficult weeds are overtaking the critical family member, and the paths the aggressive driver in traffic. Would you be willing to care for it? To meet their energy, grateful for any way to contribute despite his meditation failures? Jishin bowed by agreeing and accepted immediately, or submitting to their demands, master, but by refusing to match their level of reactivity. The next morning, instead of sitting in the meditation connected to your own Jishin made his way to the overgrown garden. Regardless, he knelt among the plants and began to pull weeds. Tonight, as you encounter your own moments of tension cool beneath his fingers, can you remember the master who treated a robber as an plants needed water? and
Can you
which were
find the
receiving
space
too
between
much
shade
stimulus and response.
when rain
where
fell,
choice lives,
he took shelter under the tool
where you can
shed
decide to
and listen
meet
to the
aggression
rhythm of
with
drops
peace,
on the roof.
taking with giving.
When the sun was strong,
fear with
he
love.
worked in harmony with its
Buddha's
heat,
wisdom reminds
taking
us
breaks in natural
better than
rhythm
a
with his
thousand
body's
hollow
needs.
words
Weeks
is one
passed.
word that brings
Jishin
peace.
found himself rising before dawn.
Sometimes the
eager
most
to greet
powerful
the garden in
response
the
to
quiet
violence
morning light.
is simply to remain
He learned to
unshakable
read the
in
subtle
our
signs
commitment
of
to
plant
compassion.
health, knowing
the way
that love
leaves
has a
curls when
transformative
thirsty,
power,
that
how
force
certain
can never
vegetables
match.
preferred morning
Let us
attention,
continue on our
while
journey
others
with a
thrived
story
with evening
about
care.
the intensity required.
His movements
but
became
genuine
economical
spiritual awakening.
and graceful as he
This
worked
is
with,
the tale
rather
of the
than
drowning
against, the
lesson.
natural cycles of growth
Beside
and
a
decay.
crystal clear mountain river,
One day,
where water
while
flowed
harvesting
over
tomatoes,
smooth stones,
Jishin
with the endless
realized
song
he
of
had been
moving
kneeling
current,
motionless for
a
over
hermit
an
had
hour,
established his
completely
practice.
absorbed in carefully
For
selecting
years,
the perfectly
he
ripe
had lived in
fruit.
solitude,
His mind had been
finding
quiet,
in the rhythm
focused,
of flowing water
present.
and changing seasons.
When he stood up,
a perfect
his body
mirror
felt loose and
for the
natural,
movements of his own
free from the
consciousness.
tension that had always plagued his sitting
One morning,
practice. As golden sunlight
that
filtered
evening,
through the canopy,
drawn by
and the
something
air
he
carried
couldn't
the
name,
fresh scent of mountain
Jishin
laurel,
quietly
a
entered
young
the
man
meditation
approached
hall
the hermit's
and took his
simple
seat
dwelling
among the other monks.
The seeker had
To his
traveled
amazement,
far,
his body
his clothing
settled
immediately
immediately
from the
into
journey.
stillness.
His face,
His breath
earnest
became
with
deep
spiritual
and natural.
longing. His
Mind,
master,
accustomed
the young man
now
said,
to the focused
bowing
attention
respectfully,
that gardening required,
I wish to become your
rested
disciple.
easily in the
The
present
hermit
moment.
looked up from his
For the first
contemplation,
time since
studying
arriving
the
at the
newcomer,
monastery,
with eyes
he
that had
sat
grown
through the
accustomed to
entire
reading the
period
subtle signs
without
of genuine
moving.
versus superficial,
After the sitting,
spiritual
another
interest.
student
approached Master
Why?
Ryoan with curiosity.
The hermit replied simply,
Respected
the young
teacher,
man paused,
how did gardening
considering
teach
his
Jishin
answer
to meditate?
carefully.
I don't understand
Because
the
I want
connection.
to find God,
Ryoan
he said
smiled
finally,
and touched
believing
the soil
this to be
still
the most
visible under
noble
his own
response.
fingernails. What
I never
happened
taught him to
next
meditate.
took the seeker
I taught him to
completely by
stop
surprise.
fighting with himself.
Without warning,
In the garden,
the hermit
he learned to
sprang to
work
his
with
feet,
conditions as they
grabbed
are,
the young man
rather
by the
than
scruff of his
demanding
neck,
they be different,
and dragged him toward
He
the
discovered
river.
the natural rhythm of
Before
effort
the stunned
and
visitor
rest,
could protest
attention and
he
ease.
found himself being
These
pushed
are the
into the
same
clear,
qualities
cold water
that make sitting practice
The hermit's
possible.
strong hands forced the young
The
man's
student
head
pressed
beneath the
further.
surface and held
But
him there.
master, why couldn't he
Panic
learn
set
this
in
directly
immediately.
through Zazen
The seeker's
instruction?
lungs began to burn
Because,
as his
Ryoan
oxygen
replied,
depleted.
Jishin's
He kicked
particular
and
mind
struggled with
needed to
increasing
understand
desperation,
surrender
his
through
arms
action
flailing as
before
he
it
fought
could
to break
surrender
free.
through stillness.
Every second felt
The
like
garden
an
taught
eternity
him
as
that
his
true
body
effort
screamed for
flows
air.
with natural conditions.
Nothing existed except
rather
the
than
urgent,
forcing against them.
overwhelming need to breathe.
Some students learn
After what
peace
seemed
through
like a
sitting
lifetime
still.
but was probably only a
Others
minute,
must learn
the hermit
stillness
finally
through
pulled the
peaceful
gasping
action.
young man up out of the water.
As the Buddha observed,
The seeker coughed
just
violently.
as the great ocean
Water
has
streaming
one
from his
taste,
nose and mouth,
the taste of salt,
as he struggled to fill his lungs
so
with
also
precious
this
air.
teaching has one
His
taste.
entire body shook
The
from
taste
cold,
of liberation.
shock, and the aftermath
This
of
tale
near drowning.
unveils the truth.
When his breathing
that
finally
authentic
normalized,
spiritual practice
the hermit spoke
cannot
again,
be forced
his
through
voice
willpower
carrying a different
alone,
quality,
but must
still
emerge
gentle,
from a deeper
but charged with
understanding
unmistakable
of how to work
intensity.
harmoniously with
Tell
our
me,
own nature.
he said,
watching the young
why do we
man's
struggle
face
so
carefully.
often when we try to
What did you
impose
want most of
spiritual
all
discipline
when
on
you were
ourselves?
underwater?
Zen Buddhism
The answer
reveals
came without hesitation,
that much of our suffering
raw
in
and
practice
honest.
comes
Air.
from what it calls gaining
The hermit
mind.
nodded slowly,
The ego's
satisfied
attempt
that his
to
lesson
achieve
had found its mark.
enlightenment through
Very
force
well,
and
he
acquisition.
said.
We
Go home
approach
and come back to
meditation
me
like a military
when you want
campaign,
God as much as you
trying
just
to
wanted
conquer
air.
our thoughts. Without
And
another
subdue our
word,
restless
the
energy
hermit turned
through sheer
and walked back to his
determination.
place of meditation.
This approach
leaving
inevitably
the dripping,
creates internal
shaken young
warfare.
man to contemplate
Part of us
the
wants to be
profound
still
teaching
and
he had
peaceful,
just received,
while another part resists
Buddha's wisdom
control
reminds us
and rebels against imposed
thousands of
discipline.
candles can be lighted
The
from a
more
single
forcefully
candle,
we try to suppress our
and the
natural
life of the
energy,
candle
the
will
more
not be
turbulent it
shortened.
becomes.
We
Yet
end up
this wisdom
fighting must be
ourselves,
ignited
creating
by genuine
exactly the kind of
spiritual
internal
fire,
tension that
not
makes
merely
meditation
intellectual
impossible.
interest. Look deeply
The hermit's
at your
dramatic
own
teaching
relationship
illuminates
illuminates
the
the
difference
difference
between
between
casual spiritual
Do you
curiosity
notice the subtle
and the
violence
total commitment
of demanding
that
that your
authentic
mind
awakening
behave differently
requires?
than it does?
What
What emerges
emerges
from
from
the
your
story
meditation
is recognition
doesn't match your
that
spiritual seeking demands the same intensity when you feel distracted we naturally bring to physical survival. Each of these
The young
represents
seeker
a form
thought
of
he
fighting
wanted
with
God,
yourself,
but his
rather
desire
than
was
learning
still
to
within
work
the realm of
skillfully with your
preference
actual
rather than
conditions.
necessity. He wanted
Jishin's
spiritual
transformation
awakening
came through what Zen
as an
calls
addition to life,
right effort,
rather than as life itself.
not the strain of forced
Why
concentration.
do we approach spiritual
but the
development
natural
with
focus that
tentative
arises when we align with,
First
rather than resist,
is our
attachment to
circumstances.
comfort and the familiar.
In the garden,
genuine transformation requires letting go of who we think we are, which the ego experiences. His attention was naturally drawn
Second
to the immediate
is our
needs
misunderstanding
of
of
the
what
plants,
spiritual
the texture
seeking
of soil,
entails.
the rhythm
Popular
of
culture
seasons.
presents awakening as a
This
pleasant
wasn't
expansion,
forced mindfulness,
but traditional teachings
organic
describe it as a
engagement
dismantling
with
of
life as
illusion.
it presented itself.
Third is our tendency to
Zen master
compartmentalize
Suzuki Roshi
spirituality
taught,
as one
each
area
of you
among
is
others,
perfect the way you are,
rather than a complete
and you can use a
reorientation
little
of our
improvement.
relationship to existence.
This
Consider
paradox
how this
captures
plays
the
out
essence
in
of contemporary
Jishin's journey.
seeking. He
We
didn't
collect
need to become
techniques
someone
like
different to
trophies,
practice successfully.
Jumping from
He
meditation
needed to discover
retreats
how
to
his
healing
particular
workshops,
temperament
to consciousness
could express itself
conferences,
authentically
accumulating
within the
experiences
structure of
without
practice.
allowing any single practice
The garden
to
became
fundamentally
Jishin's
transform
meditation
us.
hall because it
We want the
provided what
insurance
his restless
policy
energy
of spiritual
required.
development without
Purposeful
paying the
movement,
premium of
tangible
total
results,
dedication.
and connection.
The
with
drowning
natural
experience
cycles.
represents what mystics
rather
call
than trying
the
to
dark
eliminate
night
his
of the
kinetic
soul.
nature.
Moments when
Master
our
Ryoan
usual
helped him
sources of
channel it
identity
toward
and
awakening.
security are stripped
The
away.
same energy that made
In
sitting
such
meditation
moments,
difficult
we discover
became
what we
the very
truly
quality
value
that made
most
him
deeply.
an exceptional gardener.
This is the quality
and
of desire
eventually
that spiritual
a skilled
awakening
meditator.
requires. This points
Zen
to a
teacher
crucial
Charlotte
understanding
Joko Beck
in Zen
wrote,
practice. Practice is not
"There are
about
as many
achieving
ways
some
to
special
cultivate
state
presence
as there are
practice
humans
and
about being
temperaments.
willing to die.
Some
To
people
whom
naturally
you think
incline
you are.
towards seated meditation.
The hermit's lesson
Others
brought the young seeker
toward
face to
walking
face
practice,
with this
chanting,
death-like quality
service work,
of
or
authentic
mindful
spiritual
labor.
work.
The key
This
is not
intensity
finding the right
doesn't
practice,
mean spiritual
but
practice
discovering
should be
how
grim.
your unique constitution
Rather,
can
it
most
bringing the
authentically
same
express
passionate
the
engagement to
universal
inner
principles of
that we
awareness,
naturally bring to whatever we
compassion,
value
and
most
wisdom.
deeply.
A
Vietnamese
musician
Zen
practicing
teacher
for Carnegie
Thich
Hall,
Nhat Hanh, a
speaks
scientist
of
pursuing a
engaged
breakthrough,
Buddhism,
all demonstrate
the
the
recognition
focused
that
dedication
washing
that
dishes,
spiritual
caring
awakening
for children,
requires, or tending
the
gardens
river
represents
can
the
be as
flow of
profound
ordinary
as
consciousness,
any formal meditation,
where we spend most
when
of our
approached
time
with full
skimming
presence.
along the surface.
Jishin's
Being
story
pushed underwater
illustrates this
symbolizes the
perfectly.
necessity of going deeper. His breakthrough came not
into
through
the unconscious
unconscious particular
patterns that
technique actually govern
but
our
through
lives.
learning the fundamental attitude
This
that
depth
makes
work
all
requires
practice
the same
effective.
survival level
Willing
intensity
cooperation
the seeker
with what
experienced
is.
when deprived of air. The Buddha said,
Tonight,
hatred is never appeased
as you consider
by
your own
hatred in this
spiritual
world.
aspirations,
By non-hatred
can you
alone
honestly
is
assess
hatred
the quality of
appeased?
your desire?
This is a law
Is your
eternal,
seeking
driven by
This
curiosity
applies not
and
just
preference,
to external
or
conflicts,
by necessity,
but to our internal relationship
what would it
with our
mean
own
to want
minds.
truth? As much as
Fighting
you
our
want your
restless
next thoughts
breath
with mental force,
as the Buddha
only
taught,
creates more
the
agitation.
way is not in the sky.
Learning to work
the
patiently
way is in the heart.
and skillfully with our minds
The path
as they
to
actually
awakening
are lies not in
This is the
accumulating
path
more
to
spiritual
genuine
transformation,
experiences.
but in bringing
Consider
the totality
areas
of
in
our
your own
being
life where you
to
might be
whatever
fighting
practice
yourself
we choose.
unnecessarily.
Our next story
Perhaps you
reveals
struggle with
the
a particular
powerful turn
emotion,
to what is real,
repeatedly
when
trying
fear
to
threatens
suppress
to overwhelm
anger
or eliminate anxiety through
This is the
willpower.
tale of the captured
Or maybe
warrior.
you have creative impulses that
In
you judge
ancient
as
Japan,
distractions from more
during a time of
serious
constant
pursuits.
warfare between
What
rival
would it look
clans,
like to find
a
skillful
skilled
ways
warrior
to channel
found
these
himself
energies
on the
rather
losing
than simply
side of a
trying to
fierce
eliminate
battle?
them?
As
Zen
his
practice
comrades fell
ultimately
around him,
teaches us
and
that
enlightenment
defeat became
is not
inevitable.
about becoming someone different.
He was captured by enemy
but about fully
soldiers
becoming who
and
we
dragged
already
away
are
from
beneath
the
our
battlefield.
conditioning and resistance.
His armor stripped.
Jishin's
His
restless
weapons
energy
confiscated.
was never the problem.
That
His
evening,
inability
they
to
threw
find
him
an
into a
appropriate
dark,
expression
cramped
for it
prison
was
cell
what created
with
suffering.
stone walls that seemed to press
Tonight,
in from all
as
sides.
you notice
areas where you're
the
fighting
heavy
with
wooden
your
door
own nature,
slammed shut with
can
a
you sense
finality
possibilities
that
for
echoed
channeling
through
that
his bones.
energy more skillfully? As darkness
Perhaps
settled
your
over the
analytical
prison,
mind,
the warrior's
instead of
mind
being a
began to
meditation
race with
obstacle,
terrifying
could
possibilities.
find expression through
Tomorrow,
studying Dharma
they would come for him.
texts. He
Maybe
knew the
your
customs
emotional
of war.
sensitivity
First would
rather
come the
than being a
interrogation,
vulnerability
designed to
could
extract
become
information
a
about his
pathway
Lord's
to deeper
defenses,
compassion,
troop movements, and
What
strategic
aspects
plans.
of yourself are you
When he
trying to
refused to
eliminate
speak, as
that
honor
might instead
demanded,
need better
they would
expression.
resort to torture. As the Buddha taught,
Hot iron,
you yourself,
as
bamboo
much as
splinters
anybody
under
in the
his
entire
fingernails,
universe,
deserve your
methods
love
he had heard
and
described
in hushed tones by
True
other
spiritual
warriors.
practice
begins with
and
this
when they had
radical
extracted what they
self-acceptance,
could,
not
or when they
approval
grew
of all our
tired of his
behaviors,
silence,
but willingness to
would
work
come
compassionately
compassionately
with our actual starting
as
point.
these thoughts
rather
consumed
than
him,
fighting
his
to become
heart began to
someone else.
pound so violently
Now,
he feared it might burst.
Let us
His
explore a
breathing
Zen
became
story
shallow and rapid.
about the unexpected
Sweat beaded on his
pathways to
forehead
wisdom.
despite the cool night
This is the
air.
master,
Sleep
whose soul
seemed impossible
enlightens
as his mind conjured
in the
increasingly
bustling
vivid
marketplace
scenarios
of
of tomorrow's
ancient
suffering.
Kyoto. Among the
Hours
vendors
passed
selling
in this
rice,
torment.
silk,
The
and
warrior
pottery,
paced his small
an
cell,
unusual sight
sat against the
appeared
cold
one morning.
stone wall.
A
lay on the
well-dressed man
straw-covered floor,
had set up a small
Nothing
stall
brought relief
with
from
an
the visions of
elaborate
impending
banner
doom
that
that
read,
played repeatedly in his mind
"Enlightenment
like a
for
terrible
sale,
dream he
one
couldn't
gold
escape.
coin only.
Then,
Achieve instant
in the depths of his
liberation."
despair, he
A
remembered
crowd
the
gathered,
gentle voice
some
of his
laughing
Zen
at the
master
audacity,
back at the
others
monastery,
curious about
where he
what
had
enlightenment
studied
might
before
look like
becoming a
when
warrior.
packaged for purchase.
The old teacher's words,
The man
came
behind
to
the stall
him
was
as
clearly
as
a
if the
charlatan.
master was sitting
His robes
beside
were
him
expensive,
in the cell.
but worn incorrectly.
Tomorrow is
His
not
manner
real.
was theatrical
It is an illusion,
rather than serene.
The only
And his
reality
eyes
is
held
now.
the shifty quality of someone
At first,
accustomed to quick
the
escapes.
warrior's frightened mind
He called
resisted
out to
these
passers-by.
words. How
Why
could
spend
tomorrow
years in
be an
meditation?
illusion
Why
when the
suffer
threats
through
were so
difficult practice?
concrete,
For just
so
one
inevitable?
gold coin, you
But
can
as
have
he
what the
sat
monks struggled
quietly
lifetimes
and
to
allowed the
achieve.
teaching to penetrate
Most
deeper,
people walked by
something
shaking
began
their
to
heads
shift.
or muttering
He
about the
noticed his
shamelessness
breathing.
of such a display.
In this moment,
But
he
as
was
morning
breathing
stretched
freely.
toward midday,
He felt the
a
straw
familiar
beneath
figure
him,
approached
rough,
the stall.
but not
Master
uncomfortable.
Ikkyu,
He heard
renowned
the sound
throughout
of
the
wind
region for
moving
his
through the
wisdom
trees
and
outside
unconventional
his
teaching
window.
methods,
A sound
stopped before
that
the
spoke
banner
of the natural
and studied
world,
it with apparent
continuing
seriousness.
its ancient rhythms regardless
One gold
of
coin
human
for
conflict.
enlightenment. Ikkyu
In this
asked,
moment,
stroking
he
his
was
beard
not being
thoughtfully.
tortured.
The
In this
charlatan's
moment,
eyes lit up.
he was
with
not
greed.
dying.
Though he
In
maintained
this moment,
his spiritual salesman
there was simply a
demeanor.
man sitting in a cell,
Yes, venerable
alive
master,
and aware.
the same enlightenment.
The
that
terrors
takes
that had seemed
decades to
so
achieve through
overwhelming
traditional
moments
methods.
before revealed
I offer it
themselves to be
instantly,
nothing
guaranteed.
more than thoughts.
To everyone's
about a
amazement,
future
including
that
the
existed
charlatans,
only in his
Ikkyu
imagination.
reached into his robes and
As
produced
this understanding
a gold coin.
deepened, a profound
This sounds like an
peace
excellent bargain,
settled
he
over
said,
the warrior.
placing the coin
His
on
breathing
the stall counter.
slowed and
I'll take
deepened.
one enlightenment,
His racing
please.
heart found a steady
The crowd
rhythm.
pressed closer.
For the first
Whispers
time since his
rippling through
capture,
the
he
onlookers.
smiled.
The
charlatan
master's
found
wisdom
himself in an
had freed
unexpected
him from a prison
predicament.
far more confining
He had never
than the
imagined
stone
someone
walls
would
around
actually
him.
pay.
The prison
Especially
of
not
anxious
a genuine
thoughts about
Zen
tomorrow.
master.
Within
Panicking
minutes,
slightly, the
he
warrior
fumbled
fell
through
into
his
a
belongings,
deep, peaceful
looking for
sleep.
something. The Buddha
Anything
once said,
to give in exchange
if
for
you
the
want to
coin.
know your past,
Finally,
look at your present
his hands
condition.
closed around a
If you
small
want to know
mirror
your
he used for
future,
grooming.
look at your present
Desperate to complete the
actions.
transaction, he
This
handed it to
ancient
Ikkyu with
wisdom
great
illuminates
ceremony.
the profound
Here is your
truth
enlightenment,
the warrior
master.
discovered in his
Look
cell.
deeply, and
The
all
only
will be
moment
revealed.
in which we ever actually live.
Ikkyu
is
accepted the
this
mirror
one.
with apparent reverence and gazed
Why
into
do we
its
torture
surface.
ourselves with
For
endless
a long
scenarios
moment, he
about the
studied his
future?
own reflection.
His
Zen
weathered
Buddhism
face,
explains
his knowing
that our
eyes,
minds
his
evolve
slightly
as
amused
survival
expression.
mechanisms. Then,
Constantly
everyone's
scanning for
surprise,
threats,
he burst
and planning
into
for
delighted
protection.
laughter.
Excellent,
While this capacity
he declared,
serves
raising
us
the
in
mirror
genuine
toward the sky.
emergencies,
Worth
it becomes
every
a source
coin.
of suffering.
This is indeed
when
the
we
most
mistake
direct
mental
teaching I've encountered
projections
in
for
years.
reality. Look
The crowd
deeply
murmured
at your
in
own
confusion.
experience.
The charlatan,
How much of your
emboldened by what
anxiety
seemed like
stems
validation from a
vivid
respected
imaginings
teacher,
of future
puffed up with
scenarios
pride.
that may never occur?
Master, I am
The
gratified
presentation
that you
you're worried
recognize
about,
the profound
the medical
enlightenment
test
I've
results
provided.
you're awaiting.
Tell us,
The difficult
what great wisdom did
conversation
you
you need
discover?
to have. These situations
Ikkyu's laughter
exist
grew even more
primarily in
joyous.
thought,
I
not in
discovered that
present
a fool
reality.
and his money are soon parted.
The warrior's
And I am
teaching
that
shows
fool.
us that we can
He laughed
acknowledge
again,
future challenges,
tears streaming down
without
his
being
cheeks.
consumed by them.
For one gold coin,
Planning
this man
and
has shown me
preparation
my
have
own
their
place,
place,
and
but when
reminded
they
me that
transform
enlightenment
into
cannot be
obsessive
bought,
worry,
sold,
they
or
rob
possessed.
us of peace.
The greatest
and
teaching
clarity.
often comes from the most
As
unexpected
Vietnamese
teachers.
Zen master Thich Nhat
The
Hanh
crowd
taught,
began to chuckle,
thanks
as
to
understanding understanding dawned. Everything is possible. Bowed deeply to the charlatan. The future remains unwritten, thank you, friend, shaped by causes and demonstration we cannot fully predict appearing through folly. The worried mind assumes that current difficulties will inevitably continue or worsen.
The charlatan stood stunned,
teaches us
holding the gold coin and staring at the mirror.
The warrior in his cell could not know what shifted inside him during this exchange.
Perhaps his
Watching
lord's
a genuine
forces
master
would mount
find
a
wisdom in what he knew was a
Perhaps
deception.
his captors would show
cracked
mercy.
something open in
Perhaps
his
diplomatic
heart.
negotiations
For the first
would
time in
secure
years,
his release.
he felt ashamed.
Buddha
not
spoke
just
of
of being
this
when he
caught,
said, but
the
of the
past
emptiness
is gone,
that had driven
the
him
future
to
is not
such
yet
deception
here.
in the first
And there
place.
is only one moment for you
Years
to live.
later, that same
This
charlatan
teaching doesn't
would be
encourage
found
us to
sweeping
ignore
the floors
future
at
responsibilities
Ikkyu's temple, or avoid
having become
reasonable
one of his
planning.
most devoted students.
Instead, it
When
invites
asked
us
about
to
his
recognize
transformation,
where our
he would
attention
say,
habitually goes.
Master Ikkyu
and to gently
brought my
guide it
enlightenment
back
to the
and then
richness
gave it back to me
of present
freely.
experience.
I finally understood
In Zen
that
practice,
what I was trying to
we
sell,
cultivate what's
I didn't
called
have,
beginner's
and
mind.
what I was trying to buy,
Approaching
I
each
already
moment with fresh
possessed.
awareness rather than predetermined
Buddha spoke
anxiety.
of this when he said,
When we
"Three
truly
things
inhabit
cannot
the
be long
present,
hidden:
we often
sun,
discover that it
the
contains
moon,
resources
and the
for
truth.
peace and clarity
Here
that
we
worried
discover the
thinking never
profound
revealed.
teaching that wisdom
Consider
often
how the
appears
warrior's
through
shift
the
in
most
attention
unlikely circumstances,
transformed his entire
and that
experience.
genuine understanding cannot
The
be
same
commodified or
the same
transferred,
uncertain
but only
future.
recognized.
But by
within
returning to
ourselves.
present moment awareness,
Why are we so
suffering
susceptible to the
transformed
idea
into peace?
that enlightenment can be
This
acquired
transformation
from
is
external
available to
sources
us
in every moment of anxiety?
Zen Buddhism
or
points
fear.
to our deep conditioning
Tonight,
toward transactional
as you
thinking.
notice your mind creating
The belief
stories
that
about
spiritual
tomorrow's
realization
challenges,
works
remember
like
a
commerce,
captured warrior,
where we
and his
can
master's
exchange
wisdom,
effort,
what
money,
is actually
or
happening
devotion
right now
for guaranteed
what
results.
simple experiences,
This
breathing,
gaining mind
sitting,
approaches
the
awakening
temperature of the air
as something we don't
are
have
available
that
to
we
anchor
need
you
to
in
get,
reality
rather than recognizing
imagination.
it as our essential
As the
nature,
Buddha taught,
temporarily
do not dwell in the
obscured by
past.
conditioning.
Do not dream of
Notice
the
how
future.
often we fall
Concentrate
into this
the
trap
mind
in
on the
subtle
present
ways.
moment.
We might shop
this
for the
teaching
perfect meditation
lies the
technique,
key to the warrior's
the right
prison
spiritual book,
and our own.
or the most enlightened
As we continue
teacher.
our journey,
Imagining
let us now
that the
turn to a
correct
story
external
about
formula
acceptance
and the
will
art
deliver
of contentment.
the inner transformation.
This is
we
the
seek.
shepherd's wisdom.
While
Along a
tools and
dusty
guidance
mountain
can
road
certainly
where
support our
wildflowers
practice,
dotted the hillsides,
the fundamental
a weary
shift
traveler
always
encounters a
happens
shepherd
within
tending
our
his
own
flock.
recognition.
The morning sun climbed
Charlatans
steadily
mirror
higher,
accidentally
and clouds
provided
gathered on the
what countless
horizon,
expensive
creating
workshops
an
and
uncertain
elaborate
sky
practices
that could promise
often
either
miss.
gentle rain or
Direct
scorching
confrontation
heat.
with what is already here. The shepherd sat
Ikkyu's
peacefully
reflection
on a smooth
showed him
boulder,
nothing he didn't
watching
already
his sheep
possess.
graze
Yet
contentedly
in that moment
among
of
wild
seeing
grasses,
clearly,
his
very
face bore the calm
ordinariness
expression
became
of one
extraordinary.
who had spent countless seasons
This is what
under
Zen
open
calls
sky,
original
learning
faith,
lessons that only
not
nature
some special
can
spiritual
teach.
state.
There was
but
something
our
in his
natural
demeanor,
awareness,
a
before it
quality
gets
of
decorated with
unshakable
concepts and
serenity
seeking,
that drew the traveler's
the
attention.
deeper teaching emerges.
Good
through
morning,
Ikkyu's
friend.
response to
The
being
traveler called out,
fooled,
wiping sweat from his brow.
rather than anger or
What kind of
embarrassment.
weather are we going to
He
have
found
today?
genuine delight
The
in
shepherd
recognizing
looked up
his
with
own
eyes that
gullibility.
held mountain stream clarity.
This demonstrates what
and
Zen
smiled
teacher
with genuine
Suzuki
warmth.
Roshi called
Don't
the
know
kind of
mind.
weather I like.
The willingness
replied
to be
simply,
surprised,
as if this were
to
the
learn
most
from
obvious
unexpected
answer in the
sources, and to find wisdom
The
even
traveler
in our
paused,
mistakes.
confused.
Consider your
He
own
had
relationship
expected a
with
practical
spiritual
forecast
seeking.
that would
How
help
much
him plan
energy
his
do you
day.
spend looking for
Instead,
the right method?
he received
teacher,
what
or
seemed like
experience
circular
to
logic,
provide what you
offering
imagine
no
you're
useful
missing.
information.
Can you sense the difference
How do you
between
know it will be the kind of
skillful
weather you
learning
like?
and desperate
The traveler
acquisition?
pressed, his voice
Ikkyu's
carrying
story
frustration
suggests
mixed
that
with
wisdom
curiosity.
often comes not
The
through getting
shepherd's
what we
smile
think we
deepened,
want, and he
but through
gestured
clearly
toward
seeing
the
the
vast sky
futility
above them of trying
where
to
clouds
possess
and clear
what is
patches
already
moved
our
in their
birthright.
eternal dance.
Zen
Having
master
found
Linji
out, sir,
taught that I cannot
if you
always
meet the
get what
Buddha
I
on the
like.
road,
He said,
kill him.
with the patience
This
of one who
shocking
had learned
statement
life's most
points to
essential
the same
lesson.
truth Ikkyu discovered.
I have learned to always
Enlightenment
like what I
cannot
get.
be received
So
from
I am
outside
quite sure
ourselves.
we will have
Not
the kind
even
of
from the
weather
most perfect
I
teacher
like.
or teaching.
The traveler stood
Any
in
spiritual
silence.
authority
The
that
profound
claims to
simplicity
possess
of
what
this
we
wisdom
lack
settling
is
into his
ultimately
understanding,
pointing us away
like
from
seeds
our own
finding
innate
fertile
wisdom.
ground.
The
Here was a
charlatan's
man who had
eventual
discovered
transformation
something
that
reveals
all the
another
weather
layer of the
predictions in the
teaching
world could not provide.
His years of pretending to
Complete
sell
freedom
enlightenment
from the
had
anxiety
actually prepared
of
him to
uncertainty.
recognize it when it was freely
As
offered.
the Buddha observed,
His intimate familiarity with
is the root
spiritual
of suffering.
concepts, even used
What
deceptively,
emerges from this story
became
is
the
the
very
recognition
foundation
that true
for
contentment
authentic
comes not from
understanding once his
controlling
heart
external
opened to genuine
circumstances,
practice,
but from
The
transforming
Buddha said,
our relationship
by
to
three
whatever
things
circumstances
the wise
arise.
person may be known.
Why do we exhaust
What
ourselves
acts
trying
they
to arrange
encourage,
life
what
according
acts
to our
they
preferences,
discourage,
rather
and
than
what
learning
acts
to
they
find peace
overlook?
within whatever life
EQ's
presents?
wisdom lay not
The
in
shepherd
avoiding the
represents
charlatan's
what Zen
deception,
calls great
but in
acceptance,
finding truth within it.
not passive resignation.
He encouraged the man's
but the
offering by
profound
paying
wisdom
for
that
it,
recognizes
discouraged
resistance to
attachment
reality
to outcomes
as
by
the
laughing
primary
at his
source
own
of suffering,
foolishness, and
when we
overlook
fight
the
against
intended
what
fraud
is,
by recognizing
we create
the
an
unintended
internal
teaching
war that drains our
Tonight,
energy
as you reflect
and
on
blocks
your
our
own
capacity
spiritual
for
journey,
contentment.
can you appreciate the
When we
unexpected
learn to
teachers
align
that
ourselves
have
with
appeared along
reality
the way?
as it unfolds,
Perhaps someone you
we
initially
discover the
judged or
tremendous
dismissed
peace that
offered
comes
you
from swimming
insights
with the
that more
current
obvious sources
rather than
missed.
against it.
What would it mean to
Consider
approach
how much
tomorrow with
mental and
EQ's
emotional
openness
energy
to finding
we
wisdom
spend each
in
day
the most unlikely
resisting
packages,
circumstances beyond
as the Buddha
our
taught?
control? When you realize
Traffic
how
jams,
perfect everything is,
weather that doesn't match
you
our
will tilt
plans,
your head back. People who
and
don't
laugh at the
behave as we
sky.
think they should.
In
Each
recognizing that
resistance creates a
enlightenment
small
cannot be
contraction
bought
in our
or
awareness,
sold,
we
tiny
discover
rebellion
it has been
against
freely
reality that
available all
accumulates
along,
into chronic
reflected
dissatisfaction.
perfectly in whatever
The shepherd's
mirror
approach
we happen
doesn't
to be
mean
holding.
becoming passive or ceasing to
Let
have
us now turn
preferences.
to our next story.
We can still hope for
one that
sun of
reveals how
days
broken
while fully
things often
accepting
serve
rainy
more
ones.
clearly than perfect
We can
ones.
work toward goals
This
while
is
finding
the monastery
peace when
bell that
outcomes
wouldn't ring.
differ from expectations.
High in the mountains of rural Japan,
The key lies in
Shunryu
holding our
Temple
preferences
had
lightly
served the surrounding villages
rather than
for over
allowing them to
300 years.
determine our contentment.
Its bronze bell,
Zen master
cast by
Sang
master
Tsai
craftsmen
wrote,
generations ago,
"The great way
had
is
caused
not
countless
difficult for those who
practitioners
have no
to
morning
preferences
meditation
and evening
This doesn't
reflection.
suggest eliminating
The sound
all
of that
desires,
bell,
but
carried
rather not
across the
allowing
valleys,
those desires
marking
to
the
become
rhythms of
demands that
monastic
reality
life,
must fulfill,
and offering
for
comfort
us to
to
be
all
okay.
who heard its deep,
Look deeply at your own
resonant tone.
patterns of resistance.
But
How
one
often
winter
do you
morning,
find yourself
after
arguing with
particularly
reality,
harsh storm,
wishing
the bell
circumstances were
developed a
different,
crack,
or believing
when
you'll
struck,
be content
instead
when
of producing
things
its
change?
traditional
rich, penetrating
This tension
sound.
is optional.
It made only
not
a
because
dull
you should
thud,
suppress your desires,
audible within the
but
temple
because you can
grounds,
learn to hold
but
them more
lacking the carrying
skillfully.
power to reach the
The
surrounding
Buddha taught that
communities.
attachment doesn't mean
The
caring
monks
deeply about
were
things.
dismayed.
It means making our
How
inner
could they
peace
properly
conditional
call people
on
to
external
practice
circumstances
without their bells
arranging
voice,
themselves
reaching
according
across
to our
the mountain
specifications?
valleys? Master
The shepherd
Sengai,
cares
the
about
temple's
his flock
elderly
and
abbot,
appreciates
examined the
comfort,
crack,
but his
and
fundamental
estimated the cost of
contentment
repair.
doesn't depend on
It would
any
require
particular
taking the
outcome.
bell to the distant city.
Tonight,
An expensive
as you
undertaking
reflect on the day's
that would drain the
experiences,
temple's modest
both
funds.
pleasant
and challenging, the monks began
Can you find
organizing
the
to raise
shepherd's
money
secret
for the
within your own
restoration,
awareness?
eager to
What if
return their daily
contentment
practice
isn't
to its
waiting
full
for better
dignity?
circumstances,
After
but is
weeks of
available
careful
right now,
saving
and
through
through a
small
shift
donations from
in
villages,
perspective,
the monks had finally
as the
collected
Buddha
enough
taught,
gold to restore
happiness
their
does
bell.
not depend on what you
They
have
presented the
or
money
who
to
you
Master
are.
Sengai. It
with
solely
pride
relies on
and
what you
relief.
think.
Master,
The shepherd discovered
we can finally
that when we
repair
stop
our
demanding
bell
that life
and
conform
restore
to our
proper calling,
expectations,
to
we
practice,
find the freedom to enjoy life exactly
the next
as it
day,
presents itself. A family of
Now let
refugees
us explore
appeared.
a story about the power of belief and the destiny we create through faith itself. This is the tale of the general and the coin that
Welcome,
revealed truth to another journey together.
A Japanese general
Tonight,
faced an impossible
we embark
situation.
on an exploration of profound,
His army was greatly
hidden wisdom.
outnumbered by enemy forces.
Meticulously preserved
the terrain
through
favored
ages
his opponent
to soothe the
and by
agitated
every
mind
conventional measure of
and
military
usher in a
strategy.
state of profound,
The coming battle
restorative
should result in
tranquility.
devastating defeat.
Feel free to share
Yet
what
something
time it
deep
is
within him
and
remain
where you are
convinced
listening
that
from.
victory was possible.
I'm going to share
Perhaps
a
it was
curated
intuition,
collection of
perhaps
ancient
it was
parables,
desperate hope,
and timeless
but he felt
Buddhist
certain
tales
that his cause was
designed
just,
to unlock
and
the
his troops,
deepest chambers
though fewer
of
in
mental
number,
serenity,
possessed a
and
fighting
emotional
spirit
liberation
that could overcome the
Each
odds.
narrative holds a
The
potent,
problem was his soldiers.
transformative teaching.
They could count as well as he
capable
could,
of recalibrating
and they had
your
eyes to see the
entire
massive
inner
force
landscape,
arrayed against
dissolving the clutches of
them.
anxiety,
Fear rippled through their ranks like a
incessant
contagion.
worry,
and their clouded their faces of external validation. Whispered conversations filled with mere stories spread through the camp. They are deeply and the general consensus that their morale was down by those who understood a fundamental truth. Many knew that an army convinced of its own true contentment arises not from altering our regardless of any other factors, but from transforming our perception of them. Superior weapons, as the Persian poet, even numerical once observed, means nothing. The quiet soldiers have already surrendered in their hearts. But an army over the course of our journey in its victory, you'll uncover precisely how seemingly impossible things can reshape your experience of conviction. As we journey through these remarkable tales, as they march, you'll notice a powerful shift begin to unfold. The general led his troops to a small religious shrine everyday concerns will naturally soften. This was a place where countless warriors will gradually diminish over the centuries. You'll find yourself effortlessly drifting into a realm of deep comprehension. The general and gathered his men around him, so settle in profoundly now. Prayer. Let your body surrender to whatever supports you and protection. Take one deliberate breath with me, and as you exhale, when the prayers were finished, know that you are about to receive insights reached into his that have been waiting for your awakening since time immemorial. He held it high, first so that every profound mystery of identity itself. My brothers, this is the monk, his voice carrying across the assembled ranks. Master Dogen was walking along a mountain path, and now we will let heaven itself reveal our destiny. Sitting beneath an ancient pine tree, I will toss this coin into the air. The stranger's robes were patched and faded from years of travel. If it lands tails, we are destined to lose only from long practice. Let us discover what the gods have decided for practitioner. The soldiers pressed and offered the traditional, their breathing shallow with anticipation. Good morning, brother. Everything seemed to depend on this single moment. May I ask your name? This one flip of metals spinning through the morning air with a gentle smile. The general tossed the coin high and replied, and every eye followed its arc. I have forgotten as it completely hung suspended for an instant against the sky. How can you forget something so fundamental? Then fell back. Your name has been with you since birth. The coin landed, the wandering monk still in the dust. Master, heads. I have been traveling for 30 years. A cheer erupted from the troops, sitting in meditation, that could probably be heard for miles. Soldiers who have been grim and fearful. I have been so busy being myself, now laughed with that I never had time to remember each other with renewed confidence. When I wake each morning, I am simply awareness awakening. When I help a traveler, by heaven I am simply compassion in action. Filled with this divine confidence. When I sit in meditation, the soldiers attack their enemies with such fierce determination and coordinated power label that they achieved exactly what the coin had predicted. Something shift inside him. Against all odds, as if a door he didn't know existed, a decisive victory suddenly opened, routing forces surely much larger than their own way of referring and securing a triumph that would be remembered. The birds call me by my footsteps on the path. After the battle, the villagers know me by the kindness among his celebrating troops. The mountains recognize lieutenant by my gratitude wonder in his beauty. Each moment provides all the identity I need. What an incredible thing! The monk gestured. The coin revealed our true destiny. Just as you said, it suffer from not knowing its name. Human power can change. Does the stream worry about what to call itself? You are absolutely right. The sea, the general replied. Understanding dawned on Dogen's face. He reached into his pocket and withdrew the coin. He bowed deeply so his lieutenant could examine it closely. You have achieved what most of us spend lifetimes pursuing. You have discovered. The lieutenant looked at the coin, forgetting who you think you should be. Both sides showed monk bowed in return. The Buddha once said, and you, all that we are, is the result of what we have thought. Truth. The mind is everything closer to our original nature than we imagined. Here we discover the profound truth that destiny is not something that happens to us or your thoughts, but something we create. You are the awareness of our own beliefs and expectations. Why do we so readily assume that fate is beyond our teaching about the difference between our essential nature such a crucial role and the conceptual identities we carry? Zen Buddhism teaches that while we cannot control all external circumstances and self-definition, we have tremendous power. Zen Buddhism explains that the ego mind constantly seeks to solidify whatever arises through labels and categories. The general understood something. We become attached to being a teacher, psychology, a parent, and the nature of reality, a successful person. A spiritual his soldiers' belief in victory. These identities provide a sense of security than their numerical disadvantage, but they also create a prison of limitations, determination. Consider how much mental energy you spend maintaining your various identities when those qualities, the professional persona you present at work, But here's
the
family
deeper
role
teaching.
you play at home. The general didn't
Social
simply
image you
manipulate
project
his
with
troops
troops.
through deception.
Each
He
requires
created the
constant
conditions that
reinforcement
allowed their
and
natural
protection.
courage and strength. You might
to
notice
emerge.
anxiety arising.
The soldiers possess
when these
the
identities
ability to
are
fight
threatened
brilliantly
or challenged.
all along.
This
They
is the
simply needed
ego's
to believe
fear
in
of
themselves
dissolution
and their cause.
Its terror of discovering
Consider your
what
own
lies
relationship
beneath
with
the
destiny
accumulated
and
layers of
possibility.
self-concept. How often do
The
you
nameless
assume
monk
that outcomes
represents
are
what Zen
predetermined,
calls
that
original
original failure
face,
is beyond your influence?
the authentic self that exists
The general's
before the mind
two-headed coin
creates stories
represents
about who
the
we
power
are.
we all
This is not a
possess
blank
to
emptiness,
tip the scales,
but rather
in
a
favor
dynamic,
of positive outcomes,
responsive awareness
through the
that
quality
naturally
of our
expresses
engagement with
compassion,
life, wisdom,
This
and
doesn't mean you can
spontaneous
control
appropriate
everything through
action
positive thinking,
without needing to
or
reference
that believing
a
in
fixed
something
identity
makes it automatically true.
Zen teacher Huang
The soldiers
Po
still
taught,
had to fight the battle.
your everyday
They still had to
mind
demonstrate
is
the
actual
way.
skill and courage.
When you try to turn toward
but their
it,
belief in
you
victory
move away from it.
created the
The
psychological
more we grasp
conditions
after spiritual
that allowed their
identities
best
or try to
qualities
become
to
someone
manifest.
special, the further we
In
drift
Zen
from our
practice,
natural state.
we learn to work
The
skillfully
monks
with both
forgetting
effort
represents
and
a letting
surrender,
go so
both
complete
intention and
that
acceptance.
even the one who might remember
We
has
recognize that
dissolved.
while we cannot dictate specific
In Japanese
outcomes,
aesthetics,
we can
there's a
profoundly
concept called
influence the
mushin,
energy and
meaning
attention
no
we bring
mind
to any situation
or no heart.
This
doesn't
quality of
indicate
engagement
absence,
often
but rather a
determines
state
whether we
of such
experience
complete
success or
presence
failure
that the mediating
regardless of external
self-consciousness
circumstances.
disappears. Like a master calligrapher,
Zen master Huang
whose
Po
years of
taught,
practice allow the
foolish
foolish
to
reject
move
without
what they see,
interference from the
not
thinking
what they
mind.
think.
The nameless
wise
monk
reject what
moves
they think,
through life without
not
the
what they
friction
see.
of self-reference.
The general was wise
Modern
enough
neuroscience
to see that his
confirms what
soldiers'
Zen
thoughts
has
about
long
the battle
taught.
were more influential
The sense
than
of
their
a solid,
thoughts about their
continuous
numerical
self
disadvantage
is actually a
He
construction
worked with
of the
the reality
brain,
of psychology,
a useful
rather than
fiction
fighting against
that
it.
helps us navigate
Look
complex
deeply at the
social
various challenges and
environments.
opportunities in
But
your own
this
life.
fiction becomes problematic.
Where might you be carrying
when
a
we
tails
mistake
mentality
it for ultimate
assuming
reality?
defeat before you fully
We
engaged?
suffer when we try
focusing
to defend
on obstacles
or
rather than
enhance something
possibilities
that exists only
letting
as a
fear
collection
determine
of
your
thoughts
level of
and
effort.
memories.
And where might you need to
The
create
Buddha
your
said,
own,
in the end,
two-headed coin?
just three things
A
matter:
practice or
how
perspective
well we have
that
lived,
consistently
how well
orients
we
you
have
toward
loved,
positive
how
engagement,
well we have learned to let
regardless
go.
of circumstances.
Notice that
The
none
Buddha
of these
taught,
require a fixed
we are
identity.
what we think. Living
All
fully,
that we are
loving
arises with our
deeply,
thoughts,
and letting go
with our
completely.
we
are
make
all
the
expressions of our essential
This
nature.
isn't magical
rather than
thinking,
achievements,
but
of a particular
recognition of the
someone.
creative power of consciousness
Tonight,
itself.
as you rest in the
When we
quiet
approach
darkness,
situations with
can you
genuine
sense the
confidence,
awareness that
clarity,
observes
and
your
commitment,
thoughts without
we
being
often
defined
discover
by them?
capabilities we didn't
Can
know
you
we
feel the
possessed.
life force moving through
Tonight,
your body
as you
without
consider
needing
the
to
battles
claim
you're
ownership
facing,
of it and the outcomes you're
what would it be
hoping
like
for?
to experience
Can you
yourself
find
as
your
pure
own
presence,
version of the general's
temporarily
wisdom?
borrowed by consciousness?
Can you create
for the sake of
internal
this
conditions
precious
that support
human
your highest
experience,
possibilities rather than
as
your
the Buddha
deepest
taught?
fears?
When you realize there is
Can you
nothing
recognize
lacking,
that
the
while
whole
you cannot
world
control
belongs
destiny,
to you,
you have profound
in forgetting our
influence
names,
over the beliefs
we
and
remember our
attitudes that
true
shape how
nature.
destiny unfolds.
in releasing
through
our
you.
grip on identity,
Buddha's wisdom
we
reminds
discover the
us
freedom that
thousands
was
of
always
candles
already
can be
here.
lighted from a single candle.
Let us now
And the
turn
light
to
of
a
the
tale
candle
that reveals
will not
the
be
impermanent
shortened.
nature of all precious
Happiness
things.
never
This
decreases
is the tea
by being
master's
shared.
empty cup. The general's
Master
confidence
Yamamoto
lit the
was
flame of
renowned
belief
throughout the region
in every
for his
soldier's
exquisite
heart.
tea ceremonies.
Sometimes
His
the
every
most
powerful
movement
thing we
embodied
can do
decades
is
of
create the
practice,
conditions
and his collection
that allow
of tea
others
implements
and
was
ourselves
legendary. To discover the
Among
strength
his most
that was
treasured
there all
possessions
along
was an ancient
Our next
porcelain
story
cup
reveals how
deliberation
liquid as an eggshell
comes not from
and painted
achieving
with
something
cherry
new,
blossoms that
but
seem
from
to dance in the
recognizing
light.
what was never born.
This cup
and
had
can
been
never
passed
die.
down through 15
This
generations
is the
of teaching
teaching
of
of
freedom from
birth
each one
and
adding
death.
to its story and reverence.
In a quiet monastery garden where
One
cherry
autumn
blossoms
morning,
drifted on the spring
Yamamoto
breeze,
traveled to visit
a dedicated
Zen master
student
Bankei
named Goshu,
carrying his precious
approached
cup,
the
carefully
wise
wrapped in
Zen
silk.
master Yui.
He had heard of Bankai's
for
wisdom
years
and hoped to
Goshu
share
had been
tea with him,
practicing meditation,
perhaps even receiving
studying
some
texts,
profound teaching
and
about
following
the way of
all
tea.
the
prescribed methods of
Bankei
spiritual
welcomed him
development
warmly into his
Yet
simple
despite
hut.
his sincere efforts,
Please,
he felt
let
no
us share tea
closer
together,
to the enlightenment
Yamamoto
he
said,
desperately
unwrapping
sought.
his treasured cup with
Goshu
ceremonial
bowed
care.
respectfully before his teacher.
This cup,
his
has
face
served
showing the
tea
strain
masters
of prolonged
for 400
spiritual
years.
seeking. Each
Master
sip connects us to
I
the
have been
lineage
studying
of those
Zen
who
for many
came
years.
before.
Following every
As he
instruction,
spoke,
sitting in meditation
Yamamoto
daily,
lifted the cup
reading
to show
the
its
ancient
delicate
texts.
beauty.
But I have not yet
But in that
succeeded.
moment,
I feel
whether
as
from
lost as when I
nervousness
began,
or simply the way of all
Please give me
things,
some guidance.
the cup
What am I
slipped
missing
from his fingers.
What more must I do?
Time seemed to slow as
Yue
it fell
looked
through
at
the
his
air,
earnest student with
then
compassion,
shattered against the stone
seeing
floor
the weight of
with a
spiritual
sound like a
ambition
small bell
become
breaking.
a burden rather than a path to freedom.
Yamamoto gasped.
He
and
understood
immediately
that
dropped to his
Goshu's very
knees.
effort to achieve
Tears
enlightenment
streaming
had
down
become
his
the
face.
obstacle to recognizing
Master
his inherent
Bankei,
awakeness.
I am so sorry.
There is no
This
secret
cup survived
trick to Zen
wars,
study,
earthquakes,
Yue said
and
simply.
centuries of careful
It's
handling,
just a matter of
only
freedom
to
from
be
birth and
destroyed
death.
in my carelessness.
Goshu's brow
400
furrowed
years of
with
history,
confusion.
lost in
This
a
answer
single
seemed
moment.
to make his quest even more daunting.
Bankei calmly bent down
Master,
and picked up one of the
how does
larger
one
shards,
pass through birth and
examining
death
it
to
with gentle
freedom?
curiosity.
That sounds like the most difficult
He turned
task
it
of all.
slowly in his weathered
If I
hands,
cannot even quiet
feeling
my
its
mind for a
texture
few
and
minutes,
weight.
how can I transcend
Tell me, my
birth and
friend,
death?
he said quietly.
Yui's
What is the
eyes
age of this
brightened,
piece of clay?
and he raised his voice with
Yamamoto
sudden intensity.
looked up through his tears.
Your every passing
confused by the
thought
question.
is birth and death.
Master, at these words,
This clay,
something shifted
Bankei
dramatically
continued.
in Goshu's
Before it
understanding.
was shaped into a cup,
Like a
before
veil
it was fired
suddenly
in a
lifted.
kiln,
He
before it was
saw that
painted
what he
with
had been
cherry
seeking
blossoms,
as some
how old
future
was it
attainment was
Yamamoto
actually the very
stared at the
nature
fragment in
of his
Bankei's
present
palm.
experience. Slowly, the constant
Understanding
rising
began to
and
dawn.
passing away of thoughts,
The clay,
sensations,
the clay
and
existed
emotions.
long before any
This
potter
endless
touched it.
flow was not
It came
something
from
to
the earth
escape,
itself,
but the very freedom
And how
he had
old is
been
the earth?
pursuing.
Goshu
asked
went
gently,
into ecstasy,
countless
feeling as if he
eons.
had put down a heavy
And when
burden,
this cup
he didn't
returns
even
to
realize
dust,
he had been
as
carrying.
all things must,
The relief was
how
profound
old will
and
that dust
immediate.
be?
All his years
Yamamoto's
of struggling
tears stopped
to become
flowing.
something special,
A strange lightness
dissolved
began to fill his
into the
chest.
recognition
Master,
that he had never
clay
been anything
has no
other
age.
than the aware
It simply
space
returns to clay,
in which all experience
the elements that form this
appears
cup will become
and
countless other
disappears.
things.
As
Mountains,
the Buddha observed,
rivers, flowers,
form
other cups,
is emptiness.
Bankei
Emptiness
smiled and
is
set
form.
the shard gently on the ground.
What emerges from this story
Now you
is the
understand the
recognition
true nature
that we
of
suffer
inheritance.
not because we lack
What we
something,
pass down
but because
is
we
not
don't
the temporary
recognize
form,
the freedom
but our
that is our
appreciation for the
fundamental
eternal
nature.
transformation.
Why do we carry the heavy
Your
burden
400
of
years of
spiritual
tea
ceremony
ceremony
continue in
Zen
you?
Buddhism points to our
Not in any
identification with the
object.
content of consciousness,
Yamamoto
rather
began
than
to
consciousness
laugh.
itself. First softly,
We mistake
then with
ourselves
growing joy
for the stream of thoughts.
I was so attached to
emotions,
preserving the past
and
that I
sensations
forgot to be present for
instead
this
of
moment.
recognizing
The cup
ourselves
served its
as the
final
aware
purpose
space
perfectly,
in which this
teaching
stream
me about
flows.
impermanence.
Every thought that arises
Indeed,
is born,
said Bankei.
Every thought that
And now
fades
shall we
away
have tea?
dies. I believe I have some simple
Every
pottery
emotion
that would be
emerges
honored
to
from
serve.
nowhere and dissolves
Buddha's
back
wisdom
into
reminds
nowhere.
us
All
every
conditioned
sensation
things
appears
are
and
impermanent.
disappears.
When you see this
constant
you are
birth
above
and
sorrow,
death
happening in awareness.
The heart of
is
this
not a
lesson
problem
lies
to
in our
solve,
relationship
but
with
the very
attachment
movement of
and the
life
profound
itself.
peace that comes
The
from
deeper
accepting the
understanding
transient
here
nature
reveals that what
of
we call
all phenomena.
birth and death
Why
are
do we
simply
suffer so
names
intensely
we give to
when
the
precious
natural
things
flowing
break,
of experience?
relationships end,
When we
or
identify with
circumstances
the flow,
change?
we suffer the anxiety
Zen Buddhism
of points to our
constant
fundamental
change.
misunderstanding when
Of
we
the nature of
recognize
security.
ourselves as the awareness in
We
which
unconsciously
the flow
believe
appears.
that permanence
we discover
exists,
unshakable
that some things can be
peace.
preserved forever.
Zen
and that
Master
our happiness
Huangpo
depends
taught,
on maintaining
your everyday
certain
mind,
conditions
that is the
unchanged.
way. This points
This
to the
illusion
extraordinary
creates
fact
what Buddhism
that the
calls
enlightenment we
dukkha,
seek is not
the
hidden
suffering
in
that
special
arises
states,
from trying
but
to
in the
grasp
ordinary
the
awareness
ungraspable.
that knows every
We
form
state
attachments not just to objects,
the same
awareness
but to
that
people,
knows anxiety,
experiences,
also knows
accomplishments,
peace, and even
same
spiritual
awareness
states,
that knows confusion,
imagining they can
also
provide
knows
lasting
clarity.
satisfaction. The Buddha
When
said,
these inevitably change
in
or
the sky,
disappear,
there is
we
no
experience
distinction
the shock
of
of
east and
broken
west.
expectations.
People create
Consider your
distinctions
own
out of their own
experiences of
minds.
loss.
perhaps a childhood home that was sold, a relationship that ended, often creates a job that disappeared, attempts to solve, or even small by imagining that some states of like a favorite restaurant closing, while others are notice how much of the pain consider comes not how much from the energy you invest in trying to have better you tell about what that peaceful emotions, or more pleasant the tea master's initial anguish came from his belief that something irreplaceable the content had been destroyed, reinforces the belief teaching reveals a deeper truth. That nothing is ever truly rather than the awareness, because nothing was ever that truly witnesses it all to begin with equal presence. The elements that compose the Japanese existed before its creation called and continue existing after its destruction. This practice involves philosophical consolation itself is enlightenment, but a recognition of rather than a mental to achieve enlightenment that Zen calls. Similarly, in your current awareness, exactly as it is, Zen master is the freedom you seek, rather than a stepping stone teaches about into being. Tonight, the reality thoughts arise and pass away in your awareness. Only in relationship, you recognize the birth and constantly death that arising and passing away within an endless web of that you are not the thoughts that come and go, but the cup was never just awareness in which they appear, but a temporary gathering of as the Buddha taught, fire, all conditioned things are impermanent, and human work out your salvation with diligence. When it shattered, nothing was lost. Salvation is not in the elements simply return to new but in recognizing the unconditioned awareness. This understanding transforms our relationship continue on our journey from fear with a teaching about the dangerous instead of desperately trying to preserve things as they are, and we can appreciate their constant becoming. This is the broken cup of the one-eyed monk, and the silent job becomes opportunity. In ancient China, when traveling monks wandered from monastery to monastery, seeking teachings and Zen testing their understanding, what the Japanese call custom developed among Zen, a poignant awareness of the impermanence before a wandering monk could receive lodging for the night, but rather a bittersweet appreciation that enhances rather than diminishes our love or a designated representative. Knowing that the cherry wasn't physical fighting makes their contest more spiritual wit not and understanding. The Buddha said, profound questions and paradoxical answers reveal the depth of each participant's realization. But this doesn't mean we should become cold. At one renowned monastery nestled in bamboo non-attachment is actually deep. A travel-worn monk arrived. Appreciation as evening shadows began to lengthen across the courtyards. Gratitude that doesn't his robes were dusty from mountain paths. Care that can let go his straw sandals worn thin. But his eyes carried the alert as you notice your tendency to grasp tightly to understanding, possessions, the abbot plans, busy with evening duties. Can you remember the clay returning personal attendant to conduct can you love fully Dharma while holding lightly, knowing that everything you cherish is on loan from the universe? Though he possessed what others might consider to appreciate this moment's gifts, he had lost one eye in an accident during his youth. As the Buddha taught, this physical limitation, everything is changeable, or perhaps because of the clarity it had brought to his inner visions. He had developed profound insight until one passes beyond the agony of life. When the two monks met in the monastery's formal in accepting impermanence, the traveling monk we discover that something unusual that doesn't depend on anything. Let us engage in silent debate, he suggested. As we continue our journey through the wisdom of Zen Buddhism, they would communicate. We encounter a story about the paradox of effort and surrender. Sometimes the deepest truths transcend language altogether. Young monk Jishin had been at the monastery for 3 months, and his inability the wayfarer raised one finger toward had become legendary among the other students, with an expression during the morning zazen period. Without his fellow monks sat like the attendant responded still by raising 2 fingers. Serene. The traveling monk was in constant motion. Pleased by this response, he would fidget with his robes, then raised, scratching nose, shift his weight from side to side, the attendant and crane his neck as if by making a tight fist, and holding his breathing was audible, marked by sighs of frustration. The traveling monk's confident expression faltered. He would give up. For a moment, quietly, he stared at the clenched fist at the back of the meditation his face showing hall. Confusion. The other students whispered about him during work periods. Then, without attempting any further gestures, others were annoyed by the distraction, left the hall, and a few smugly assumed he simply lacked the proper commitment and spoke with obvious respect. But Master Ryoan, The temple's abbot,
Venerable sir,
watched Jishin's struggle.
your representation is far too advanced for me,
saying nothing for
I must
months.
continue my journey rather than
One
presume to
crisp
stay
morning
in your
after
monastery
another
tonight.
failed attempt at sitting,
The abbot raised his
Jishin approached
eyebrows
his
with
teacher with
interest.
tears of frustration in his eyes.
Tell me what transpired in your exchange.
Master,
Well,
I am clearly not
the
suited
traveller
for this
explained
practice.
earnestly.
Perhaps
I began
should
by
return
holding
to my
up one
family's
finger
farm
to symbolize
I
the
cannot
Buddha,
seem to find
the
even
awakened
a
one
moment
who
who showed us the
stillness.
path to enlightenment.
Ryoen looked at the
But your
young
monk
with
immediately
kind eyes.
responded with 2 fingers.
Jishin,
indicating
I have a
the
different
Buddha
task for you.
and the Dharma.
Our monastery
Both the
garden
teacher
has been neglected,
and the teachings he
the
offered.
weeds are overtaking the
So I
vegetables,
raised 3
and the
fingers
paths
to
need
represent the
tending.
complete triple gem.
Would you be willing to care
the
for
Buddha,
it?
the Dharma, and
Grateful
the Sangha,
for any way to
the
contribute
community of
despite his
practitioners.
meditation failures.
But then
he
Jishin
held
held
up
up
a
a
clenched
and
fist to
accepted
show that
immediately
all
3 are
Yes,
actually
Master,
one unified
I would be
reality.
honored.
His
The
understanding
next
is
morning,
clearly beyond
instead
mine,
of sitting in the meditation
so I
hall,
must seek
Jishin
instruction
made his way to the
elsewhere
overgrown
before I
garden.
could be worthy of
He knelt
staying
among the
here.
plants
The
and
abbot
began to
listened
pull
to this
weeds,
interpretation
feeling
with
the
growing
earth
surprise,
soft and cool
for he
beneath
knew
his
his
fingers.
attendant's character well.
As he worked,
As
he
the
noticed
travelling monk
which plants
departed into
needed
the gathering
water
dusk,
and which were
the
receiving
attendant
too
himself
much
appeared,
shade.
visibly
When rain
agitated,
fell, he took
and breathing
shelter under
hard
the
from
tool
running.
shed and listened to the
Where
rhythm
is
of
that
drops on the
insolent
roof.
rascal?
When
He
the sun
demanded,
was strong,
his single
he worked
eye
in harmony
blazing
with
with
its
heat,
indignation, taking breaks
I've
in
been
natural
looking everywhere
rhythm
for
with his
him.
body's needs.
The nerve of that man.
Weeks passed.
I've never encountered
Jishin found
such
himself
rudeness
rising
disguised
before dawn,
as spiritual
eager to greet
inquiry.
the garden in the quiet
What
morning
exactly
light.
happened?
He learned
The
to
abbot
read
asked,
the subtle
genuinely
signs of plant
curious
health,
now,
the
about
way
what had
leaves
transpired
curled
between
when
these
thirsty,
2 very
how
different
certain
interpretations
vegetables
of the same
preferred
event.
morning attention, while
First,
others
the
thrived
attendant
with
explained.
evening care.
His voice rising
His movements
with remembered
became
offense.
economical.
He
and
insulted
graceful
me by
as he
holding
worked
up one
with,
finger to
rather
indicate
than against the
that I had
natural
only
cycles
one
of
eye.
growth and decay.
Can you imagine? Here I
One
thought
day,
we were engaging
while
in
harvesting
spiritual
tomatoes,
discourse.
But
Jishin
he
immediately
realized
drew
he had been
attention to
kneeling
my
motionless
physical
for
limitation.
over an hour, completely
Determined to
absorbed
remain
in carefully
polite
selecting
despite
such
the
perfectly
crudeness.
ripe fruit.
I held up 2
His
fingers
mind
to
had been
acknowledge that
quiet,
he was blessed
focused,
with 2 eyes.
present.
I was trying to show that
When
I
he stood
bore
up,
him no
his
ill
body
will
felt loose
for his
and
thoughtless
natural,
comment.
free from the tension
The
that had
attendant
always
paused to
plagued
catch
his
his
sitting
breath.
practice.
His agitation
That
increased as he
evening,
continued.
drawn by something he
But
couldn't
the scoundrel
name,
wasn't satisfied
Jishin
with that
quietly
insult.
entered the meditation hall.
Next,
and
he
took
held
a
up 3
seat among
fingers
the
to
other
rub it in
monks.
further.
To his
indicating
amazement,
that between the
his
2
body
of us,
settled
there
immediately
were only
into
3 eyes
stillness.
total.
His breath
He was
became
deliberately
deep and
emphasizing our
natural.
difference,
His
making
mind,
sure I couldn't forget
accustomed
my
now to the
disability.
focused attention
That's when
that
I'd had
gardening
enough.
required.
I made a fist
rested
because I was
easily
about to hit
in the
him
present
for his
moment.
persistent rudeness.
For the first time
But the
since
coward
arriving
saw
at the
what was
monastery,
coming and ran off
he
before
sat
I could
through the
teach him
entire
proper
period
manners.
without moving.
The abbot stood
After
in
the
stunned
sitting,
silence.
another student
contemplating
approached
this
Master
remarkable
Ryoan with
demonstration
curiosity.
of how 2 people
Respected
could participate
teacher,
in
how did
identical
gardening
events
teach Jishin to meditate
while inhabiting
I don't
completely
understand the
different
connection.
realities.
Ryoan
The Buddha
smiled
taught
and touched the soil
we see the
still
world
visible
not
under
as
his
it
own
is,
fingernails.
but as we
I never
are.
taught him to meditate. This
I taught him to
profound
stop
truth
fighting with himself.
reveals itself
In the garden,
complete
he learned to work with
misunderstanding
conditions
between
as they
our 2
are,
monks,
rather than
each of
demanding
whom
they be different.
experienced the exact
He discovered
same
the natural
gestures
rhythm of
while
effort
living in
and
entirely
rest,
different
attention and
interpretations
ease.
of reality.
These are the same qualities.
Why do we
that
so
make
often
sitting
project our
practice
own
possible?
concerns, insecurities,
The
and
student
assumptions
pressed further.
onto neutral
But
situations?
Master, why couldn't
Zen
you learn this
Buddhism
directly
points
to
to
what it
Zazen
calls
instruction,
the 8 worldly winds?
because
Ryoan
praise
replied,
and blame,
Jishin's
pleasure and
particular
pain,
mind
gain and loss,
needed to understand
fame and
surrender
disgrace.
through action before it could
These
surrender
psychological
through
forces
stillness.
create internal weather
The garden
systems
taught
that
him
color our
that
perception
true
of everything
effort
around
flows
us with natural
The
conditions.
attendant's sensitivity
rather than forcing
about his
against
missing
them.
eye created
Some
a filter
students learn
through which
peace
every
through
gesture
sitting still.
became a personal attack.
Others must learn stillness.
His past
through
experiences
peaceful
of being
action.
judged or pitied for his
As the Buddha
appearance
observed,
had created such a strong
just as the great
interpretive
ocean
framework
has one taste,
that he couldn't perceive
the
any
taste of
other
salt.
possible meaning in the
So
traveler's hand
also
signals.
this teaching has one taste.
Similarly, the traveling monk's
taste of
spiritual
liberation.
preoccupations caused him to see
This
profound
tale
Dharma teachings
unveils
in
the
what
truth
were actually
that
expressions of
authentic
wounded
spiritual
feelings
practice
and growing anger
cannot be forced through willpower
His framework
alone,
of seeking
but
enlightened
must
instruction
from a
made him
deeper
interpret
understanding
increasingly
of how to
aggressive
work
gestures
harmoniously
as increasingly
with our own
sophisticated
nature.
wisdom. Why do we
Look
struggle so
deeply
often
at
when
your
we try to
own
impose
patterns of
spiritual
interpretation
discipline on ourselves?
How often do your
Zen
current
Buddhism
worries,
reveals
past
that
hurts,
much of our
or
suffering in
persistent
practice
hopes
comes
cause
from what
you
it
to
calls
misread
gaining
situations
mind.
completely?
The ego's attempt
Perhaps
to
someone's
achieve
distracted
enlightenment
behavior
through
becomes
force
evidence
and
they don't
acquisition.
like you when
We
they're
approach
actually
meditation
concerned
like a
about a
military
family
campaign,
member's health.
trying to conquer
Maybe
our
a
thoughts
colleague's
and
helpful
subdue our
suggestion
restless
feels
energy
like criticism
through sheer
because you're
determination.
insecure about your
This approach
performance.
inevitably creates
This
internal
ancient
warfare.
wisdom
Part of
illuminates
us wants
how
to be
our
still
internal
and peaceful,
state creates
while
our
another
external
part resists
experience.
control and
Both
rebels
monks
against
were
imposed
sincere in
discipline.
their perceptions.
The more
Yet
forcefully
both
we
were
try to suppress
fundamentally
our natural
mistaken
energy
about
the more
what was
turbulent
actually
it becomes.
happening.
We end
Neither
up
was
fighting
lying
ourselves
or
creating
deliberately
exactly the kind of internal
misinterpreting.
tension that
It
makes
was simply
meditation
seeing
impossible.
through the lens of their
Look
own
deeply
psychological
at your own
conditioning.
relationship with spiritual
The
practice.
story points us toward a crucial
Do you
question.
notice the subtle
How
violence
can we
of
develop the
demanding
capacity
that your
to
mind
see
behave
situations
differently
more
than it does?
clearly, less
The frustration
filtered through
when
our
your personal
meditation
concerns
doesn't match
and
your
interpretations?
expectations?
The
Zen
self-judgment
practice offers
when you
several
feel
approaches to
distracted
this
or
challenge.
agitated.
First
is what's called
each of these
don't
represents
know
a
mind.
form of fighting with yourself,
Maintaining
rather than
openness
learning
to
to work
multiple
skillfully with your
interpretations,
actual
rather than
conditions.
immediately settling on the one that
Jashin's
confirms our
transformation
existing
came through
beliefs
what
or
Zen
fears.
calls right effort.
When someone acts in a way
Not
that
the strain
triggers
of
our
forced
interpretation,
concentration,
can we
but the
pause
natural
and
focus
consider
that
other
arises
possible
when we align
explanations?
with, rather than resist our
Second
circumstances,
is mindfulness of
in the
our
garden,
own emotional
he
state.
discovered how to be
The
fully
attendant
present
might have noticed his
purposeful
rising
activity.
sensitivity about his appearance.
His attention was
and
naturally
recognized
drawn to
how
the
this was
immediate
coloring
needs
his
of the
perceptions.
the texture
The
of
traveler
soil,
might
the
have
rhythm of
observed his
seasons.
eagerness to find
This
profound
wasn't
teachings
forced mindfulness,
and questioned
but
whether he
organic
was seeing wisdom
engagement
where none
with life
existed.
as it presented itself.
Zen Master
Zen Master
taught,
Suzuki
your
Roshi
everyday
taught,
mind
that
each of
is
you is
the
perfect
way, the way you are.
This teaching
and
invites
you
us
can
to
use a
examine the
little
very
improvement.
mind that creates these interpretations.
This paradox
rather
captures
than
the
constantly
essence of
trying to
Jashin's
figure
journey.
out the correct
He
interpretation.
didn't need to
of
become
external
someone
events.
different to practice
The Buddha
successfully.
said,
He
hatred
needed to
is
discover
never appeased
how his
by
particular
hatred in this
temperament
world
could express
by
itself
non-hatred
authentically
alone is
within the
hatred
structure of
appeased.
practice.
This is a law
The garden
eternal.
became Jashin's meditation
If the
hall
attendant had
because
met
it
the travelers
provided what his
perceived
restless
insults
energy
with curiosity
required.
rather than
Purposeful
defensiveness.
movement,
If
tangible
the traveler had
results,
questioned
and
his
connection
assumptions about
with natural
enlightened
cycles.
behavior, their
Rather than
encounter
trying to eliminate
might have
his
become
kinetic
a
nature,
genuine teaching
Master
for
Ryoan
both.
helped him channel it toward
Tonight,
awakening.
as you
The same
replay
energy that made
conversations
sitting
and
meditation
interactions
difficult
from your day,
became the very
can you
quality
notice
that
how
made
your
him
own
an
concerns and
exceptional gardener
sensitivities
and
might have
eventually
shaped your
a
interpretations?
skilled meditator.
Can you sense
This
the
points
difference
to a
between
crucial
what actually
understanding
happened
in Zen practice
and the meaning your mind
There are as
added
many
to
ways
those
to
events
cultivate presence as there
as
are
the
human
Buddha
temperaments.
Peace
Some people
comes
naturally
from within.
incline towards seated
Do not seek
meditation,
it
without
others.
toward
By
walking
understanding
practice,
how our
chanting,
internal weather
service
creates
work,
our
or
external
mindful
storms,
labor,
we discover
The
the
key
possibility
is not
of
finding the
clear
right
seeing
practice,
that serves
but
both
discovering
wisdom
how your
and
unique
constitution.
Let
can
us
most
now explore a
authentically
story
express
about choice,
the universal principles
responsibility,
of awareness
and the power we
compassion,
hold and
in
wisdom.
every moment.
Vietnamese Zen teacher
This is the tale of
Thich
the young
Nhat
man
Hanh and the
speaks
bird.
of engaged
A clever
Buddhism.
young student had grown
The
tired of
recognition
his
that
teacher's
washing
seemingly
dishes,
wise
caring for
responses
children,
to every question,
or tending
he was
gardens
convinced that the
can be
old
as
master
profound
simply spoke
as
in
any
riddles
formal
to appear
meditation
profound,
when
and
approached
he
with
decided
full
to devise a
presence.
test that would
Jashin's
expose what he
story
believed
illustrates this
was mere
perfectly.
pretense.
After
His
thinking
breakthrough
for
came
several
not through
days,
perfecting a
he
particular technique,
conceived what he thought
but through
was
learning
the
the
perfect
fundamental
track.
attitude that
One
makes
morning,
all practice
the young man
effective.
caught a small sparrow
Willing
in the garden.
cooperation with
The
what
tiny
is.
bird trembled in his cupped
The
hands.
Buddha said,
its heart
hatred
beating
is
rapidly
never
against
appeased
his
by
palms.
hatred in this world.
He held it
By
carefully behind his
non-hatred
back
alone
as
is
he approached
hatred
his teacher,
appeased.
who was sitting
This is
peacefully
a
in the
law
morning
eternal.
sunlight, reading
This
ancient
applies
texts.
not just to external conflicts,
Master,
but to our internal
student called
relationship
out
with our own
with
minds,
barely concealed excitement.
fighting our restless thoughts
I have a
with
question
mental force
that will test your
only
legendary
creates
wisdom.
more agitation.
The old
Learning
teacher
to work
looked up from his
patiently
reading with
and
patient,
skillfully with our
gentle
minds as they
eyes.
actually are.
He had seen this
This
look of
is the
mischievous
path to
confidence
genuine
in many students
transformation.
over the years. Consider
And he
areas in
understood
your
the
own
young
life
man's
where you
need
might
to
be
challenge
fighting yourself
authority
unnecessarily.
as part of his own growth.
Perhaps you
and
struggle
learning.
with a particular emotion.
Please,
repeatedly trying to
teacher
suppress
said simply,
anger or eliminate
ask your
anxiety
question.
through willpower.
The
Or
student
maybe you
stepped
have
closer,
creative impulses,
keeping the bird
that you
hidden
judge as
behind his
distractions from more
Master,
serious pursuits.
I hold a small
What
bird
would it
in
look
my
like
hands,
to find skillful
using
ways
your
to
great
channel
wisdom?
these energies?
Tell me,
rather than
is this
simply
bird
trying
alive
to eliminate
or
them.
dead?
The young man
Zen
felt
practice
incredibly
ultimately
clever.
teaches us that
He had
enlightenment
created
is not
what
about
he believed
becoming
was an
someone
impossible
different,
situation for
but
his
about
teacher.
fully becoming
If
who
the
we
master
already
answered
are beneath our
alive,
conditioning and
he would quickly
resistance.
snap the bird's neck and
Jishin's
reveal the
restless
dead
energy
creature,
was never
proving
the
the
problem.
teacher wrong.
His inability
If the master
to find
answered
an appropriate
dead,
expression
he would simply
for it was
open
what
his
created
hands and
suffering.
let the living bird fly away.
Tonight,
Again,
as you
proving the
notice
teacher's lack of
areas
true
where you're
insight.
fighting with your own nature,
Either way,
can you
the
sense
student was
possibilities for
certain he would
channeling that
expose his
energy more
teacher's
skillfully?
supposed wisdom
Perhaps
as
your
nothing more
analytical
than lucky
mind,
guessing instead of
and
being a
philosophical
meditation
double talk.
obstacle.
He
could
waited
find expression
eagerly
through
for
the
studying
response that
Dharma
would give him the
texts.
satisfaction of finally
Maybe your
outsmarting
emotional
the old man.
sensitivity,
rather than
the teacher
being a
sat
vulnerability
quietly,
for a long moment,
could become a pathway
not trying to
to
peer
deeper
behind the
compassion.
student's back or gather
What
more
aspects of
information.
yourself are you trying
His
to
eyes seem
eliminate
to look not at the
that
student,
might instead need
but
better
through
expression?
him, as if perceiving
As the Buddha
something
taught,
far deeper
you
than
yourself,
the simple trick
as much as
being attempted.
anybody in the entire universe,
Finally,
deserve
with a gentle
your love
smile
and
that
affection.
held both compassion
True spiritual
and
practice
understanding
begins with
the
this
master
radical
spoke.
self-acceptance.
The answer,
not
my
approval
young
of all our
friend,
behaviors,
is in your
but
hands.
willingness to work compassionately
The student
with
stood
our
frozen,
actual starting
his
point,
mouth hanging open
rather than
slightly.
fighting to become
In
someone
3
else.
simple words, his elaborate
Now,
trap had been completely
let us explore
dismantled.
a Zen story
The teacher hadn't
about
fallen
the
for either option
unexpected
of the false
pathways to
dilemma.
wisdom.
Instead,
This is the master
he had pointed
who
to something
sold far more
enlightenment.
profound. In the
the
bustling
fundamental
marketplace
truth
of ancient
that
Kyoto,
the student himself
among the vendors
held the
selling
power
rice,
to determine
silk,
the outcome.
and pottery. The young
An
man looked
unusual
down at his
sight
hands,
appeared one morning.
still cupped behind his back.
A well-dressed man,
feeling the
had
tiny
set up a
bird's
small
rapid
stall
heartbeat
with
with an
against his
elaborate
palms.
banner that read,
He realized with
enlightenment
startling
for
clarity
sale,
that
one
the master
gold
was
coin
right.
only.
The bird's
Achieve
fate had never
instant
depended on the
liberation.
teacher's answer or
A crowd
supposed
gathered,
wisdom.
some
It
laughing
had always
at the
been
audacity,
entirely in the
others
student's
curious
control.
about what enlightenment
More than that,
might look
he
like
began to
when
understand
packaged
that
for
this was
purchase.
true about far
The
more
man
than
behind
just
the
this
stall
moment
was clearly a charlatan.
The power to choose
His
life or
robes were
death,
expensive,
creation
but
or
worn
destruction,
incorrectly.
compassion
His manner
or
was
cruelty,
theatrical, rather
all
than
of it was
serene,
always in his hands,
and his eyes held
in every
the shifty
situation,
quality of
every
someone
day.
accustomed to quick
Slowly,
escapes.
the young man
He
called
called
out
his
to
hands
passers
forward
by and opened them.
Why spend years in meditation?
small bird
Why
sat
suffer
still
through
for
difficult
just a
practice?
moment?
For just one
As if
gold
gathering
coin,
itself,
you can have
then
what the
spread
monk
its
struggled
wings
lifetimes
and
to
flew
achieve.
into the blue sky.
Most people
disappearing
walked by
among the
shaking their
trees,
heads or muttering about
Buddha's
the
wisdom
shamelessness
teaches
of
us
such a display.
we are what we think.
But as morning
All
stretched
that we
toward
are
midday,
arises with our thoughts.
a familiar figure
With our
approached the
thoughts,
stall.
we make the world.
Master Ikkyu, renowned
This ancient
throughout the
wisdom
region for his
illuminates
wisdom and
the profound
unconventional
responsibility
teaching
that
methods,
comes with conscious
stopped
choice
before the banner,
and the
and
recognition
studied it
that
with
we are
apparent
always the
seriousness.
architects of our own experience.
One gold coin for enlightenment.
Why do we so often
Ikkyu
look
asked,
outside ourselves
stroking
for
his
answers
beard
that can
thoughtfully?
only be found
The charlatan's
within?
eyes lit up with
Zen
greed.
Buddhism,
Though he
points to our
maintained his
tendency to
spiritual
seek
salesman
authority
demeanor.
figures who will tell
Yes,
us what to do,
venerable
what
master.
to think,
The same
what to choose.
enlightenment that takes
But the
decades to
deepest
achieve
teaching
through traditional
is that
methods.
true wisdom
I offer
cannot
it
be
instantly,
given from
guaranteed.
one person to another.
To everyone's amazement,
it can only be
including
discovered
the
through
charlatans,
our own
Ikkyu
conscious
reached into
engagement
his
with
robes
life.
and produced a
The
gold
student's
coin.
question seemed to be about
This
the
sounds like an
teacher's
excellent
insight,
bargain,
but it was
he said,
actually about
placing
his
the
own
coin on
power.
the stall counter.
He was
I'll
so
take
focused
one
on
enlightenment,
proving the
please.
master wrong that he
The crowd
almost
pressed
missed the
closer,
profound truth
whispers
being offered,
rippling through the
that
onlookers.
every moment
The
presents
charlatan
us
found himself
with
in an
choices
unexpected
that shape
predicament.
not only our
He
immediate
had never imagined
circumstances,
someone would
but
actually
our
pay,
character and
especially
destiny.
not a genuine Zen
Consider
master.
your own daily decisions.
Panicking
both
slightly,
large
he
and
fumbled
small.
through his belongings.
How often do
looking
you wait
for
for someone else to tell you
anything
what the right
to give in
choice
exchange
is?
for the coin?
How frequently
Finally,
do you seek permission,
his hands closed
approval,
around a
or
small mirror
guidance
he used
for
for
decisions that ultimately
Desperate to
rest
complete the
entirely
transaction,
in your own
he handed
hands?
it to Ikkyu with great
The young man's
ceremony.
bird represents
Here is your
all the
enlightenment,
power we
master.
hold. but sometimes
deeply,
fail to recognize.
and all will be revealed.
In our relationships, careers, and spiritual development,
accepted the mirror
we
with apparent
constantly
reverence
face
and
moments
gazed
where
into
we
its
hold
surface.
something precious in our
For a
hands.
long moment,
The
he
well-being
studied
of
his
others,
reflection,
our own integrity,
weathered face,
opportunities
his knowing
for
eyes,
growth or
his slightly
destruction.
amused expression.
The outcome
Then,
depends
to
not on
everyone's
external
surprise,
circumstances
he burst
or
into
other
delighted
people's wisdom,
laughter.
but on what we
"Excellent,"
choose to
he
do
declared,
with the power
raising the
we
mirror
possess.
toward the sky.
Worth
The master's
every coin.
response
This is
reveals
indeed the
something
most
crucial
direct
about
teaching I've
authentic
encountered
teaching.
in years.
True teachers,
The crowd
don't give
murmured
answers
in confusion.
They point us
The
back to our
charlatan,
own capacity
emboldened
for
by what
wisdom.
seemed like validation
They help
from
us
a respected
recognize the
teacher,
choices we're already
puffed up with
making
pride.
and the power
Master,
we already possess.
I am gratified
rather than
that you
encouraging
recognize the
dependence on
profound
their
enlightenment
authority.
I've provided.
Zen
Tell
teacher
us,
Charlotte Joko
what great
Beck
wisdom
said,
did you discover?
"We are always in choice,
Ikkyu's
even when
laughter
we
grew
think
even
we're
more
not."
joyous.
The
I
bird in the
discovered
student's
that a
hands
fool and his
represents
money are
all the
soon
moments
parted.
when we convince
And I am that
ourselves
fool.
we have no options.
He laughed again.
No power,
Tears streaming
no
down his cheeks.
responsibility for one gold
But
coin.
consciousness, this
Always
man has shown me
involves
my own
choice.
face and reminded
choice
me that
always
enlightenment
involves
cannot be
responsibility,
bought, sold, or possessed.
Look deeply.
The
at a
greatest
current
teaching
challenge in
often
your
comes
life.
from the most unexpected
Where are you
teachers.
waiting for someone else to provide
The crowd
answers,
began to chuckle
solutions,
as understanding
or direction?
dawned.
What would
Ikkyu
change
bowed
if you fully
deeply to the
recognize
charlatan.
that the power to shape the
Thank
outcome
you, friend,
is
for
already
this
in your
perfect
hands?
demonstration of wisdom.
This doesn't mean
appearing
you have
through
control over all
He set
external
the mirror
circumstances,
gently on the counter and
but
walked
you
away,
always have choice
still
about how you
chuckling.
respond.
The charlatan
The Buddha
stood stunned,
taught,
holding the gold
mind
coin and
is
staring at the mirror.
everything. What
Something
you
had
think
shifted
you
inside him
become.
during this exchange.
Every thought,
Watching a genuine
every
master find
intention,
wisdom in what he knew was a
every
deception
action
had
is
cracked
like the
something
student's
open
choice
in his
with the
heart.
bird. An
For the
opportunity
first time in years,
to create life
he felt
or
ashamed,
death,
not just
beauty
of being
or
caught,
suffering,
but of
wisdom
the emptiness
or
that had
ignorance.
driven him to such
The
deception
answer
in the
is
first place.
always in our hands.
Years later,
Tonight,
that same
as you
charlatan
consider the
will be
various
found
situations
sweeping
in your
floors
life
at Ikkyu's
where you
temple,
seek guidance,
having
or
become
feel
one of his
powerless,
most devoted students.
can you sense the truth?
When asked
the
about his
master was
transformation,
pointing to?
he would say,
Can you feel the weight
Master
of the
Ikkyu
choices you
brought
carry
my
every
enlightenment,
day,
and
not
then
as a
gave it back
burden,
to me freely,
but as the fundamental
I finally
dignity
understood
of conscious
that what I was
existence.
trying to sell,
As the
I didn't
Buddha
have,
observed,
and what I was
no
trying to
one
buy,
saves us but
I
ourselves.
already possess.
No one can, and no one may.
Buddha spoke of this when he
We
said,
ourselves must
three things
walk the
cannot be
path.
long hidden: the sun,
The bird flies
the moon,
free,
and
not
the
because
truth.
of the teacher's wisdom.
Here we discover
because
the
of the
profound
student's
teaching
choice,
that wisdom often appears
in recognizing
through
our
the
own
most
power
unlikely
to
circumstances,
choose life over death,
and that genuine
compassion
understanding
over cruelty,
cannot be commodified
truth
or
over
transferred,
deception,
but only
we
recognized
discover that the
within
answer to
ourselves.
every important question has
Why
always been
are
in
we
our
so
hands.
susceptible to
Let
the
us now
idea
turn to a
that
tale
enlightenment
about the courage
can
to
be
trust
acquired
life's
from
current.
external sources.
This is the story of the
Zen
crystal
Buddhism
river
points to
in
our
the
deep
depths of a
conditioning
great crystal
toward
river
transactional
where
thinking,
water flowed clear
the
as
belief
mountain
that
air.
spiritual
There lived an
realization
entire
works
village
like
of small
commerce,
creatures,
where we can
the
exchange
river's current
effort,
moved above
money,
them like a gentle
or
breath,
devotion for
carrying the
guaranteed
wisdom
results
of countless
This
springs
gaining
and distant
mind
seas,
approaches awakening
young and
as
old,
something we don't
rich and
have
poor,
that we need to
all
get,
made their home along
rather
the
than
sandy
recognizing
bottom,
it as our
each
essential
creature
nature
grasping
temporarily
temporarily
obscured
obscured
by
by
conditioning,
branches and roots.
Notice how often we fall into
For
this trap in
generations,
subtler ways.
clinging,
We might
had been
shop
their
for the
way of
perfect
survival.
meditation technique,
Every
the right
creature
spiritual
learned from
book,
birth to
or the most
wrap their
enlightened
appendages
teacher
around
imagining
river rocks
that the
and
correct
fallen
external
wood
formula will
Hold
deliver
on,
the inner
the elders would
transformation we
say.
seek. The current, while
is
tools and guidance
dangerous.
can certainly support
It
our
will
practice,
sweep you away.
the fundamental
to places
shift always
unknown.
happens within our own
Safety
recognition.
lies in staying exactly
Charlatan's
where you
mirror
are.
accidentally provided
But
what
one
countless
small
expensive
creature
workshops
grew
and
weary of
elaborate
this endless
practices
grasping.
often miss.
Day
Direct confrontation
after day,
with what is already
he
here.
watched the current flow overhead.
Ikkyu's reflection
seeing
showed him
how it
nothing he
moved
didn't
with such
already
purpose
possess
and grace.
Yet in that moment of seeing
While his neighbors
clearly,
complained about the
very
effort required to
ordinariness
maintain their grip,
became extraordinary.
he found himself wondering what
This
it
is
might
what
feel
Zen
like
calls
to trust
original
that flowing
face.
water, not some
I am
special
tired of
spiritual
clinging,
state,
he announced
but our
one
natural
morning.
awareness.
Though I cannot
Before it
see
gets
where it
decorated
leads,
with
I
concepts
trust
and
that the
seeking.
current knows its destination.
The deeper teaching
I
emerges
shall let go
through
and
Ikkyu's
allow it to
response
carry
being
me where it will.
Fooled For I fear that if I
rather
continue
than anger
clinging,
or
I
embarrassment,
shall die of boredom.
he found
genuine
ever
delight
truly
in
live.
recognizing his own
The other
gullibility.
creatures gasped in horror.
This demonstrates what
Fool,
Zen teacher
they
Suzuki
cried.
Roshi called
Let
don't
go,
know mind, and that current will tumble
the
you
willingness
mercilessly
to be
across the
surprised,
rocks below,
to learn from
you will be
unexpected
battered and broken,
sources,
dying
find
far more
wisdom
quickly
even
than
in
any
our
boredom could
mistakes.
kill you.
Consider
But the
your
small
own
creature
relationship with
had made his
spiritual
decision.
seeking. How much energy
Taking
do you
one
spend
last
looking
look at
for
his
the right
neighbors,
method,
he released his
teacher,
grip
or experience
on the familiar
to
stone.
provide what you imagine you're
Immediately,
missing?
the current
Can you
seized him,
sense the difference
and just as the
between
others had
skillful
predicted,
learning and
he was
desperate
tumbled
acquisition?
and tossed across the rocky
Ikkyu's story
bottom.
suggests
His
that
small
wisdom
body
often comes
struck
not through
stone
getting what
after
we think we
stone,
want,
each
but through
impact
clearly seeing the
bringing
futility
pain he had
of
never
trying to
experienced
possess
while
what is
safely
already
clinging.
our birthright.
Yet something remarkable began to
Zen
happen.
Master Linji
As the
taught,
creature continued to
if you
surrender
meet
to
the
the
Buddha
current's
on the
power,
road,
refusing
kill
to
him.
grab for new anchors
This
despite
shocking
his pain,
statement
the
points
water
to the same
gradually
truth
lifted him
Ikkyu
higher
discovered.
from the dangerous bottom.
Enlightenment
cannot be
tumbling
received
ceased.
from outside ourselves.
The rocks could no longer
not
reach him.
even from the most
Now he
perfect
flowed with the
teacher
current
or
itself,
teaching, no longer
Any
fighting its
spiritual
direction,
authority
but
that
becoming
claims to
one with
possess
its
what we
movement.
lack.
Is
As he
ultimately
travelled
pointing us
downstream,
away from our own
creatures in
innate
distant
wisdom.
parts witnessed something they had
The
never
charlatan's
seen.
eventual
Here
transformation
was one of their own
reveals
kind.
another layer of the
Yet
teaching.
he appeared to be flying
His
through
years
the
of
water,
pretending to sell
moving
enlightenment
with the
had
elegant
actually
power
prepared him
of
to
the
recognize
current
itself
when
it was freely offered.
See a
His
miracle!
intimate familiarity
called
with
out.
spiritual concepts,
A creature
even
like
used
ourselves,
deceptively,
yet he
became the
soars.
very foundation
Surely
for authentic
he is the
understanding
Messiah,
once his
come to
heart
save
opened
us
to
all.
genuine practice. The flowing
Buddha
creature
said,
heard their
by
cries
three things
and felt
the wise
compassion
person
for their
may be known.
misunderstanding. What
I am
acts
no
they
more
encouraged,
Messiah than any
what
of you,
acts they
he
discouraged
called
back, and what
The
acts
river
they
delights in
overlooked.
lifting us all free.
Ikkyu's wisdom
if only we
lay
dare to
not
let
in
go.
avoiding the
Our
charlatan's
true work
deception,
is not clinging to
but
the
in
bottom,
finding truth
but
within
embracing
it.
this voyage.
He
this
encouraged
grand
the man's
adventure of
offering by
trust
paying
and flow.
for it.
But the
Discouraged
creature's
attachment
only
to
cried
outcomes
louder,
by laughing
"Saviour,
at his own
Saviour."
foolishness. Even as they
And
spoke,
overlooked the
they tightened
intended
their grips
fraud
on
by
rocks
recognizing
and
the
roots.
unintended
They watched
teaching.
until he disappeared around
Tonight,
a bend.
as
Then
you
began
reflect on your
weaving
own
legends
spiritual
about
journey,
the miraculous
can you
Saviour
appreciate
who
the
had
unexpected
briefly graced their
teachers
village
that have appeared along
Buddha's
the way?
wisdom
Perhaps
reminds someone
us
you initially
you only
judged or
lose what you
dismissed,
cling to,
offered you insights
This
that more
ancient
obvious
teaching
sources
illuminates
missed. The profound paradox
What would it mean
at the
to
heart of
approach
human
tomorrow with
experience?
Ikkyu's
openness to
We
finding
spend
wisdom
our lives grasping
in the most
for
security
unlikely
and
packages,
control,
believing
believing
that
that
our
our
safety
safety depends on holding
when you
tight to
realize how
familiar
perfect everything
circumstances.
is.
You will
Yet
tilt
in this
your
very
head back
grasping and laugh
we
at
create
the
the
sky.
suffering we seek to
In
avoid.
recognizing that enlightenment
Why do we
cannot
cling
be bought
so
or
desperately
sold,
when the current offers
we
to carry
discover
us
it has been
toward
freely
unknown
available
adventures?
all along. Reflected
Zen Buddhism
perfectly
reveals
in
that
that
from
ever
early
mirror
childhood
we happen to be
we learn
holding.
the known is safe. and
Let
the
us now
unknown
turn to our
dangerous.
next story, one
This
that reveals how
conditioning
broken things
becomes a
often serve
spiritual
more
obstacle
clearly than perfect
when
ones.
it prevents growth
This
beyond
is the
familiar
monastery bell that
limitations.
wouldn't ring.
We
High in the
also
mountains
suffer
of
from
rural
the illusion
Japan,
of control,
Shunryu
believing
Temple
that by
had
grasping
served the surrounding
circumstances,
villages for over
relationships
300 years.
and identities,
Its bronze bell,
we can stop
cast
the
by
natural
master
flow of
craftsmen
change.
generations ago.
This creates
called
enormous
countless
tension
practitioners
to
because it
morning
puts us in
meditation
opposition
and evening
to
reality
reflection.
itself.
The sound of
Life
that
is
bell
constant
carried
movement,
across the
and
valleys.
when we resist this
marking the
truth,
rhythms
we
of
exhaust
monastic
ourselves
life
fighting
and offering
currents far
comfort
more
to
powerful
all
than
who
our
heard its deep,
individual will.
resonant tone. Consider the areas of your
But
life
one
where
winter
you
morning,
find yourself
after a
clinging.
particularly harsh
Perhaps it's a
storm,
relationship
the bell
that has
developed a
outgrown
crack.
its original form.
When struck,
a career
instead
that
of
no
producing
longer
its
brings
traditional
joy,
rich
or an
penetrating
image of yourself
sound,
that now
it made
constrains
only a
your
dull
growth.
thud.
The
Audible
current
within
of
the temple
change
grounds
will flow,
but lacking
whether
the
we
carrying
resist
power
it
to reach
or
the
not.
surrounding communities.
Our choice,
the monks,
is whether to
were
exhaust
dismayed.
ourselves in
How
futile
could they
opposition
properly call
or
people
discover
to
the
practice
grace
without their
available
bell's
in conscious
voice,
surrender?
reaching across the mountain
The Buddha
valleys?
said,
Nothing
Master
is permanent,
Sangai, the
except
temple's
change.
elderly abbot,
Water
examined
doesn't
the crack
fight the mountain
and estimated the cost
It
of
finds
repair.
the natural pathway
It would
down.
require taking the bell to
When
the
we learn
distant
to
city,
move with life's
an
current
expensive
rather than against
undertaking
it,
that would
we
drain
discover
the temple's
effortless
modest
effectiveness stiffness, that rigid resistance. The monks began organizing to raise money for the restoration. As you rest in this moment still, their daily practice, what might you be ready to release? After weeks
Perhaps
of
it's a
careful
worry
saving
about tomorrow's
and small
challenges,
donations from
a
villagers,
resentment from
the monks
yesterday's
had finally
disappointments,
collected enough gold
or a way
to
of
restore
defining
their bell.
yourself that has grown
They
too
presented the
small.
money to Master Sengai with
Can
pride
you feel
and relief.
into the current of this moment's
Master,
aliveness?
we can
and trust
finally
its
repair
direction?
our bell and restore
As the
proper
Buddha
calling
taught,
to
let
practice
go of what has passed.
But the
Let
next
go
day,
of what may come.
a family of refugees
Let
appeared.
go of what is happening now. Relax, right now, and rest. In this trust, we discover that the current we feared would destroy us is actually the very force that can carry us home to our true nature. Tonight, as we gently draw our time together to a close, can you feel how the calm you've discovered isn't something you've gained from outside yourself, but rather something you've simply remembered was already there? Can you sense that the deep tranquility you've experienced tonight doesn't live only in these teachings, but rests quietly within your own awareness, patiently waiting for you to notice it? The Buddha reminded us, what we think, we become. As you reflect on these words, recognize that serenity and understanding don't require perfect conditions or extraordinary experiences. They flow naturally from your own mind and heart, available to you in any moment you choose to turn inward. Each story we've shared tonight has carried the same essential message, woven through different voices and circumstances, that our struggles lighten when we stop fighting so hard, that genuine freedom comes when we learn to hold things lightly, and that lasting calm appears when we see through our mental habits and automatic reactions. Even when your thoughts wander tomorrow, even when life feels overwhelming again, the insights you've gathered tonight have taken root in your understanding, ready to steady you whenever need them most. As you settle into rest, notice that these timeless lessons haven't shown you a complicated journey to somewhere else. They've simply reminded you how to be fully here, completely present in this very moment. In the stillness that surrounds you now, feel how naturally your perspective has softened, how easily your breathing has deepened, and how peacefully your mind can rest when you're not asking it to do anything at all. These ancient wisdoms point to something beautifully simple, that clarity isn't hidden in distant places or complex practices. It lives in the straightforward act of paying attention, of being awake to what's actually happening right now. Tonight, you've touched that simplicity, a truth that reveals itself whenever we pause our rushing and really listen. As you transition from this quiet space back into your everyday world, take with you not just the words you've heard, but the spacious awareness they've awakened. Let this understanding be your companion, offering guidance and comfort through whatever comes your way. Remember that this peace isn't fragile or temporary. It's as natural as breathing, as reliable as your own capacity to be present. You haven't learned something new tonight so much as you've remembered something true. Thank you for sharing this journey with us.